The click-click sound of the camera shutter. Lu Chen's fingers mechanically pressed the shutter, the lens tracking each glamorous figure, capturing those carefully designed smiles and glances. His eyes had been pressed against the viewfinder for too long, feeling sore, but he dared not stop. Is that bastard Li Dong stuck in the toilet? The red carpet is almost over, and he's still not here, he grumbled, but his hands never stopped moving. This year's annual gala on Douyin had pulled out all the stops, inviting half the entertainment industry, with the red carpet segment scheduled for an hour and a half. Their team had taken on the official photography contract. The contract clearly stated in black and white: red carpet, main venue, dinner party. 3 segments, full coverage with preview photos, due that same night. They had agreed to work in pairs on shifts, but that guy Li Dong had vanished since the start of the red carpet. He called his phone 8 times with no answer. Lu Chen was carrying 2 cameras by himself, one hanging around his neck, another in his hand. He changed lenses from wide angle to telephoto and back again, his arms nearly giving out from exhaustion. Look, it's Liu Xixi, someone shouted from behind. Lu Chen's heart skipped a beat. Forgetting to curse Li Dong, he instinctively turned his lens toward the start of the red carpet. A black limousine slowly came to a stop at the end of the red carpet. The door opened, and a silver high heel touched the ground first. Then the entire leg, half hidden by the hem of a black gown, flowed in graceful lines like a goddess from a classical oil painting. As Liu Xixi stepped out of the car, Lu Chen's index finger was already pressing the shutter. Tonight she wore a spring collection from a high-end couture brand. A black strapless gown with an extremely narrow waistline, the skirt flowing like water, trailing a half-meter arc on the ground. Her hair was tied up, revealing her entire neck and collarbone. From her earlobes hung 2 pigeon egg-sized sapphires, refracting cold light under the flashes. There was little expression on her face. The corners of her mouth lifted slightly, maintaining a perfectly measured curve. Not a smile, not a lack of it, but a calmness that said, "I know you're filming, but I don't care." Lu Chen had seen many celebrities walk the red carpet. Some were nervous, their steps stiff, eyes darting around, unsure which camera to look at. Some tried too hard, their smiles almost cramping their faces, pouring all their energy into striking poses. Others pretended to be relaxed, but the ease was an act. Underneath, they were still tense. Liu Xixi was different. She walked the red carpet as if strolling in her own garden. Neither fast nor slow, each step was on beat. She occasionally paused for the media, her gaze sweeping over the forest of lenses, neither seeking them out nor deliberately avoiding them. That sense of ease emanated from her bones. It wasn't acted. Lu Chen's fingers pressed the shutter nonstop. Click, click, click. He dared not stop, nor did he wanna. Through the lens, Liu Xixi seemed enveloped in a certain halo. Not light cast by the lighting crew, but something she carried herself. How to put it? A feeling of, I am the light. After she walked past, the red carpet segment essentially came to an end. The following celebrities were noticeably a tier lower in status, and the media journalists on site had lost their earlier excitement. The shutter sounds were sparse, like raindrops dripping from the eaves, intermittent and sporadic. Lu Chen took the opportunity to scroll through the photos on his camera. When he saw the ones of Liu Xixi, the corner of his mouth lifted involuntarily. Composition, lighting, expression, all excellent. That face was truly camera-friendly. It looked great from any angle. After the red carpet, the dinner banquet was held in the ballroom on the top floor of the hotel. Lu Chen carried his equipment up the elevator to the top floor. Stepping out, he was momentarily dazzled by the view. The entire floor was floor-to-ceiling glass, with Sonya's nightscape spreading out before him like a giant IMAX screen. The sea was black, the sky deep blue. The city lights were scattered like gold dust along the coastline. In the distance, Sonya's landmark building could be seen, its body covered in LED tubes, changing colors, appearing surreal in the night. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers illuminated every corner, but the light was softened much gentler than the direct light on the red carpet, with a deliberately crafted, relaxed feel. Warm-toned side lighting, low-angle spotlights, even the shadows were soft. Most of the celebrities had changed into their second outfits. Some had changed from floor-length gowns to knee-length cocktail dresses, some had let their hair down from updos to loose waves, some had removed the expensive jewelry from the red carpet and put on more everyday accessories. The overall atmosphere was much more relaxed than during the red carpet, at least on the surface. Some were mingling by the champagne tower, holding glasses and laughing heartily as if they had just heard the funniest joke in the world. Some were chatting on sofas in the corners, sinking into the soft leather, crossing their legs, looking languid. Others had simply taken off their high heels and walked barefoot on the carpet, holding champagne glasses as they moved through the crowd. No journalists, no live cameras, no overwhelming flashes. This was a social arena for insiders. Everyone knew it, but everyone pretended not to. Lu Chen stood quietly beside a marble pillar, holding his camera. He was one of the official photographers tasked with capturing natural moments. But honestly, in this setting, everyone was acting natural. The actress laughing heartily in the corner had a calculated laugh, the angle, amplitude, and duration all precise to the second. The actor walking barefoot on the carpet had a casualness that was deliberately designed. Every step landed in exactly the right position. Those were the rules of this circle. Lu Chen's lens swept across the crowd and stopped at a corner. Liu Xixi was sitting alone on a sofa by the window. She had changed out of the black gown from the red carpet and was now wearing a dark green slip dress in silk, its fabric glowing with a soft luster under the warm light. Her hair was loose, falling over her shoulders with slightly curled ends. In her hand, she held a glass of champagne, the liquid barely touched. Only the condensation on the glass showed it had been sitting for a long time. She sat alone. No one went over to talk to her. Or rather, no one dared. The aura of a double Best Actress winner was too strong. Moreover, she had been known for being cold since entering the industry. Not a deliberately aloof persona, but an innate sense of distance. She didn't need to speak or do anything. Just sitting there, she naturally created an invisible wall between herself and everyone around. Those mingling by the champagne tower would occasionally glance her way, but no one actually walked over. Lu Chen hesitated for 2 seconds. Then he raised his camera, adjusted the focus, and pressed the shutter. Click. The shutter sound was nothing much in the noisy ballroom, but the corner where Liu Xixi sat was so quiet that the slight mechanical noise became unusually distinct. She looked up, her gaze directly at the lens. Those eyes were very bright, not as if soaked in alcohol, but as if she had just stepped out of some sober world and hadn't yet adjusted to the murkiness here. She wasn't angry nor curious. She just looked calmly at the lens, waiting for the person behind it to react. Lu Chen lowered his camera and did not avert his eyes. He gave her a slight nod, the corner of his mouth twitching as a polite acknowledgement. "If the photo doesn't look good, I'll ask you to delete it," Liu Xixi said. She said. Her voice was not loud, but very clear, like ice dropping into a glass. Lu Chen replied, "I rarely miss when photographing people." When he said it, he himself felt a little arrogant. But it was the truth. The portraits he had taken had a 100 client satisfaction rate. Not because his technique was superior, but because he understood one principle. A person's best look is not achieved through posing, but naturally emerges when they forget the camera. Liu Xixi glanced at him. That look was brief, less than a second, but Lu Chen felt as if he had been scanned by. It wasn't scrutiny, nor sizing him up. It was more like confirmation, confirming who he was, where he came from, whether he was worth another word. Then she withdrew her gaze, turned her head, and continued looking at the night scene outside the window. Lu Chen did not say another word. He did not approach to ingratiate himself, did not take out his phone to scan WeChat, did not introduce himself with, "I'm a Douyin official photographer, I've shot for so-and-so with great results," or anything like that. He quietly took a step back, retreating into the shadow by the pillar. Then he looked down at the photo on his camera. Liu Xixi's profile faced the floor-to-ceiling window. The dark green slip dress took on a color between green and black under the warm light, like the deep sea. The light cast a shadow on her collarbone, its lines as graceful as a violin's body. There was something indescribable in her gaze. It wasn't loneliness. Loneliness was too shallow to describe that feeling. It was weariness. No, not entirely weariness. It was that feeling, after seeing too many glamorous things, realizing they were all plastic flowers. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he knew this photo would be stunning. At 7:55 p.m. the awards ceremony was about to begin. The auditorium adjacent to the banquet hall was twice as large, capable of holding over 1,000 people. The stage backdrop was a giant LED screen looping the main visual animation of the Douyin annual gala. Below the stage, the round table area was set with dark tablecloths, flowers, nameplates, and programs. But the her in the lens was different from the her now. In the lens, she was sweet and polished like a perfectly wrapped candy. Now, she was a bit disheveled. Lu Chen had already positioned himself in the media photography zone directly in front of the stage. It was a rectangular area enclosed by metal barriers with a sticker on the floor reading Media Photography Zone. The best shooting spots had already been taken by photographers from major media outlets. Lu Chen found an empty spot slightly to the left, but with a decent angle, crouched down, set up his telephoto lens, adjusted the parameters, and took a few test shots. The LED screen on the stage was counting down. 10:987. Welcome to the Douyin Annual Gala. The voices of the male and female hosts burst from the speakers, carrying that over-packaged gala-specific excitement. The male host's voice was as deep as a broadcasting textbook, while the female host's voice was as sweet as honey water steeped 3 times. Tonight we witnessed together the best male singer, best female singer, best actor, best variety. Their moments of glory. Polite applause rose from the audience. Lu Chen yawned. He had heard these opening remarks at least 50 times, and every time they were nearly identical. Just swap out a few keywords, recite the sponsor names, string together some celebrity names, and add a few cliches like Starry Splendor or Galaxy of Stars, and you have a complete opening script. He started mentally planning what to do after the ceremony. There was a food street nearby. He had been there once on his last trip to Sanya, and the grilled oysters at a particular barbecue place were especially good. Or maybe just take a walk on the beach. Even though it was already past 8, Sonya's seaside was always lively. His thoughts wavered between barbecue and the beach, but his eyes habitually stayed glued to the viewfinder, his lens casually aimed at the stage, his finger resting on the shutter ready to capture the next person to appear. Suddenly, a light. Not a spotlight on stage, not a ceiling light in the audience, not any source he could identify. The lights surged from all directions simultaneously, as if someone had shattered the sun and stuffed all the fragments into every window, every crack, every vent of the hall. It did not come from a single direction. It came from above, from below, from the left, from the right, from front, and back, from every conceivable direction, all at once. It was as if the entire hall had been lit from within by a giant bulb, or as if the room itself had suddenly become part of some greater source of light. In that instant, Lu Chen saw nothing. The viewfinder turned pure white. Not the white of overexposure, but a white without boundaries, without end, swallowing everything. He instinctively pulled the camera away from his eyes, but what he saw was still white. His hand in front of his eyes was white, the back of his hand was white, even the light seeping through his fingers was white. White light, white world, white nothingness. Oh, my eyes. What's happening? I can't see. Where are the staff? Anyone? Is anyone there? Agent, agent. Someone help me find my agent. Don't push. Don't push me. Ah, who stepped on my dress? What is this? What's happening? Is it a terrorist attack? Everyone stay calm. Find the exit. Find. Shouts came from all directions, mingled with angry yells, screams, the sound of tables overturning, glasses shattering, and the piercing noise of high heels stepping on broken glass. Someone collided with a table, sending a champagne tower crashing down. Glasses broke one after another on the floor, the sound dense like machine gun fire. Someone blindly ran a few steps in the dim light, then tripped over an overturned chair, producing a dull thud and a sharp scream. Someone loudly called a celebrity's name, perhaps an agent or assistant looking for their artist, but the only response was more screaming and crying. The intense light lasted for quite a while before beginning to fade. Not suddenly, but gradually, like someone slowly turning down a giant dimmer switch. The white light changed from pure white to bright white, then to ivory white, then to grayish white, and finally, to a hazy fog-like light. Lu Chen tried to open his eyes. A sharp needle-like pain stabbed into his eyeballs, tears uncontrollably streaming down his cheeks. He blinked hard, wiped tears with the back of his hand, opened his eyes again, only to be forced to shut them as more tears came. Repeating this several times, he finally managed to open his eyes a crack. Then he saw the scene before him. The award ceremony hall no longer looked like an award ceremony hall. The LED screen on the stage was still on, but the image had turned into snowflake-like gibberish, flashing a harsh blue-white light and emitting a low hum. Several lighting fixtures on the stage had fallen off their rigs, crashed onto the stage, exposing wires that emitted tiny sparks. The round table area was even worse. Dozens of dark-clothed tables were tilted or overturned, tablecloths, torn, flowers, nameplates, programs, and glow sticks scattered everywhere. Several champagne towers had shattered, their liquid mixing with broken glass on the carpet, spreading a large puddle that shimmered amber in the dim light. High heels lay scattered in every corner, some in pairs, some alone. One hung on the leg of an overturned table, heel pointing up like a lost little animal. And the usually elegant and noble celebrities. Lu Chen saw a famous actress known for her ethereal aura kneeling on the floor, hands on the carpet, head bowed, long hair covering her entire face. Her gown's hem was torn by broken glass, revealing the edge of her slip. She was breathing heavily, shoulders heaving violently, a whimper like a small animal escaping her throat. Not far away, a male actor famous for his tough guy image sat on the floor, his back against an overturned chair, one hand covering his eyes, the other blindly groping among broken glass, perhaps searching for his phone or glasses. His face was covered with tears, not from crying, but a physiological reaction to the intense light. Yet paired with his bewildered expression, it looked even more pitiful than crying. Someone lay curled up on the ground, arms overhead, as if sheltering from an air raid. Others staggered to their feet, stumbling like toddlers, just learning to walk. Someone knelt on the floor, patting the ground, frantically muttering, "My earring. My earring." In a high, tearful voice. Everything that had been exquisite was shattered. The carefully styled hair, the expensive gowns, the graceful manners, the meticulously managed expressions, all broken. Like a mirror struck by a hammer, fragments scattered everywhere, each piece reflecting the same truth: in the face of real disaster, celebrities are no different from ordinary people. Lu Chen stood in the photography zone, still gripping his camera. His eyes still ached, his vision was still blurry, but his professional instinct reacted faster than his mind. He raised the camera, finger on the shutter, then stopped. He didn't know if he should take the shot. If he took these photos and published them, it would be explosive news spreading across the internet. But it was also the most shameful, fragile moment these people never wanted anyone to see. He hesitated for about 2 seconds. Then he lowered the camera. Not because he had great professional ethics, but because he encountered a tricky problem. The camera was fried. As Lu Chen was still pondering what the white light could be, the lights in the banquet hall suddenly extinguished all at once, not a gradual dimming, as if someone had slowly turned down a dimmer switch. It was instantaneous, all light vanishing simultaneously, as if someone had pulled the power plug on the end. The darkness descended so abruptly that the afterimage of the white light still lingered on his retinas, now swallowed by the blackness, rendering his eyes utterly useless. What's going on? Where are the staff? Turn on the lights. Who stepped on my foot? Don't push. Don't push forward. The hall erupted into chaos once more. If the panic when the white light appeared was a visible terror, then this chaos was an invisible despair. People could see nothing. Not the direction, not the exit, not who stood beside them, not whether they trod on broken glass or another's fingers. Some blindly moved in the dark, overturning tables, sending dishes clattering to the floor. Others called out for their agents, voices rising from every corner, overlapping like a chorus without a conductor. Some wept, not stifled sobs, but unrestrained cries laced with fear. Some prayed, murmuring under their breath. Lu Chen stood still, unmoving. It was a habit cultivated over many years. In an unfamiliar environment, facing a sudden crisis, his first reaction was not to run or shout, but to stop. Stop, steady himself, wait for his eyes to adjust, and let his mind assess. But today this habit failed him. The darkness here was not a mere lack of light, but an absence of any light at all, as if he had been sealed inside a colossal black box. He pulled out his phone and pressed the power button. The screen remained dark. He held it down, pressed repeatedly, still a dead silent black. My phone's dead too. Mine as well. Similar exclamations rose from all around. Lu Chen then touched the camera on his chest. Its electronic viewfinder was pitch black. A word suddenly came to mind: EMP. Electromagnetic pulse. Combined with the earlier white light, a more specific, yet more outlandish conjecture surfaced: a solar storm. He had once watched a science program about this. A chill ran down Lu Chen's spine. If that were true, it would destroy far more than just phones and cameras. The power grid, communications, navigation. Everything reliant on electronics could be rendered useless. Most terrifying of all, a solar storm could also trigger a geomagnetic storm, marking the beginning of catastrophe, earthquakes, tsunamis. And here they were on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean. No power, no communication, no means to contact the outside world. These thoughts made his skin crawl. Is anyone nearby? A voice came from somewhere in the darkness, very close, about 2 or 3 meters away. The voice was soft, yet possessed a strange steadiness. No screaming, no wailing, merely stating a fact. Its timbre was clear and refreshing, like spring water flowing over green stone, carrying an innate restraint and politeness, even in such an environment. Could you help me up? Thank you. Lu Chen noticed her breath was a bit short when she said thank you, as if she were enduring some pain. Where are you? Here, I'm here. The voice came again, now tinged with a hint of urgency. My foot. I think I've sprained it. I can't stand up. Lu Chen shuffled 2 steps toward the sound, his foot crunching on broken glass. He crouched down, extending a hand to feel around on the floor. His fingertips touched a silky fabric traced along the hem of a dress, and then found a person's arm. Her voice was right next to his ear. Lu Chen's hand slid down her arm and grasped her hand. Her hand was cold, her fingertips trembling slightly, but the strength with which she gripped was surprisingly firm. Not the frantic clutching of a drowning person, but the confirmation of someone is here from a clear-minded individual in the dark. Her skin was delicate, her fingers long and slender, but with distinct knuckles, not bonelessly soft. They'll help you up, he said. Okay, thank you. Her voice held a note of relief. Lu Chen tightened his grip on her hand, using his other hand to support her elbow, slowly lifting her upward. She had little strength to use. Lu Chen could feel her arm was very thin. Through the fabric of her gown, he could almost trace the outline of her bones. She was much lighter than he had anticipated, as if she hadn't eaten properly in a long time. As she stood, her body swayed. The injured foot barely touched the ground before she jerked it back with a sharp intake of breath. She instinctively grabbed Lu Chen's forearm with her other hand. She stood very close. Lu Chen caught her scent. Not perfume, but more like a faint, lingering fragrance from shampoo, crisp and not cloying, reminiscent of white camellias after rain. Her breath brushed against his collarbone, carrying a trace of warmth, starkly clear in the darkness. Steady, but my foot really hurts. She spoke through gritted teeth, a hint of grievance in her voice, but more of a restraint that didn't want to be a bother. Lu Chen could feel her weight, still leaning towards him, one shoulder lightly pressing against his arm, unwilling to put any weight on her injured foot. There's a chair here. Let me help you sit down. He used his foot to probe the area, found a toppled chair bent to right it, and ensured its legs were stable. Come on, sit down slowly. He supported her shoulder with one hand and guided her waist with the other, leading her to sit. Her waist was indeed very slender, but what Lu Chen noticed at that moment wasn't its slenderness, but her stiffness. Every muscle in her body was taut, clearly enduring pain, yet she remained silent. This stoicism made him instinctively soften his touch, as if afraid of breaking something. She sat down with great care, one hand still clutching Lu Chen's arm. Her fingernails lightly dug into his skin, not painful but distinct, like a frightened cat clinging to its only anchor. "Thank you." This thank you was much softer than before, as if her strength had finally run out. In the darkness, Dudu lowered her eyes, grateful that no one could see her expression. Not because she was blushing, though her ears were indeed burning, but because she realized that when she had been gripping that stranger's arm, the first thought that came to mind wasn't "who is he?" but "thank goodness someone is here." This thought made her feel a bit embarrassed. She was Chun Dudu, who had been told all her life that she was too independent and always carries everything herself. She was used to taking care of others, not being taken care of. But just now in the pitch-black darkness, a hand had reached out and steadily supported her, and she found that being helped didn't seem so bad. But she quickly suppressed that softness. The pain in her ankle reminded her that this was not the time for such thoughts. She took a deep breath and asked, "Do you know what happened? My phone won't turn on either. It doesn't seem like a simple power outage." She spoke calmly, even with a tone of wanting to investigate. "I'm not entirely sure either." Lu Chen did not voice his conjectures. He was not one to be overly talkative with strangers, even if she might be a famous actress. "Is your foot injury severe? Can you feel if there's any problem with the bone?" Lu Chen asked out of politeness. "It should just be a sprain, not the kind of pain from a fracture." Duda tried to gently move her ankle, hissed, and quickly stopped. She had sprained herself while filming action scenes before and knew what a fracture felt like. "That's good. Don't move yet, wait for the staff to handle it." A brief silence fell. The darkness wrapped around the two of them like a thick quilt. The surroundings remained chaotic. Voices shouting, people crying, staff maintaining order in the distance. But in this small corner, those sounds seemed muffled and distant, as if separated by a layer. "Are you here for the event too?" Duda spoke first. She wasn't used to silence, especially with a stranger who had just helped her. Saying nothing seemed impolite. An official photographer for Douyin." "A photographer?" Dudu repeated the word instinctively, trying to picture what a photographer should look like. "So you've been taking photos the whole time?" "Yes, I've been shooting since the red carpet." "Then you must be very tired." Lu Chen was taken aback. The context of her words felt strange. In such a chaotic situation, most people's first reactions were, "I'm so scared, I'm in pain, my phone is broken," or "when can I leave?" But this woman said, "Then you must be very tired." As if compared to her own sprained ankle and the pandemonium around them, she cared more about how long a stranger had stood on the red carpet. "It's fine. I'm used to it," Lu Chen said. Duda didn't speak again, but Lu Chen sensed her face was turned toward him in the darkness. He could feel her gaze. Though he couldn't see anything, the sensation of being watched was distinct, like basking in winter sunlight, a warmth that seeped in slowly. After a while, a faint orange light appeared in the distance. It grew closer and brighter. Several staff members entered carrying lit candelabras. The candlelight flickered in the darkness, stretching and shortening everyone's shadows like specters dancing on the walls. But at least there was light. By the dim candlelight, Lu Chen finally saw the woman before him clearly. She wore a one-shoulder red gown, its hem stained with dust, and a small spot of champagne. Her hair, originally tied up, had come half undone with stray strands hanging by her ears, making her look a bit disheveled. But that dishevelment made her seem more real. Her face was small, with a pointed chin and large bright eyes that gleamed even in the candlelight. Her nose was delicate and straight, her lips slightly pursed, pale from the pain in her foot. At that moment, those big eyes were fixed on him unblinkingly, the candlelight reflected in them like two ignited stars. Lu Chen recognized her. At that moment, those big eyes were fixed on him unblinkingly, the candlelight reflected in them like two ignited stars. Lu Chen recognized her. But the her in the lens was different from the her now. In the lens, she was sweet and polished like a perfectly wrapped candy. Now, she was a bit disheveled, pale, and earnest, because she was also looking at Lu Chen. In the candlelight, she finally saw the man who had helped her clearly. He wore a black photographer's vest over a dark gray t-shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing sturdy forearms. He was very tall. She was sitting while he stood, so she had to look up to see his face. He wasn't the type of delicately handsome. His features were sharp, with a strong jawline, thick, dark brows, and deep eyes. How to describe it? It was a very clean look. Not greasy, not flashy like a glass of plain water. Tasteless, but quenching. At that moment, those eyes looked down at her, carrying a hint of concern and a calmness she couldn't quite read. Duda's heart skipped a beat. At that moment, those eyes looked down at her, carrying a hint of concern and a calmness she couldn't quite read. This discovery made her ears burn. She quickly withdrew her hand, clenching her fingers on her knee as if to hide something. "Are you Chen Dudu?" Lu Chen asked. She nodded, her voice softer than before. Lu Chen wanted to say something polite like, "I've watched your drama," or "You acted well," but the words felt too deliberate in this setting. He simply nodded and said, "Take good care of your foot when you get back. Don't leave any lingering issues." His tone was as flat as commenting on the weather. Dudu lowered her eyes, her lashes casting a fan-shaped shadow in the candlelight. Her mind raced. He hadn't asked for an autograph, hadn't tried to get close, hadn't even said an extra word. That struck her as quite surprising. Not because she thought she was something special, but because she had grown used to it. In any setting, once recognized people were either overly enthusiastic or nervously tongue-tied. Someone as calm as him was rare. "What's your name?" she asked. "Lu Chen." "Lu Chen." She silently repeated the name to herself, as if engraving it somewhere. "Thank you, Lu Chen. You're welcome." Before the words faded, a woman in professional attire rushed over urgently, almost lunging, when she saw Dudu sitting in the chair. "Dudu. Oh my God, are you okay? I've been looking everywhere for you. Did you sprain your ankle?" Her agent Sister Wang crouched down to examine her ankle, her voice frantic and panicked. Seeing Sister Wang's sweat-covered forehead, Dudu felt a pang of guilt. She must have been terrified. "Sister Wang, I'm fine. It's just a sprain, nothing serious. This gentleman helped me." As Dudu spoke, her eyes darted toward Lu Chen, then quickly away. Only then did Sister Wang notice Lu Chen. She gave him a once-over, her gaze pausing on his photographer's vest, and nodded politely, but coolly, "Thank you. I appreciate your help." "You're welcome." Sister Wang draped Dudu's arm over her shoulder and carefully helped her up from the chair. Standing on one foot, Dudu dared not let the other touch the ground. Her body swayed, and she instinctively glanced toward Lu Chen again. Lu Chen stood there without stepping forward. He had done what he could, the rest was the agent's concern. Dudu took a few steps with support, then suddenly turned back. The candlelight flickered across her face. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but instead she just pressed her lips together and gave Lu Chen a faint smile. That smile was light and subtle, but in the dancing candlelight, it was like a flower quietly blooming in the night. Then she turned back and limped away into the crowd. Sister Wang muttered softly as she supported her, "Why didn't you call me? I was frantic. My phone won't turn on and—" Dudu paused. "It was too dark. I didn't know where you were." What she didn't say was that in the pitch black, when she fell, her first thought wasn't call Sister Wang, but "Is anyone there?" Then a hand reached out. The thought made her a little embarrassed, but she quickly suppressed it. Her ankle still throbbed, but the pain was bearable. Her mind began to wander. The dead phone, the blackout, that flash of white light. Together, they didn't seem like a simple malfunction. She had a vague feeling that something bigger was happening. Sister Wang kept chattering, "We need to find a doctor when we get back. You have a gig tomorrow, and your foot." "Sister Wang," Dudu interrupted, her voice calm. "Let's check on everyone first. I'm not the only one injured." Sister Wang paused, glanced at her, and said nothing more. More candlelight filled the hall as staff began grouping to count people and comfort the injured. Lu Chen remained where he was, bending down to pick up his fallen camera and brushing off the dust. Though it was now just an expensive brick, he had a hunch. That white flash, this chaos, these fried electronics were only the beginning. The real thing was yet to come. He looked up through the French window at the sea outside. The night was deep as ink, the starlight faint as dust. There was nothing on the sea. But Lu Chen felt that something in the darkness was slowly approaching the ship. His intuition had always been sharp. He glanced down at his right hand again, the corner of his mouth twitching involuntarily. Then he hung the camera around his neck and turned into the crowd, flickering with candlelight. Weaving through the crowd, Lu Chen arrived at the ship's railing, only to find that there was not a trace of wind around him. There were no waves on the sea surface, as if the ocean had been frozen in place. "Do you have any rope here?" Lu Chen asked, stopping a passing crew member. The crew member wore a black uniform with a walkie-talkie clipped to his chest, though now the device was nothing more than a useless piece of metal. He held a candlestick in his hand, its orange flame casting flickering shadows on his face, his eyes filled with exhaustion and irritation. "I do, but what do you need rope for?" The crew member's voice was laced with suspicion as he sized up Lu Chen, his gaze pausing briefly on the photographer's vest. "Which department are you from? Don't wander off now. Everyone gather in the banquet hall and wait for rescue." "Listen to me," Lu Chen said, lowering his voice but speaking rapidly like a string of firecrackers. "I'm an official photographer for Douyin. I used to do freelance work for a science popularization channel. That show once covered tsunamis. The wind suddenly stops, the sea becomes as flat as a mirror, the air carries a fishy smell from the ocean floor, and your ears feel stuffy. When these three signs appear simultaneously, a tsunami will hit within minutes." As he finished speaking, he pointed toward the sea beyond the railing. The crew member froze for a moment, then followed his gaze. The candlelight was too dim to reach the distant sea, but the small patch of water near the hull was visible. No waves, no ripples, lying there as still as a sheet of black silk, motionless. The fishy smell in the air was growing stronger, not the normal scent of the sea, but a more intense odor tinged with decay, as if something had been churned up from the depths. The crew member's face changed color. "You? Are you sure?" "I can't guarantee it, but I'm sure I don't want to die without knowing why." Lu Chen grabbed his arm. Where's the rope? Take me to get it. Then go find your captain and have him look at. If I'm wrong, he'll apologize and make it up to you. If I'm right, you'll be saving everyone on this ship. The crew member gritted his teeth and made a decision. Follow me. He turned and strode quickly toward the inner side of the railing with Lu Chen close behind. The two maneuvered around a pile of overturned tables and chairs, passed through a fire door, and entered a narrow corridor. The crew member stopped in front of an iron door, pulled a key ring from his waist, found the right key by candlelight, inserted it into the lock, and turned it twice. The door swung open. Inside was a small storage room of a few square meters with metal shelves lining 3 walls, neatly stacked with ropes, safety belts, lifebuoys, first aid kits, and waterproof flashlights, though the flashlights were now useless too. The crew member pulled down a coil of thumb-thick nylon rope from a shelf and tossed it to Lu Chen. Enough. Lu Chen weighed it in his hands. About 20 or 30 meters long, more than sufficient. Enough, thanks buddy. He turned to leave, then stopped after a couple of steps and looked back. What's your name? Xiaozhang, take my advice. Grab a life jacket, go to the top deck, find a place to secure yourself, tie the rope around your waist, and fasten the other into a sturdy metal structure. Don't stay in the cabins, the waves will flood in. Xiaozhang nodded solemnly. Lu Chen wasted no more time, hoisted the rope coil onto his shoulder, and rushed back to the banquet hall. In the banquet hall there were now a few more candles than before. Hundreds of people were crammed into the space, some sitting, some standing, some leaning against the walls. A few were making low-voiced phone calls. Though they couldn't get through, they stubbornly pressed the dial button again and again. Others were wiping wine stains off their gowns with wet wipes, as if they'd be walking down another red carpet in them tomorrow. Some were comforting crying companions beside them, their voices gentle, but their eyes hollow. Everything was in a state of waiting. Waiting for the power to return, waiting for rescue to arrive, waiting for it all to end. They didn't know that what awaited them might not be rescue but death. Lu Chen stood in the center of the banquet hall, slung the rope over his shoulder, and took a deep breath. He knew that what he was about to say would make many people think he was crazy, but he had to say it anyway. Everyone listened. His voice exploded through the empty hall, drowning out all the whispers. A tsunami is coming. It could hit within minutes. The hall fell silent for a fraction of a second. Then came a commotion. What? A tsunami? Did he say tsunami? Who is this guy? How did he get in here yelling? Is he scared out of his mind? Most people didn't move. They sat where they were, staring at Lu Chen as if he were a madman. Some wore mocking smiles, some frowned, and a few even edged away as if getting close to a crazy person might rub off on them. Lu Chen had anticipated this reaction. He didn't waste time explaining, but turned and walked toward a corner of the hall. There Chen Dudu was sitting in a chair supported by her agent Sister Wang. She had sprained her ankle and changed into flat shoes, probably found by Sister Wang from somewhere. Her face still bore the pallor from earlier, but her large eyes brightened when she saw Lu Chen approaching. Did you hear that? Lu Chen asked. I did, Duda said, her voice soft but clear. You said a tsunami. Do you believe me? Duda didn't answer immediately. She tilted her head to look at the sea beyond the floor-to-ceiling window. The candlelight was too dim to see far, but the small patch of water near the hull was visible. No waves, no ripples, lying there like a sheet of black silk, motionless. I also noticed the wind suddenly stopped outside the window. Dudu said, her voice calm, with the logical clarity typical of a top student. And the smell of the sea has changed. I spent 3 months by the coast while filming before. That rotting fishy smell isn't normal seawater. Put it all together. She looked up at Lu Chen. I've read about those tsunami precursors in textbooks too. Lu Chen's heart jolted. She was the first person who hadn't doubted him. You believe me? I don't believe you, Dudu said, the corner of her mouth twitching slightly, as if suppressing a smile. I believe in science. Lu Chen nodded. He took the rope off his shoulder, quickly untied it, pulled out a section about 3 or 4 meters long, and handed it to Dudu. Tie this around your waist with a tight knot, then follow me. We're going to the top deck. It's the highest point. Once there, find a thick metal pillar or ventilation pipe and secure the rope to it. Dudu tied the rope slowly but steadily, her fingers moving deftly, wrapping it around, threading it through, pulling it tight. A solid knot. She tugged at it but didn't budge. Can you walk on that foot? Lu Chen asked. I can, Dudu said, pushing herself up from the chair's armrest. Slowly, but it'll be fine. Sister Wang grew anxious. Dudu, don't be ridiculous. Your foot is injured like this. Why are you running? What if it's nothing? Sister Wang, look outside. Dudu didn't argue with her, simply pointing gently toward the floor-to-ceiling window. Sister Wang looked. The candlelight was dim, but the pitch-black sea outside was visible, too calm. Unnaturally calm. She had been on beach vacations many times, but had never seen the sea like this. It was like a massive black lid tightly sealing the entire world. And that fishy smell. Sister Wang's lips trembled. Sister Wang, come with us, Dudu said, turning her head, her tone not a request but a statement. You don't want to die, do you? Sister Wang sighed, bent down, picked up another piece of rope from the floor, and silently tied it around her own waist. Lu Chen looked at Dudu, then at Sister Wang. 3 people. The ropes could be linked together so they could look out for one another. Let's go, he said. He turned and headed toward the hall's entrance. Dudu limped behind him, with Sister Wang supporting her arm, muttering under her breath, but not stopping. Just as they were about to step out the door, a voice came from behind. Wait. Lu Chen turned around. She had somehow followed them barefoot on the carpet, her hair, loose candlelight falling on her face. Her expression was calm. Too calm for someone who had just been through chaos. Around her waist a piece of rope was already tied. Lu Chen froze for a moment. When did you? He looked down at the rope on his shoulder. He hadn't given her any. Liu Xixi seemed to read his confusion and said flatly, when you were shouting earlier, I grabbed a piece from the table next to me. The coil you dropped on the floor had come loose, no one noticed. Lu Chen glanced at the knot on her waist. A tight knot perfectly tied. You believe me too? I don't believe you, Liu Xixi said, her voice soft but clear. She turned her head to glance at the Dead Sea beyond the window. My hometown is in Wuhan, not near the coast. But I acted in a movie about a shipwreck. Before filming, I consulted a marine expert, and he told me something: before a tsunami hits, the sea dies first. The wind stops, the waves cease, and the water recedes. That's the ocean gathering strength. She paused, her usually cold eyes now fixed directly on Lu Chen. I saw it from the window just now. The wind stopped, the sea was like a mirror, and there was a fishy smell in the air. What you described matches what I saw. So I don't need to believe you. I believe what I saw with my own eyes. Lu Chen looked at her. Her tone was flat, even carrying a hint of indifference to life and death, but her body leaned slightly toward him, as if silently signaling, I'll go with you. Can you walk? Lu Chen asked. What about your shoes? High heels are too slow, so I ditched them, Liu Xixi said, as if commenting on the nice weather. I can walk barefoot. Lu Chen asked no more questions and nodded. Follow me. They pushed open the fire door leading to the deck. The wind outside had already stopped. The sea was like a black mirror reflecting the faint starlight. It was eerily silent. Behind them, a woman in a dark green fitted dress, Wang Wenyu, was hurrying in another direction. She had heard Lu Chen shout and seen the sea outside the window. Instead of immediately following them, she went to find her friend first. The rope was already tied around her waist, a tight knot pulled firm. Top deck, she murmured, repeating Lu Chen's words, and quickened her pace. Just as the four of them reached the door, a voice suddenly cut in. Wait! Lu Chen saw a middle-aged man in a deep blue suit walking in from outside. The badge on his chest read, Douyin Content Center General Manager. You say a tsunami is coming. What's your basis? The manager's tone was more like an audit than a question. Lu Chen had no time to argue with him, but he still patiently said, the wind has stopped, the sea is flat, and there's a fishy smell from the seabed in the air. These are precursors to a tsunami. If you don't believe me, take a look out the window. The manager walked to the window and glanced outside. His face changed color. Is this really? His voice tightened. Yes, Lu Chen said. I'm taking people to the top deck now. If you can organize others to go up too, don't stay in the cabins, it can save many lives. Have the staff guide people in groups using different staircases. The general manager took a deep breath and nodded. His execution was stronger than Lu Chen expected. He turned, found the Douyin staff still in uniform, and quickly whispered instructions. Lu Chen didn't look at him anymore. He said to the three women behind him, let's go. They crossed the banquet hall and headed for the nearest staircase. That staircase led to the upper deck. It was usually for passengers to go up and down, not wide, but 3 people could walk side by side without issue. Now 2 staff members were already standing at the staircase, probably having received the vice president's orders, and began guiding people upward. But most people were still hesitating. Go up. Why go up? Weren't we told to wait here for rescue? There's nothing up there. What's the point? Some questioned, some watched, some stood up and sat back down. Lu Chen paid them no mind. He led Liu Xixi and Dudu and Sister Wang up the stairs. The stairs were made of iron, each step covered with non-slip mats. Candlelight didn't reach here, only a faint glow from the banquet hall provided some light. Lu Chen walked in front, one hand on the railing, the other reaching back to prevent those behind him from missing a step. Watch your step, he said. With each step, Dudu took her sprained foot, sent a sharp pang through her. She bit her lip, not letting a sound. Sister Wang held her arm, practically bearing Dudu's weight. Liu Qianqian walked at the rear. Barefoot on the non-slip mat, each step was steady without a single extra sound. Her expression was still one of cool composure, but her hand tightly gripped the rope at her waist, her knuckles turning slightly white. After climbing 2 decks, they reached the lifeboat deck. Lu Chen didn't stop there. Keep going up to the top deck, he said. The lifeboat deck is too close to the sea. When the waves hit, this place will be flooded directly. Another deck. Finally, they reached the top deck. It was much more open here. No walls, no windows, only railings and the sky. The wind had stopped. The air was still as if it had been sucked away. Overhead, dark clouds had gathered, obscuring the already faint starlight. The sky and the sea were both black, merging together in the far distance with no discernible boundary. Lu Chen quickly scanned the area. In the center of the top deck stood a massive chimney, surrounded by thick steel structural supports. Behind the chimney was a row of ventilation ducts, each over half a meter thick, bolted to the deck. To the left of the chimney was the rear wall of the bridge, made of welded steel plates with several round portholes, but no door. Head to the chimney, Lu Chen pointed. The four quickly moved over. Lu Chen took the rope from his shoulder and began rapidly wrapping it around the chimney's steel supports. He wound it 3 times, tied 2 tight knots, pulled it taut, and confirmed the anchor point was secure. "You 3 connect your waist ropes to this main rope," he said as he worked. "Each of you tie your own rope to the main one, leaving about a meter of slack. That way you can move within a certain range, but won't be swept away." Lu Chen was the first to act. She tied the end of her waist rope to the main rope with clean, sharp movements, making 2 knots and giving it a firm tug. "Have you tied ropes before?" Lu Chen was a bit surprised. "Learned rock climbing while filming." With Sister Wang's help, Dudu also secured her rope. Her fingers were trembling. She didn't get the knot right the first time, so Sister Wang helped her undo it and retie it. Once tied, she gripped the rope tightly, but didn't hold the chimney. She took a deep breath, wrapped both arms around the chimney support, lightly touched the deck with her injured foot, and braced her good foot firmly against it. Sister Wang also tied herself and then held the chimney with one arm while placing the other on Duda's shoulder. "And then, oi?" Lu Chen asked. Lu Chen tied the last piece of rope around his own waist, securing the other end to the main rope. He didn't answer directly, but looked around. They weren't alone on the top deck. A few crew members had also come up. They knew the ship's structure better than some others had followed. Lu Chen recognized a few faces from the stairs, familiar from the red carpet earlier, likely celebrities or agents. There were about 20 or 30 people in total scattered across the top deck, each finding a spot to secure themselves. The general manager had also come up, followed by a few staff members. He saw Lu Chen nodded from a distance and then led his group toward the bridge. The roof of the bridge was probably the highest point on the ship. Lu Chen looked away and said a short sentence to the 3 women beside him. "Hold the chimney tight. No matter what happens, don't let go. When the wave hits, hold your breath, close your eyes, don't open your mouth. Breathe again after it passes." He paused, looking at their faces. Lu Chen's expression was still one of cool calm, but there was something new in her eyes. Not fear, but focus. She pressed her face against the cold metal, her arms tightly encircling a steel pipe as if welded to it. Duda's face had turned pale, her lips trembling slightly. But she gritted her teeth, putting all her weight on her good foot, letting the injured one hover lightly, refusing to be distracted by the pain. She didn't cry or scream. She used all her strength to do one thing: hold on. Sister Wang beside Dudu had trembling lips, but she didn't say anything like, "Are we going to die?" She just pulled Duda's shoulder closer. Lu Chen also hugged the chimney right next to them. Then they waited. The deck was silent. No one spoke, no one cried, no one prayed. Only heartbeats pounding like drums in every chest. Lu Chen stared toward the ship's railing. In the darkness, he could see nothing, but the feeling of something coming grew stronger. The air grew fishier, salthair bitter. A buzz sounded in his ears again, louder and longer than before. He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, he heard the sound. It wasn't a roar or a howl. It was a low, distant thud. As if a giant were beating a drum at the horizon, the sound skimmed across the sea, through the air, through the ship, through the bones, burrowing into everyone's body. Then he saw a white line. At the far-off junction of sea and sky, in that endless darkness, a thin white line was growing thicker, brighter, closer. It moved faster than he had imagined. So fast he couldn't even shout the words, "It's here. Hold tight." He roared, his voice exploding across the empty deck. In the next instant, that white line slammed into the... It wasn't a collision. It was a lift. The entire ship was raised like a leaf, hurled upward, forward, and into a direction that belonged to no direction at all. Lu Chen's body lost all weight in that instant, as if he were on a suddenly accelerating elevator. His stomach plummeted, the air pressure in his ears shifted violently, and the world became being shaken with brutal force. Water. Water everywhere. Not from one direction, but surging from all directions at once. The seawater hit the hull like a moving wall, crashing against the smokestack, against the people. The force wasn't an impact, it was a crushing. Like being hit by a truck and then dragged along the ground. Lu Chen's eyes instinctively shut, his mouth clamped tight, and his nose held his breath. But he could feel it, the seawater tearing at him. That power wanted to rip him off the smokestack like pulling out a nail. The muscles in his arms were strained to their absolute limit, every fiber screaming. The rope bit into his waist, nearly choking the breath out of him. The wave passed. It was probably only a few seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. As the water receded, Lu Chen gasped for air, coughing up several mouthfuls of salty seawater. He opened his eyes, but everything was a blur of mist. He blinked furiously and shook his head hard before his vision slowly cleared. He first checked the smokestack. It was still there. The anchor point, still there. The rope, still there. Then he looked at the person beside him. Liu Xixi was still there. She was completely soaked, her silver-gray gown plastered to her body, her hair plastered to her face like seaweed. But her hands still clung fiercely to the smokestack, and the rope was still around her waist. Lu Xixi, Lu Chen shouted. She lifted her head, spat out a mouthful of seawater, and her voice was hoarse, but clear. "I'm here." Lu Chen turned to look at the other side. Dudu was still there, but her posture had changed as she was no longer hugging the smokestack, but was held tightly from behind by Sister Wang. Sister Wang had one arm around Dudu's waist, and the other hand gripping the rope, her eyes tightly shut, her lips turning purple. Dudu's face was buried in Sister Wang's embrace, her two hands clutching Sister Wang's arms, her nails digging into the skin. "Dudu," Lu Chen called out. She looked up, her face covered in seawater and tears, but her eyes were open and bright. I didn't let go." Her voice trembled, but every word was clear. Lu Chen's heart suddenly relaxed. But just then he heard a sound. Not the roar of the waves, but the screech of twisting metal. It was a sound like a giant beast chewing on steel, a grating noise that rose from deep within the ship's hull, setting one's teeth on edge. The ship was groaning. He glanced toward the ship's railing. Then he saw that the railing was gone. Not bent, not washed away, but completely torn off from its base on the deck. Like tearing a piece of paper. The edge of the deck at that spot was already warped, revealing the dark, hollow structure beneath. The port side of the hull was sinking. Lu Chen knew this was only the first wave. A tsunami doesn't come in a single wave. The second wave was coming soon. He took a deep breath, wrapped his arms back around the smokestack, and clenched his jaw. "The second wave is coming," he roared. "Hold tight. Don't let go." In the distance, another white line was rising in the darkness. Lu Chen's arms were locked around the smokestack, his fingers already numb. His eyes were stinging red from the seawater, but he dared not close them, staring fixedly at the approaching white line. After the first wave receded, the ship's tilt had worsened. The port side was noticeably lower, the deck like a steep slope where standing was impossible. One could only hang on with ropes or cling to the smokestack. "The second wave is coming," he roared. "It might be bigger than the first. Everyone keep your mouth shut." Lu Xixi didn't respond, but she buried her face between the smokestack and her arm to reduce the impact surface. Dudu and Sister Wang clung together. Sister Wang held the rope with one hand and pressed Dudu's head into the hollow of her shoulder with the other, using her own body as a shield. Lu Chen took a quick glance around. The lanterns had long been extinguished, but the white line on the horizon was approaching, emitting an eerie pale glow that illuminated the deck's outline. By that faint light, he saw more figures, perhaps 40 or 50 people scattered across the upper deck. Some were hugging ventilation pipes, some were tied to railing bases, and others were huddled in small groups. Among them, some had come up earlier with the vice president, while others had likely fled up from below after the first impact. His gaze swept over a few faces and then stopped. On the other side of the smokestack, about 5 or 6 meters away, a small group was huddled together. He recognized one face. It was Yang Xiaomi. Yang Xiaomi was wearing a silver-gray sequined skirt, now soaked through and crumpled against her legs. She was barefoot, her hair a tangled mess, her face covered in water and grime, looking utterly disheveled, nothing like the meticulously polished woman she usually was. One hand clutched a ventilation pipe, while the other desperately gripped a woman in a white dress beside her. That was Zhao Silu, a rising star who had become popular in the last 2 years, known for her sweet looks, but now pale with terror, her lips trembling and tears streaming uncontrollably. Behind them, 2 other women were curled up. Lu Chen squinted to identify them. Liu Xixi and Gulan. Liu Xixi was also in a silver-gray gown drenched through, but her expression was much calmer than Zhao Silas. One hand held the ventilation pipe, while the other helped Gulanana secure a cloth strip around her waist. Gulanana wore a bright yellow dress, her face deathly pale, her lips trembling incessantly, but she wasn't crying or screaming. She just bit her lower lip hard, curling up against Li Xin's side. The 4 of them were crowded together, sharing a single rope. No, they didn't even have a rope. What Yang Xiaomi and Zhao Silu were clutching were nothing more than torn curtain strips, soaked through and limp, offering no real strength. Li Xixi had the same cloth strip around her waist, and Gulanana wasn't even tied to anything. She was just holding onto Li Xin's clothes. "They don't have a rope," Lu Chen shouted to Lu Xixi beside him. Lu Xixi followed his gaze, her brow furrowing slightly. Without hesitation, she said directly, "I'll go." "Are you crazy?" Lu Chen stared at her. "The wave will be here in seconds. If you go, you won't make it back." "Then come with me," Lu Xixi said, her tone as calm as if she were asking for a cup to be passed. Lu Chen was stunned for a moment. He gritted his teeth, cursed, and then quickly began untying the rope around. He didn't undo it completely. Instead, he pulled the rope free from the main line's carabiner and retied it around his waist, leaving a longer length of slack, about 7 or 8 meters, enough to reach the other side of the smokestack and come back. "He'll go. You be the anchor here," he said, his words rapid. "If I get swept away, you pull me back. Don't let go even if it kills you." Lu Xixi nodded without a word. She wrapped the end of the rope from Lu Chen's waist twice around her arm, anchoring herself to the smokestack like a nail, bracing her feet against the metal base. Lu Chen took a deep breath, hunched over, and sprinted across the wet, tilted deck toward Yang Xiaomi and the others. The water on the deck hadn't fully receded, leaving the surface slick. His sneakers slapped against the water with a wet sound. The sloping deck forced him to struggle for balance with every step, like climbing an icy slope. A distance of 5 meters he covered in less than 3 seconds. Yang Xiaomi's eyes lit up the moment she saw him charging over. That brightness wasn't surprise. It was the frantic, desperate gleam of someone who spots a rope in the abyss. "Don't let go," Lu Chen roared. "Grab my rope." He pulled a length of rope from his waist and hurled it toward Yang Xiaomi. Yang Xiaomi released the ventilation pipe with one hand and seized the rope. Her slender fingers clenched it with iron grip, knuckles white nails digging into the fibers. "Wrap it around your waist twice and tie a knot. Hurry," Lu Chen said as he reached for Zhao Silu. Zhao Silu was paralyzed with fear, frozen like a statue. Lu Chen grabbed her wrist, forced her hand onto the rope, and guided her to wrap it twice and tie a knot at the Li Xixi. "Gulnara," Lu Chen shouted back. "Grab their clothes. Hold their waists. Don't let go." Li Xixi reacted much faster than Zhao Silu. She wrapped her arms around Yang Xiaomi's waist from behind, interlocking her fingers tightly. Even drenched and disheveled, her movements retained a natural elegance, something etched into her bones that the waves couldn't wash away. Gulnara grabbed Zhao Sila's skirt, but the silk was too slippery. In panic, she shifted and seized Zhao Sila's arm, her nails digging into the flesh. Zhao Silu cried out in pain, but didn't pull away. The roar of the waves had drowned out everything. Lu Chen looked up. The white line had become a wall. A black wall dozens of meters high. In the pale light, it was bearing down on the cruise ship at an unimaginable. Its crest churned with white foam like a colossal beast opening its maw. "It's here," Lu Chen bellowed with all his strength, then wrapped the rope twice around his wrist, crouched low, shifted his center of gravity, and grabbed the nearest ventilation pipe bracket with his other hand. In the next instant, the world became water. Not merely being washed over. The world itself was water. When the wall crashed onto the ship, Lu Chen felt as if his internal organs had been flattened. The force wasn't a push, it was a smash. Like a giant fist hammering down from above, pressing him onto the deck. His knees slammed against the iron plates, pain blurring his vision, but he dared not let go. The rope bit into his wrist, burning like fire. Water filled his ears, his eyes, his nose, his mouth. Salty, bitter, reeking of fish. He held his breath. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. An eternity passed. Then the water began to recede. First it drained from his ears, then he could open his eyes a crack, then he expelled a stream from his nose, then he coughed up a mouthful of salty, fishy seawater. Lu Chen gasped for air like a fish thrown onto land. He opened his eyes and saw Yang Xiaomi still clutching the rope, lying face down in the puddle. He grabbed her by the collar and yanked her up. Yang Xiaomi coughed violently, spat out several mouthfuls of water, then breathed deeply, her chest heaving. Zhao Silu was alive, but in a strange position, suspended by the rope, half hanging from the ventilation pipe. The wave must have swept her up, and the rope had caught in the pipe's crevice. Her feet dangled off the ground like clothes on a line, still dripping. Lu Chen quickly lifted her down. Li Xixi and Gulnara were gone. No, Gulnara was still there. She had been flung 2 meters behind Yang Xiaomi, but she clung desperately to Yang Xiaomi's skirt. The silver-gray sequined fabric was twisted out of shape, but the stitching between sequins and cloth still held like a lifeline. Gulnara's other hand gripped a protruding bolt on the deck. She lay half in the water, still alive. But Li Xixi was gone. "Where's Li Xixi?" Lu Chen roared. "She was just behind me." Yang Xiaomi's voice trembled as she frantically turned her head, looking around. Here. A faint voice came from the other side of the ventilation pipe. Lu Chen circled around and saw Li Xixi. The wave had swept her into a narrow gap between the ventilation pipe and the smokestack, where she was wedged tight, unable to move. The gap was only about 30 centimeters wide. She had squeezed in sideways just enough to avoid being carried off by the second wave. But she had lost one shoe and her foot was covered in cuts, bleeding. "Don't move. He'll pull you out." Lu Chen grabbed her wrist and tugged hard. Li Xixi winced in pain, but cooperated, squeezing out. When Lu Chen pulled her free, a gash on her arm bled, mixing with seawater. He dragged Li Xixi into the smokestack and made her hold the main rope. Then he counted Yang Xiaomi, Zhao Silu, Li Xixi, and Gulnara. All 4, not one missing. He let out a long breath. "Everyone hold tight to the rope and tie yourselves on," he shouted. The 4 women scrambled to tie themselves. Yang Xiaomi was the fastest. She had experienced military training on a variety show before, just for show, but at least she knew how to tie a knot. But now her fingers shook so badly it took 3 tries to succeed. Zhao Silu was crying too hard to speak, tears mingling with seawater. But she didn't give up. Biting her lip, she tied the rope around her waist with Li Xin's help. Gulnara was the calmest. Not only did she tie herself securely, but she also checked Zhao Silas' knot. Then she examined Yang Xiaomi's knot and tightened it. Her hands were steady without a tremor, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she knew fear was useless now. Lu Chen had never let go by the smokestack. One arm hugged the smokestack, the other held the end of Lu Chen's rope. During the last wave, her body had been dragged half a meter, but she pulled herself back through sheer core strength. A red mark from the rope cut into her arm, but she didn't even glance at it. Dudu and Sister Wang were still there. Sister Wang had a bloody scratch on her face from something unknown, but she shielded Dudu, fiercely protecting her from any impact. Dudu's foot injury had worsened, swollen like a bun, but she didn't utter a sound. Leaning against Sister Wang, her eyes were fixed on Lu Chen, watching him pull up Yang Xiaomi, catch Zhao Silu, and extract Li Xian from the crevice. Lu Chen leaned against the smokestack, panting heavily. He looked at the sky. The dark clouds had parted slightly, revealing a few stars. The sea had calmed temporarily after the second wave, but the fishy smell lingered, and the air was still oppressive. He knew tsunamis usually came in 3 to 5 waves, and the first wasn't always the largest. But at least for now they were alive. Thank you. Yang Xiaomi's hoarse voice came from beside him, trembling with the relief of survival. Lu Chen turned to look at her. Let's survive first. Yang Xiaomi's eyes suddenly reddened. She opened her mouth, nodded vigorously, and buried her face in her arms. Zhao Silu was still crying, but quieter now. She leaned on Li Xin's shoulder. Li Xian held her with one arm, the other still bleeding, but she didn't let go. She glanced at the wound on her arm and said softly, "It's okay, not deep." Her tone was as calm as if she were reading a script. Gulnara sat at the edge looking up at the stars, her lips moving slightly, as if in prayer. Her bright yellow dress was soaked through and crumpled, but that splash of yellow still stood out in the darkness like a lamp about to go out. Dudu poked her head out from Sister Wang's arms, looked around at the actresses, and suddenly said, "We're all still." Her voice was soft, but on the quiet deck, everyone heard it. Yang Xiaomi looked up, sniffed, and forced a smile uglier than tears. "Yeah, alive." Li Xian also smiled, faint but genuine. Her smile carried a natural grace that even with a face full of water and hair a mess felt warm. Zhao Silu sobbed, "I'm never getting on a boat again." Everyone laughed. The laughter was light, brief, like a match struck in the dark, flaring for a moment before dying out. But in that flash, each saw the other's faces, bedraggled, pale, streaked with water and tears, yet all bearing a strange light. The light of survival. Lu Chen leaned against the smokestack, watching the women, a strange feeling welling. Minutes ago, they had been dazzling stars on the red carpet, pursued by countless admirers and cameras. Now they were soaked, battered, huddled on the dark deck, like birds caught in a storm. But they hadn't broken. No screaming, no giving up, no trampling each other. They were helping one another. Yang Xiaomi was wiping water from Zhao Silas' face. Li Xian was checking Gulnara for injuries. Dudu was asking Sister Wang if her face hurt. Lu Chen said nothing, but she gave the dry corner to Zhao Silu and sat in the wind, shivering without a word. Lu Chen suddenly realized these women were far stronger than he had imagined. He took a deep breath, ready to speak about the third wave. But just then the ship shuddered violently. Not from a wave impact. A deeper, more muffled vibration, as if something had snapped beneath the hull. The screech of twisting metal rose from below, piercing and sharp, like a giant beast groaning. Lu Chen's face changed. He stood slowly and looked toward the railing. The ship's tilt had increased. The port side was nearly sub. He turned to the women, his voice heavy. "The third wave hasn't come yet, but the ship might not hold." Ding detected that the host remained true to their heart in the face of disaster, never abandoning or giving up on companions. Conditions for activating the survival bond system are met. System activation commencing. Ding, system activated successfully. Ding, disaster warning module loaded successfully. Ding, bond module loaded successfully. Ding, reward module loaded successfully. Ding, subsequent functions cannot be loaded due to insufficient. A series of cold mechanical beeps exploded within Lu Chen's mind, the dense ringing like heavy hammers pounding against his dazed nerves. His spirit, already strained from the turbulent waves and the ship's violent rocking, instantly became disoriented and dizzy. It took him a long moment to regain his senses. System. Lu Chen roared inwardly, a surge of ecstatic disbelief mixed with pent-up frustration. He was a transmigrator, having accidentally crossed over from Earth to this parallel dimension, which was highly similar to his original world many years ago. In his past life, he was a seasoned photographer, capturing the essence of human life through his lens. After transmigrating, he became an ordinary office worker in this world, earning a meager salary, crammed into a tiny rented room, struggling for daily sustenance. Unwilling to remain mediocre, he picked up his camera again, taking on outdoor shoots and event coverage, hoping to improve his life with his old trade. He never expected that this assignment would lead to a catastrophic tsunami. The cruise ship was severely damaged by the giant waves and was on the verge of sinking. And the system, the standard issue tool for all transmigrators he had been waiting years for, finally arrived belatedly at this moment of utter desperation. It was both laughable and infuriating, filling him with a sense of absurdity. The fierce wind whipped up salty seawater, crashing violently against the top deck. The icy spray splashed onto his face, and the biting cold instantly jolted Lu Chen back to full alertness. In his ears, besides the howling wind and the roar of the waves, there was the jarring, abnormal noise of the cruise ship's hull. The screeching sound of metal twisting and grinding was like the death rattle of a dying beast, echoing every few seconds, sending shivers down the spine. The deck beneath his feet was constantly heaving, its tilt growing more pronounced. The entire ship was fighting for its last breath. Just then, the system's prompt sounded again, more urgent than before. Ding, disaster warning. According to system calculations, the cruise ship will break apart in 20 minutes. The hull will fracture into several sections with no chance of survival. Ding, disaster warning. The third wave peak will arrive in 30 minutes with a height exceeding 20 meters. Danger level 5 stars. It will cover the entire sea area with no shelter available. As the prompt faded, a clear three-dimensional image of the cruise ship instantly materialized in Lu Chen's consciousness. The ship's structure, damage locations, and flooded areas were all perfectly visible. Several faint green dots representing life-saving equipment flickered on the map. The brightest one was located precisely at the corner of the lifeboat deck, 2 decks below them. It was the closest and had a relatively safe route. At this critical moment between life and death, Lu Chen didn't hesitate. His usually gentle tone became firm and powerful, carrying an unyielding resolve that cut through the panic and silence of those around him. Follow me. Where to? Yang Xiaomi lifted her face wet with spray. Her long eyelashes were adorned with glistening seawater, and her eyes were filled with bewilderment and terror. The previous giant wave had nearly swept her away, and her limbs were still weak. Her voice carried an almost imperceptible tremor. To find a life raft and evacuate immediately. Lu Chen spoke while swiftly untying the safety rope, securing him, his movements agile and quick. This ship won't last 20 minutes. It will break apart soon. We have no time to hesitate. Everyone, untie your ropes. Don't throw them away. Coil them carefully and keep them on you. We'll need them for launching the raft and securing our positions later. Every single item is crucial for survival now. 20 minutes. How can you be sure? Golina Na frowned, her tone laced with doubt, but her hands moved without pause, already working on the knot at her waist. She was always meticulous and not easily swayed, but in this dire situation, she could see the certainty in Lu Chen's eyes, which was far from a random guess. Lu Chen turned to look at her, knowing full well that he couldn't explain the unbelievable existence of the system to them, nor did he have the time. He just needed to convince them with facts. He pointed towards the port side of the ship, his voice overpowering the storm. Look closely at the hull. The tilt is at least 10 degrees greater than before, and it's accelerating. You've all clearly heard the sound of the ship's structure deforming. This giant vessel is completely compromised. Staying here means certain death. Everyone followed his gaze. The once stable cruise ship was now visibly tilting to one side. Debris on the deck was sliding continuously towards the lower edge. The sea in the distance was pitch black, the shadow of surging waves drawing ever closer. The terrifying screech of metal grew even more piercing. No one argued further. Each face turned pale, knowing in their hearts that Lu Chen was speaking the truth. Liu Xixi, ever calm and composed, did not lose her composure even in this extremity. She was the first to deftly untie her rope, neatly coiling the long safety line into loops and securing it over her shoulder. Her movements were as composed as if she were adjusting a camera on set, without a trace of panic, instilling a sense of confidence in those around her. Chen Dudu also gritted her teeth and slowly worked on her knot. Wang Jie, watching her with concern, quickly took the rope, carefully folded it, and put it away. She even gently patted Chen Dudu's back, offering soft words of comfort. Yang Xiaomi took a deep breath, pushing down her inner fear. She reached out and pulled Zhao Silu, who was slumped on the deck, to her feet. Her gaze was firm. Silla, let's go. Well, follow Lu Chen. Can you hold on? Zhao Sila's legs trembled uncontrollably from shock and the cold, making it nearly impossible for her to. But looking at the others supporting each other, she nodded, firmly pressing her lips into a stubborn straight line, determined not to hold them back. They'll carry you. Li Xian suddenly spoke. Her arm had been cut by sharp debris on the deck, and blood was streaming down her arm, staining her sleeve. Yet seemingly oblivious to the pain, she crouched down directly, tilting her head slightly, to signal Zhao Silu to climb onto her back. Zhao Silu hesitated for half a second, her eyes filled with guilt as she looked at Li Xin's bleeding arm. But there was no time to hesitate, so she gently leaned onto her back. Li Xian stumbled slightly as she stood up. The wound pulled, causing her to wince in pain. Golina Na, quick-eyed and quick-handed, immediately reached out to support her arm, saying in a low voice, "They'll help you. We'll go together. Don't panic." The group, supporting one another, began to move slowly towards the stairwell. Lu Chen led the way, constantly monitoring the green dot on the system map in his mind, following the guidance to find the shortest evacuation path. The deck was littered with debris washed up by the waves. Broken planks, twisted metal bars, scattered chairs, and tables everywhere. A single misstep could cause someone to trip. Lu Chen carefully led the group through the wreckage on the top deck, bending low to skirt around a ventilation duct that had been overturned by a giant wave and was blocking the path. Finally, they reached a narrow, vertical iron ladder. This ladder was extremely steep, usually used only by crew members for maintenance. The steps were narrow and slippery, covered in seawater and moss. The main spacious staircase was likely already flooded or blocked by collapsed debris. This was the only passage down. Listen up, everyone. Go down one by one. Don't push. Hold the handrails firmly and take it slow. They'll go first to catch you at the bottom and make sure everyone gets down safely. Lu Chen's voice was grave as he gave the order. The moment he finished speaking, he turned, grabbed the ladder's handrails, and planted his feet firmly on the slippery iron rungs. His hands gripped tightly, not daring to relax, even as his palms were rubbed raw. Covering the height of 3 stories, relying on the agility honed from years as a photographer, he landed steadily on the lifeboat deck below in less than 10 seconds. The lifeboat deck was a mess, scattered with discarded ropes and damaged fishing gear. The air was thick with the smell of salt and rust. Faint starlight filtered through gaps in the clouds, barely enough to make out the surroundings. Lu Chen looked up. The storage point for the life rafts marked on his system map was right in front of him. 4 white cylindrical fiberglass containers were neatly secured in a row on the deck brackets. Each cylinder was about 1.5 meters long and half a meter in diameter. They were perfectly sealed without any damage. These were the emergency life rafts, capable of holding 20 people each. In this dark, hopeless sea, these 4 white cylinders were the only hope of survival for everyone. Lu Chen's heart raced, his taut nerves finally easing slightly. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to regain composure, and immediately shouted up the iron ladder in a steady, powerful voice. Found it. All the life rafts are here intact. Everyone come down one by one. I will catch you below. Hearing Lu Chen's voice, the group above breathed a collective sigh of relief. Liu Xixi was the first to descend. Barefoot, she stepped onto the cold, slippery iron ladder, each movement as steady as a cat's light foot and agile. After landing, she didn't rush away, but stood by Lu Chen's side, extending a hand to assist those coming down, her voice calm. The ladder's slippery, be careful. Yang Xiaomi followed closely behind Liu Xixi. Though her heart pounded with anxiety, she rehearsed the landing in her mind. Where to grip, where to step. But the iron ladder was more slippery than expected. Her foot slipped, and she plummeted a short distance. Lu Chen, quick-eyed and swift-handed, caught her securely. Yang Xiaomi fell into his arms, her body icy cold, her heart thundering like a drum. Yet she bit her lip, refraining from screaming, only gripping Lu Chen's arm tightly for a few seconds before releasing it. She whispered a thank you, then quickly stepped aside to assess the surroundings for safety. Gulnaz came down third. Upon landing, her knee struck the hard deck, instantly scraping off a layer of skin, blood beading up. Without even a furrow of her brow, she gritted her teeth and stood up, dusted off her skirt, then turned and called to Yang Xiaomi. Mijia, I'll go help pull the ropes over there. Then she limped toward the life raft's anchor point, moving with enthusiasm. The hardest was Li Xin carrying Zhao Sila down. Zhao Silu clung tightly to Li Xin's neck, leaning her weight backward, afraid of adding to Li Xin's burden. She whispered in Li Xin's ear, Xin, Jia, put me down and I can walk on my own. Her voice was full of concern. Li Xin supported Zhao Sila's leg with one hand, while gripping the iron ladder with the other. The wound on her arm repeatedly strained, sweat beading on her forehead from the pain. Yet a faint smile lingered on her lips as she spoke in a hoarse but gentle voice. Don't talk, save your strength. You're not heavy. She moved downward slowly and painfully, pausing for a few seconds with each step. Lu Chen watched intently from below, seizing the moment to reach up and support Zhao Sila's waist, steadying both of them. Liu Xixi also came over, helping Li Xin maintain balance by supporting her elbow from the side. The 3 worked together, carefully bringing them down safely. Chen Duda's foot had been injured in the earlier chaos. Each step on the iron ladder squeezed the wound, sending piercing pain through her. Her face pale with agony, she gasped repeatedly, tears welling up in her eyes, yet she bit her lip and remained silent. She clutched Wang Jie's hand tightly, moving down step by step. Wang Jie's eyes reddened with sympathy, but her voice was brisk and efficient. Take your time, make sure each step is steady before moving. I'm here, you won't fall. While supporting Dudu, she kept an eye on the others above, constantly encouraging. 5 more steps. 3. Good, you're there. After landing, Wang Jie immediately crouched to examine Duda's ankle, her movements quick and gentle, her eyes full of concern. Just as everyone prepared to deploy the life raft, a voice tinged with surprise and sobs suddenly came from the dark corner of the cabin. Boss. Mijia. Everyone turned to see 4 figures supporting each other, trudging toward the top deck. Their clothes were soaked with seawater, hair, disheveled faces etched with exhaustion and terror. At the front was Pang Di. She was drenched, her hair in disarray, but the moment her signature big eyes spotted Yang Xiaomi, they blazed with an almost wild light. Not excitement, but the unreserved, desperate joy of seeing a loved one in the midst of despair. Mi Jia. Mi Jia. She practically lunged forward. Her foot slipped, and she pitched forward, her knee hitting the edge of the deck, drawing blood. But ignoring the pain, she scrambled up and kept running toward Yang Xiaomi. The moment Yang Xiaomi heard that voice, she froze as if struck by lightning. She spun around, and upon seeing the figure running toward her, her eyes instantly reddened. Pang Di. They collided. Pang Di threw herself into Yang Xiaomi's arms, her hands locked around her neck, trembling like leaves in the wind. Though half a head taller than Yang Xiaomi, she buried her face in Yang Xiaomi's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. Mi Jia. I was so scared. I thought I was going to die in there. My phone wouldn't work, I couldn't find you, it was pitch black everywhere, and water kept pouring in. Yang Xiaomi wrapped one arm around her waist and pressed the other against the back of her head, pulling her close. Her chin rested on Pang Di's head as tears streamed down her own face, but her voice remained steady. It's okay, it's okay. Jia is here. You ran pretty fast, didn't you? Not afraid of hurting your knee, huh? The latter part carried a light-hearted tease, Yang Xiaomi's way of dissolving tears with humor. Pang Di laughed through her tears, lightly punching her. The second was Ni. She wore a canary yellow dress, its hem torn to above the knees, revealing two long, straight legs. A thin trail of blood ran from a cut on her left cheekbone, droplets trickling down her face, but she didn't wipe it away, as if oblivious to the pain. In her hand, she carried a pair of high heels, one heel broken. Her expression wasn't as agitated as Pang Di's, that was restrained and taut. She walked to the group without rushing toward anyone, silently stopped, bent over, placed her hands on her knees, and gasped for breath. Her shoulders heaved violently, her chest like an overloaded bellows. I. Lu Chen recognized her. They had worked together on a film before, not close, but in such a situation, any familiar face was a lifeline. I looked up, saw Lu Chen, and managed a faint smile. She straightened up and walked over. They didn't embrace, just stood together, shoulders touching. You okay, eh? Lu Chen asked. Still alive. Ni's voice was hoarse, but steady. She straightened up, scanned the deck, then walked to Lu Chen and extended her hand. Need help? Am not weak. Lu Chen glanced at her, nodded, and handed her a mooring line. I took it, her movements brisk and efficient, nothing like someone who had just escaped death. The third was Zhao Maimei. She wore a white spaghetti strap dress, its hem stained with black grime and red blood spots. Her face was small, her chin pointed, and her large round eyes darted around in terror like a frightened Her lips trembled, teeth chattering, shoulders hunched, making her look even younger than her age. She spotted Zhao Silu on Li Xin's back, saw her too. My. Zhao Silas' voice came from Li Xin's back, choked with tears. She struggled to get down, but Li Xixi gently patted her leg. Don't move, it'll carry you over. Silu. Zhao Maimei rushed over, trying to grab Zhao Silas' hand, but Zhao Silu was out of reach on Li Xin's back. So Zhao Maimei grasped Zhao Silas' dangling fingers, the two girls' hands clasped tightly together, neither willing to let go. How did you get here? Are you okay? Are you hurt? Zhao Maimei's questions came rapid fire, each tinged with tears. I'm fine. Sister Li Xixi carried me down. Zhao Silu sniffled. Only then did Zhao Maimei notice Li Xixi hastily saying, Thank you, Xixi Jia, before turning back to Zhao Silu, as if afraid she might vanish the next second. The last was Xiao Tian. She wore a light blue dress soaked through and clinging to her body. In her hand, she held a single high heel, the other was lost somewhere. Blood was on the sole of her foot, probably from stepping on broken glass, but she didn't utter a sound, standing barefoot on the cold, slippery deck, perfectly steady. She wasn't sobbing heart-wrenchingly like Pang Di, nor restrained and calm like Ni, nor flustered like Zhao Maimei. Instead, barefoot, she walked to the life raft, crouched down, and with nimble fingers unfastened the straps securing it. Her movements were practiced, her force precise. Her feet left faint bloody prints on the deck, but she seemed completely indifferent. Gulnaz, watching in astonishment, couldn't help asking, Xiao Tian, doesn't your foot hurt? Xiao Tian didn't look up, her tone as flat, as if discussing the weather. It does. But this isn't the time for pain. Lu Chen glanced at her, nodding inwardly. This girl was the fastest among the trap to shift into action mode. Wang Jie, holding a strip of cloth torn from somewhere, crouched beside Xiao Tian. Lift your foot, let me treat it. Otherwise it might get infected. Xiao Tian hesitated, then extended her foot, but said, Take care of Dudu and Silu first, they're hurt worse. Wang Jie ignored her and began cleaning and bandaging the wound. Over by Yang Xiaomi, Pang Di had finally cried enough and lifted her head from her shoulder. Her eyes were swollen like peaches, her nose red, her makeup completely smeared, but she didn't care. She turned to look at the other women, then at Lu Chen. This is, she said, looking at Lu Chen, asking Yang Xiaomi. The one who saved us, Yang Xiaomi said without further explanation. Lu Chen stood up and surveyed the four newcomers. Adding to the original group, Lu Chen Chen Dude Yang Xiaomi Gulnaz, Zhao Silu Li Xin Wang Jia, and himself there were 12 in total. The life raft could hold 20 people, so there was enough room for all of them. At that moment the ship shuddered violently, more fiercely than ever before. The sound of tearing metal came from below like bones snapping, a dull brittle crack. The lifeboat deck began to tilt, visibly sliding from the port side toward the sea. At the end of the corridor the fire door burst open under the pressure of water. Black seawater surged out like a runaway stallion, spreading rapidly across the deck. The lifeboat deck began to tilt, visibly sliding from the port side toward the sea. At the end of the corridor the fire door burst open under the pressure. Bang! A muffled thud echoed as the cylinder hit the water. Its outer shell snapped open instantly, and within seconds an orange life raft inflated, transforming from a small cylinder into a large circular platform that floated serenely on the surface. This enclosed life raft made of rubber consisted of 4 parts: an upper and lower buoyancy tube support poles, a canopy, and a floor. It was lightweight, easy to use, and quick to maneuver. Although its ceiling was mediocre, safer lifeboats required electrical systems to operate, which were unavailable in this situation. Take off your high heels. Then descend one by one. Don't push. The life raft made of rubber could easily be punctured by sharp stilettos. The women dared not delay. They quickly removed their heels and gathered by the ship's railing. With time running out, Lu Chen had no choice but to toss down the rope, unable to opt for a safer boarding device. The rope was a nylon line attached to the life raft as thick as a thumb with a braided anti-slip surface, sturdy enough for the task. He securely tied one end to the deck railing and let the other end dangle into the life raft. The rope hung between the ship's side and the raft, swaying slightly in the wind. Fortunately, the rope was long enough to reach the raft safely. Seeing the fear in others' eyes, Lu Chen was the first to slide down. She gripped the rope with both hands, let her body drop, pushed off the ship's side with her feet, and descended bit by bit. Her movements were clean and efficient, like someone trained in rock climbing. In less than 20 seconds, her feet touched the rubber floor of the life raft with a dull thud. She crouched down, steadied herself, and shouted up, "Next!" Chen Dudu and Sister Wang exchanged glances. Chen Dudu bit her lip, and Sister Wang patted her back. They slid down one after the other. Halfway down, Chen Dudu's hand slipped, and she plummeted abruptly. Sister Wang screamed in fright above, but Chen Dudu quickly regained her grip. The skin on her palms was scraped raw, burning with pain, but she gritted her teeth and held on until she reached the bottom. The remaining women glanced at the cruise ship and saw it tilting faster and faster. Standing on it now required bending over to maintain balance. Suppressing their terror, they slid down in turn. Before descending, Yang Xiaomi looked back at the sea, her lips moving slightly, as if she were saying something, but no sound escaped. Gulin Nana slid down the fastest, almost jumping. She caught the rope midair and landed steadily. Zhao Silu and Li Xian chose to slide down hand in hand. They tumbled into the raft together, landing on their backs, but neither was injured. Peng Di was the last to slide. Terrified of heights, her legs trembled as she stood by the railing. Nini shouted from above, "Don't look down. Look at me." Peng Di kept her eyes fixed on Nini's as she descended. When she reached the bottom, she collapsed on the raft floor, gasping for breath. Lu Chen was the last to come down. As soon as he entered the life raft, he cut the rope with the tool inside. A small safety knife embedded in the raft's wall, its blade curved specifically for cutting lines. With a swift motion, the rope snapped. The life raft drifted gently with the waves completely detached from the sinking ship. He grabbed a simple paddle and began rowing quickly. The paddle, made of plastic, was light, but offered considerable resistance. Each stroke required the strength of his lower back. Row hard. Switch if you can't keep up. A sinking ship creates a vortex. We need to get out of this range before it goes down. Hearing this, the others quickly took the paddles and rowed with all their might. Lu Chen and Chen Dudu each took a paddle, sitting on opposite sides of the raft. Their rhythms soon synchronized. Sister Wang and Yang Xiaomi stood by as replacements, rotating when someone tired. The sound of blades cutting into water rose and fell like beating a deep drum. Lu Chen looked up at the sinking cruise ship. The bow had already submerged while the stern rose high, revealing massive propellers. They turned slowly, each rotation churning up bubbles and sediment, as if the ship were making a final struggle. The screech of twisting metal, the crackle of shattering glass, and faint cries drifted from that direction, a symphony of the apocalypse. That ship, just hours ago ablaze with lights and laughter, now resembled a dying beast being swallowed bite by the sea. At that moment, dozens of orange blossoms of life bloomed on the sea surface. Other trapped passengers had also realized the ship was sinking and chosen to save themselves. "Oh my God, there are so many people," Peng Di murmured. On the water, those orange life rafts looked like suddenly blooming flowers scattered around the sinking vessel. Some were closed almost directly beneath the stern, resembling leaves scattered by the wind from afar. Others were farther away, pushed dozens of meters by the waves. Figures moved on each flower, some paddling desperately, others reaching out to pull people in. A few rafts seemed to hold only 2 or 3 people, drifting emptily. Lu Chen roughly counted at least 30 rafts. If each held a capacity of 20, perhaps 600 or 700 people had escaped. But several rafts were clearly not full, and a few held only 7 or 8 people. He didn't know what those empty spaces meant, nor did he want to think about it. Just then the cruise ship let out its final sound. It wasn't the screech of tearing metal or the crackle of breaking glass, but a low rumbling noise from deep within the hull, as if something had utterly collapsed in the ship's core. The stern rose higher and higher, nearly vertical. The massive propellers emerged fully, gleaming dull copper in the moonlight. Rows of portholes submerged one by one like closing eyes. "It's going down." Lu Qianqian's voice was soft, but everyone heard it. As she spoke, the hull split in two. It didn't break apart all at once, but tore slowly. First a thin crack appeared midship, then widened, as if an invisible hand was prying the vessel apart. The fractured metal let out a piercing shriek. Sparks flashed briefly in the darkness before being swallowed by the surging seawater. The bow had fully sunk while the stern still jutted above the surface. The broken section in the middle gaped like a massive wound, with black seawater pouring in furiously. Then came the vortex. Not the slow spinning whirlpool seen in movies, but one that appeared abruptly. The sinking ship, weighing tens of thousands of tons, plunged into the deep. The sea, unable to fill the void, instantly rushed in from all directions, forming a rapidly spinning funnel. Everything on the surface drifted toward it, splintered with luggage, lifebuoys, and life rafts that hadn't rowed far enough. "Row! Row harder!" Lu Chen shouted. He paddled frantically away from the sinking ship, each stroke feeling like he was driving the blade into the seabed. The others rowed like mad. Lu Qianqian's arm muscles tightened like bowstrings. Chen Dudu gritted her teeth in silence. Even Zhao Maimei grabbed a paddle, her bare feet pressing against the raft floor, pulling with each stroke. In the distance, several life rafts couldn't escape. They were too close to the sinking ship, pulled back bit by the vortex's suction. The people on those rafts rowed desperately, but no matter how hard they tried, they were dragged backward. Lu Chen saw someone stand up on one raft, waving and shouting, but the wind scattered their voice, leaving nothing audible. That raft retreated faster and faster until it was sucked into the vortex's center and vanished into the churning water. "Don't look." Lu Chen's voice snapped everyone's attention back. "If you don't want to die, keep rowing." No one looked back. The sound of paddles striking water grew faster, denser. The life raft fled like a startled fish across the pitch-black sea. At last, after a strenuous effort, the life raft escaped the vortex's reach, and the women aboard wept tears of joy. Fatty D covered her mouth as tears welled up once more. Her tears fell onto the rubber bottom of the raft, mingling with the seawater, losing all shape. Nis eyes glistened with unshed tears, her atoms apple bobbing as if swallowing something. Yang Xiaomi bowed her head, hands clasped together, tears streaming wildly, her lips moving incessantly. No one caught what she murmured. Perhaps even she herself did not know. But her hands were clasped so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Zhao Silu lay on Li Qin's shoulder, sobbing softly. The cries were muffled as if stifled beneath a thick quilt, each one seeping out with a dull, persistent ache. Zhao Maimai and Xiao Tian sat together, their hands somehow intertwined, held fast. Xiao Tian's palm was cold, Zhao Maimei's warm, yet neither let go. Zhao Maimai turned her head to glance at Xiao Tian, whose expression remained vacant, but her hands squeezed back, with force gripping tightly. Lu Qianxi's expression was still relatively calm, but the moisture in her eyes betrayed her turbulent heart. Chen Dudu leaned against Sister Wang's shoulder, her eyes closed. Sister Wang held her with one arm, while the other slowly paddled stroke after stroke, like an ancient rhythmic beat. Gulnazer sat at the raft's edge, gazing at the distant horizon in silence. The sea breeze tousled her hair wildly, but she paid it no mind, staring straight ahead, as if looking at something far, far away. Lu Chen withdrew his gaze, lowered his head, and opened the system map in his mind. The cruise ship's marker was fading from the map. That blue dot representing the Oriental Star grew dimmer and dimmer until it vanished completely, as if erased by a rubber band. Ding! Disaster warning, the third wave peak will arrive in 10 minutes. Danger level 5 stars. Lu Chen took a deep breath. Sparsely across the blue backdrop, like grains of sand cast into the... Ding! Disaster warning, the third wave peak will arrive in 10 minutes. Danger level 5 stars. Lu Chen took a deep breath. 10 minutes left. He began a quick check of the raft's emergency supplies, 2 sealed plastic barrels, one with fresh water, the other with rations, and a first aid kit. There were also several oars stuck in the fixed rings along the raft's edge. Everyone tie the rope around your waist and grab the ropes along the raft side. He tried to keep his voice steady. We're not out of danger yet. The third tsunami wave will arrive in about 20 minutes. The raft will be pushed by the waves. You might be thrown off, but as long as you hold the rope, you won't be swept away. No one questioned him. No one asked, how do you know? Because they had all witnessed the power of the first two waves, had seen how the cruise ship was slowly devoured. At that moment, if anyone had stood up and said there are more waves coming, they would have believed it. They needed to believe. Fatty D tied her rope and gripped the line. Her hands were still trembling, but she held on tightly. And I wrapped the rope twice around her wrist, tied a knot, and gave it a firm tug. Xiao Tian helped Zhao Mai secure her rope. Zhao Mai looked down and nodded at her. Lu Xixi fastened her rope and said to Lu Chen, you too. Lu Chen froze for a moment, looked down at himself. His rope was still untied. He quickly wrapped the rope twice around his waist, tied a dead knot, then sat down and grabbed the rope along the raft's edge. Everyone was watching him. 11 pairs of eyes glowed in the darkness like stars in the night sky. Lu Chen looked at them and said something even he wasn't sure was true. We will all survive. Then he turned his gaze to the distant horizon. That white line was brightening and drawing closer. Lu Chen had seen waves countless times, in movies, documentaries, and stories of others. But when you truly face a wall of water tens of meters high bearing down on you, all imagination becomes absurd. That wasn't a wave, it was an entire ocean rising to its feet. Hold tight. He roared the words. Before the sound faded, the world transformed. The life raft was snatched up like a leaf by a giant hand, and everyone's bodies instantly lost weight. Screams were choked back by the wind, dissolving into a string of broken echoes. Lu Chen's stomach lurched violently, his vision a blur of sky and sea intertwined, indistinguishable. The first impact hurled the raft onto the crest of the wave. Water crashed down from all directions, not the gentle fall of rain, but a solid concrete-like assault capable of crushing bones. Lu Chen closed his eyes, clutching the rope with all his might, feeling as if he were stuffed into a colossal blender, spinning, tumbling, being torn apart. Salt water flooded his nose, ears, and mouth. He held his breath desperately, his chest about to burst. The raft was flipping. He could feel the raft's bottom turning over, the rubber and seawater colliding with a dull roar like being gnawed in the jaws of a giant beast. Someone was shouting, but the sound was swallowed by the waves, turning into a vague sob that seemed to come from far, far away. Then the second impact came. This time the raft was driven directly underwater. All around was white foam. No light, no sound. Lu Chen felt himself falling, sinking endlessly, the rope's tension cutting into his waist as if to cleave him in two. He didn't know which way was up or if he was still alive. The oxygen in his lungs was dwindling away. Just as he was about to open his mouth and choke, a tremendous force yanked him upward. The raft shot out from the depths like a cork squeezed too long. He gasped for air, and when it rushed back into his lungs, he felt it was the best breath of his life. He opened his eyes, and the first thing he did was not look at the waves, but count the people. The raft was nearly half full of water. Everyone was still there, still holding the ropes. Fatty D lay face down on the raft's bottom, her face buried in her arms, her body trembling violently. Nis hair was plastered over her face as she spat out water, but her hands never let go. Zhao Mai clung to Xiao Tian, the two entwined like a tightly twisted rope. Chen Dudu was crying loudly, but her voice was as faint as a mosquito's buzz against the roar of the waves. The second wave is coming. Before Lu Chen could even shout the words, another wall arrived. This time the raft was hurled even higher. He felt himself flying, the rope stretched to its limit, his body suspended midair with churning white foam below and a gray-black sky above. In that instant, it was utterly silent, as if all sound had been sucked away, time frozen. Then gravity. The raft slammed heavily onto the water's surface, and Lu Chen's back struck the rubber bottom, the pain darkening his vision. Then came another roll, water surging in from all sides, enveloping him completely. He heard a tearing sound, very faint, very brief, but in that chaotic world, it was as clear as a needle. Help! Someone cried, but the voice was quickly swallowed by the next wave. Time became meaningless. Perhaps minutes passed, perhaps an eternity. Finally, the waves began to subside. The raft stopped tumbling, rocking violently instead, pushed up and sliding down like a swing. The rain continued, but the wave heights visibly decreased. Lu Chen shivered all over, his teeth chattering incessantly. He slowly raised his head. The 11 were still there, but in a wretched state. Lu Xixi, barely holding on, pulled the unconscious Ni and Gulnazer into her embrace. Beside her, young Xiaomi and Fatty D lay disheveled, soaked in seawater, their fate uncertain. Xiao Tian, Zhao Mai, and Zhao Silu were tangled together in a heap, motionless. Though unconscious, Sister Wang still clung tightly to Duda's waist. Duda, though awake, could only utter pain. Li Xian, seemingly delicate surprisingly, remained alert, checking the ropes for security. Lu Chen twitched the corner of his mouth into an ugly smile at her, then closed his eyes to silently recover his strength. Ding! Disaster warning. The fourth wave peak will arrive in 15 minutes with waves exceeding 10 meters in height, danger level 3, covering the entire sea area with no shelter to evade. According to system calculations, it is recommended that the host paddle the life raft southwest. The greater the distance traveled, the higher the survival probability. Before Lu Chen could recover his strength, a new system alert followed. Hearing that survival was possible to the southwest, Lu Chen forced himself to continue paddling with all his might. Liu Xixi cast a puzzled glance at Lu Chen, then picked up her oar and began paddling as well, though she didn't know why she trusted his judgment. With both of them paddling together, the life raft's speed increased significantly. 15 minutes later, the fourth wave arrived as predicted. This time Lu Chen couldn't hold on either and fell unconscious. Thus, the 12 people on the life raft were swept by wave after wave into the unknown depths of the ocean. Hiss, where is this? After an unknown amount of time, Lu Chen finally awoke. He rubbed his groggy head, his fingertips clearly feeling the throbbing blood vessels at his temples, as if countless needles were pricking him. With effort, he turned his neck and surveyed his surroundings. His pupils abruptly contracted. He was lying on a strange beach, the fine sand beneath him warm and soft, yet the others had vanished. He quickly got up and scanned the sea along the shoreline, finally spotting that familiar orange-yellow color in the shallow waters a few hundred meters away. Without a second thought, he rushed toward the shallows. The cold seawater soon rose past his ankles, then his calves and waist. The waves gently lapped against his body, carrying a hint of chill, yet it couldn't dampen his excitement. He staggered toward the life raft, each step filling him with more anticipation mingled with a trace of unease. He both hoped everyone inside was safe and feared opening it to find lifeless bodies. The water gradually reached his waist, the cold soaking through his clothes, weighing them down against his skin. He paid it no heed, quickening his pace toward the orange life raft. Finally, he arrived beside the life raft. Its door was half open, and the sight inside made Lu Chen's heart race instantly. Inside lay 11 figures, their fates uncertain. Their gowns were drenched by seawater, clinging tightly to their bodies, outlining slender forms. Their faces were as pale as paper, devoid of any color, eyes shut tight, lips cracked, lying motionless in the raft, as if they had lost all signs of life. Lu Chen's heart tightened. He stepped forward, quickly crouched down, and carefully reached out to check their breaths. His fingertips touched faint, warm breaths brushing against his skin. Alive. They were still alive. Lu Chen nearly cried out in excitement, his suspended heart instantly settling. He didn't dare delay, immediately pulling the raft ashore and then gently carrying each person out. Once, twice, 3 times. Until the last trip, Lu Chen finally brought everyone onto the beach. He laid them flat and immediately began administering first aid one by one. He recalled the maritime first aid knowledge had learned from the system. First, tilt the head to one side, clear seawater and debris from the mouth and nose, then place hands overlapping to press on the chest, performing rescue breathing and chest compressions. He started rescue breathing one after another, pinching noses, pressing his lips to theirs, blowing air, then pressing on chests. His mind held only one thought: to save them. As for how soft the lips beneath his were or how pronounced the curves under his palms, he had no mind to distinguish. But he didn't notice that the women he revived were staring at him with wide eyes. The first to wake was Liu Xixi. She turned her head to spit out seawater, propped herself up on the sand, and then saw Lu Chen leaning over Yang Xiaomi, lips to lips, hands pressing on her chest. Her movements paused. Her gaze swept over the scene and then quickly shifted away. No scream, no accusation. She only gently touched her own lips with her fingers, where a strange warmth and salty taste still lingered. The tips of her ears reddened, then she resumed her usual calm, unhurried composure. Then, imitating Lu Chen, she began administering aid to those nearby. When Yang Xiaomi woke, her vision blurred into focus, and the first thing she saw was Lu Chen's face inches away. She could feel the weight of his palm pressing on her chest, see the water droplets clinging to his eyelashes. She didn't speak. As Lu Chen straightened up, she turned her head and wiped the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand. The motion was quick, almost instinctive, but her breathing was unsteady, her chest heaving heavily, not entirely from choking. When Shun Dudu woke, tears came before consciousness. Before she even opened her eyes, a tear slid down from the corner, followed by a violent cough. Lu Chen supported her, patting her back. She leaned against his arm, her body still trembling. When she saw who was holding her, her first reaction was to shrink back like a startled little animal. Then she looked down at her soaked gown, the collar wrinkled, and open, faint palm prints visible on her chest. Her face flushed crimson, the pink spreading down to her neck. She quickly gathered her collar, lowered her eyes, her lashes trembling violently. Her lips moved, but in the end she said nothing. Peng Di woke while Lu Chen was performing rescue breathing on her. Her consciousness returned the moment his lips touched hers, not because of his breath, but because of the faint warmth of his lips against her icy ones, a stark contrast. She abruptly opened her eyes, meeting Lu Chen's face inches away. Their lips were still pressed together, their breaths intertwining. Pang Di froze for a full 2 seconds before letting out a muffled "nm," jerking her head back so hard she nearly hit the sand. Her face flushed as if it might bleed. She clutched her collar tightly, her wide eyes staring, her lips trembling for a long time before she managed you, and then trailed off. It wasn't anger, it was panic. Panic so intense, she didn't know what to say. Nini's reaction upon waking was the most restrained. When she opened her eyes, Lu Chen was pinching her nose, about to give a third breath, his lips just 2 centimeters away. She didn't scream or recoil. Her gaze simply shifted from unfocused to sharp, then she slowly turned her head, evading that 2-centimeter gap. The movement was so slow it seemed to drain all her strength. Her eyes suddenly reddened, but no tears. She sat up, smoothed her open collar with steady fingers, one by one fastening buttons that didn't exist, merely pulling the fabric together and clutching it in her hand. Her ears burned red, yet her expression remained that controlled, taut calm. When Xiao Tian woke, her first action wasn't to cough, but to wipe her mouth fiercely with the back of her hand. After wiping, she turned her head to spit out water, lying prone on the sand, her shoulders heaving violently. Lu Chen reached out to help her, but she instinctively dodged, then sat up on her own, burying her face in her knees. The exposed nape of her neck was entirely pink, but she never once looked at Lu Chen, nor did she utter a single word. Gulinaza's reaction upon waking was the most intriguing. When she opened her eyes, Lu Chen was brushing the hair from her face. Her gaze locked onto him, those deep eyes swirling with too many emotions: anger, shame, embarrassment. All of them, and yet not entirely. She stared for several seconds, then sat up, expressionlessly sweeping her wet long hair over her shoulder with a large, almost defiant gesture. But her fingers trembled and her breathing was uneven. She didn't wipe her mouth or adjust her collar, just sat upright, staring at the sea without a word. Yet the tips of her ears, only the tips, were red as if about to bleed. Liu Xixi was the last to be revived. She had been unconscious the deepest, and Lu Chen nearly exhausted his last ounce of strength to save her. When she opened her eyes, her first reaction wasn't to cough, but to grab Lu Chen's wrist with such force that her nails nearly dug into his flesh. Her eyes stared straight at him, her lips moving several times, but no sound escaping. Then, as if suddenly realizing she was gripping him, she released him abruptly. She turned her head away, 2 unnatural blotches of red rising on her cheeks, stark against her pale complexion. She didn't speak, merely adjusted her collar, folded her hands on her knees, and sat upright. 8 women, 8 different reactions. Yet not one of them turned hostile. Why? Because they were not naive. They were veterans of the entertainment industry, having weathered storms and witnessed the darkest depths of human nature. They understood better than anyone what a life-saving person meant in this desolate, godforsaken place. More importantly, they had looked down on Lu Chen, but that was in the normal world. In that world, they were beings adored by millions under the spotlight, while he was just an ordinary man from nowhere. Superiority was etched into their bones. It wouldn't vanish with a mere shipwreck. But when the waves knocked them unconscious, plunged them into the icy sea, and tossed them onto the beach like rag dolls, all that superiority was soaked away. Upon waking, only one thought remained in their minds: I am alive. And being alive was because of this man. Yang Xiaomi was the first to speak. She sat on the sand, pushing her wet hair aside, her voice hoarse but steady. Thank you. Just 2 words, no extra explanation, no awkward avoidance. She didn't even look at Lu Chen, just gazed at the sea and said it calmly. But her fingers unconsciously twisted the fabric of her skirt over and over. Liu Yifei followed with a soft, but clear, you worked hard. As she spoke, she finally glanced at Lu Chen, just a glance, then quickly looked away. That glance held gratitude, embarrassment, and something she herself couldn't define. Chen Dudu blushed and murmured a quiet thank you, her voice so soft it seemed afraid the sea breeze would hear. After speaking, she buried her face in Sister Wang's shoulder like a child who had done wrong. Fatty D wanted to say something, her lips moving several times, but she only managed Sister Me. I'm thirsty, successfully shifting the topic. Yang Xiaomi glanced at her, but didn't call her out. Nini stood up, brushed the sand off her skirt, and said steadily, I saw some fresh water supplies on the life raft. They'll get them. As Nini turned toward the life raft, she paused beside Liu Yifei and whispered, we owe him a life. Liu Yifei didn't respond, but nodded. Xiao Tian remained silent. She stood up, barefoot, limping toward the life raft to help search for supplies. Her movements were brisk, her face expressionless, just like before at sea. But Lu Chen noticed that as she passed him, her steps quickened noticeably. Gulinaza stood up, patted the sand off herself, walked up to Lu Chen, and stared straight at him for several seconds. Then she reached out, not for a handshake, but to pat his shoulder with considerable force that made him sway. Without a word, she turned and walked away. But after a few steps, she suddenly paused, tilted her head, and said in a voice only the two could hear, forget what happened earlier. With that, she walked off, her ears still red. Liu Xixi was the last to stand. She approached Lu Chen and gave him a deep look. That look held too much, gratitude, embarrassment, awkwardness, and an indescribable complexity. Then she slightly bent her waist, not a bow, just a very light dip of her head. "Thank you for saving me." Her voice was soft, but each word was clear. She straightened up, turned, and walked toward the others. So no one turned hostile. Not because they lacked superiority, but because superiority meant nothing in the face of life and death. They could look down on Lu Chen, but they couldn't deny he had saved their lives. In that moment, the grace of saving a life outweighed everything. As for lips touching lips, hands pressing against chests, everyone tacitly chose to forget, or rather pretend to forget. Sister Wang stood aside, looking from one to another, and finally couldn't help asking, "What's wrong with all of you? Why are your faces so red?" Zhao Maimai nodded in agreement. "Yeah, are you heat-struck? Want some water?" Zhao Silu was more direct, walking up to Lu Yifei and reaching out to feel her forehead. "Sister Yifei, do you have a fever? Your forehead isn't hot, so why is your face so red?" The three of them had been revived by Lu Yifei, so they were baffled by the others' reactions. No one answered. The sea breeze swept across the beach, carrying a fine spray of golden sand. Yang Xiaomi looked at Lu Yifei, and Lu Yifei looked back. Neither said a word, but it seemed everything was set. Fatty D nestled beside Yang Xiaomi and muttered, "Sister me, I think. He's not that annoying after all." Yang Xiaomi didn't reply, but the corner of her mouth twitched slightly. It wasn't a smile, just a twitch. As for the reactions of the group, Lu Chen couldn't quite define his feelings. Annoyance, unease, indifference. Lu Chen cast aside his tangled thoughts, silently called upon the system, and a blue attribute panel appeared in his mind, scrollable for the first time as he examined it in detail. Page 1. Host Lu Chen talents: calm, not easily swayed by emotions; affinity, easier to gain others' favor; arm of Qilin, strong practical skills; intelligence, strong learning ability. Page 2. Disaster warning system: the system will warn of major disasters in advance. Current warnings, none. Note: the system only warns of major disasters, not individual incidents. Host is advised to stay safety conscious. Page 3. Bonded target: Lu Yifei talents: calm, beautiful, exceptional appearance; intelligence, language, effortless learning of other languages; health, resistant to illness; bond value 15, friendly. Affection level: stranger 0-10, friendly 10-30, closed 30-50, trust 50-70, devoted 70100. Bonded target: Chun Dudu talents: scholar, advanced intelligence, beautiful, empathetic, easily understands others; kind, inner kindness; resilient, not easily discouraged; mechanic, skilled in mechanical design and manufacturing; bond value 19, friendly. Bonded target: Sister Wang talents: outstanding, striking appearance, efficient, does not procrastinate; financial, good at managing money. Intelligence, bond value 12, friendly. Bonded target: Yang Xiaomi talents: beautiful, intelligence, confidence, coordination, good at macro management; health, handicraft, skilled in making handicrafts; bond value 15, friendly. Bonded target: Li Xian talents: calm, beautiful, intelligence, elegance. Seeing the talent panels of these female celebrities, Lu Chen finally understood what it meant to be a favored daughter of heaven, a dragon among men. Page 4. System shop: bond points 1001, 101, 10320 points, 100 points awarded for initial system activation, 10 points per bonded target, 10 points per bond level upgrade. Item list: fire by friction 10 points, basic shelter blueprint 20 points, basic water purifier blueprint 20 points, basic tool making 50 points, basic logging 50 points, basic fishing 50 points, basic hunting 50 points, basic smelting 100 points, basic prospecting 50 points, basic gathering 50 points. The merchandise in the shop was dazzling in its variety, but all required a substantial amount of bond value, and his meager bond value was far from sufficient for any purchase. After a quick scan of the system, Lu Chen instinctively glanced up at the sky. The sun had begun its westward descent. The golden light over the sea was receding, and time was running out for him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down, and re-examined the blue panel in his mind. These talents, he had never seriously sorted them out before. Chen Duda's mechanics, Yang Xiaomi's coordination, Xiao Tian's martial arts, Zhao Silas archery and horsemanship. Each one taken alone seemed like a cheat code, but right now everyone was hungry and injured, and these talents were utterly useless. They had to survive first. Lu Chen clenched his fists and spoke to the women sitting behind the reef. "It's going to be dark soon. It's not safe out in the open. We must build a shelter before sunset." A dozen pairs of eyes turned to him, but the response was not action, but silence. The first to speak, leaning against the reef, her lips chapped, her voice hoarse, yet carrying a habitual scrutiny, "Build a shelter. Do you even know how?" Her tone wasn't provocative, but a professional instinct. On set, she was the coordinator, and any plan that came to her had to be dissected and evaluated. But at this moment, that tone grated on the ears of the others. "He's right. We can't just sleep in the open." Liu Xixi spoke up, her voice faint. "Do you have a specific plan?" Lu Chen took a deep breath and ran the system blueprint through his mind. "There's a forest over there. We can cut wood to build a shelter." He scanned the area and spotted an ideal location. "That spot is suitable for building a shelter." "Cut tree." Chen Dudu sat up, propping herself on her arms. Her injured foot kept her immobile, but her mind raced. Do you have tools? You can't just smash them with stones, and even if you did, how long would it take to fell a single tree? It's almost dark. I have a way, Lu Chen said. What way? Yang Xiaomi pressed. Unable to say the system taught me. Lu Chen could only steel himself. I learned from outdoor shows. Pang Di muttered under her breath. A cameraman learns that. The atmosphere grew tense. No one moved. Zhao Silu leaned against Liu Xixi, her lips still trembling. But I really can't walk anymore. Gulnazer hugged her knees, staring at the ground, her voice muffled. I can't move either. Can't we just do it tomorrow? Nini glanced at the others and said nothing. Lu Chen clenched his fists, suppressing his rising irritation. I know you're tired. I'm tired too. But it will be even colder after dark. Without shelter, without food, we won't make it through the night. So what do you think? Gulnazer stood up, brushing the sand off her skirt, her tone neither soft nor hard. Everyone is exhausted. Even if we work, how much strength can we muster? The words sounded reasonable, but Lu Chen detected the underlying meaning. She didn't want to move. He said no more, his disappointment reaching its peak as he turned and walked toward the edge of the dense forest. He'll go cut the trees. Do as you please. Xiao Tian followed him, and Liu Xixi also stood up. The rest exchanged glances. Yang Xiaomi bit her lip. She didn't follow him, but headed in the opposite direction. That man was right. Rather than waiting for nightfall, it was better to do something. Pang Di watched Yang Xiaomi's retreating figure side and silently followed. The others exchanged looks and then hurried after Yang Xiaomi. On the other side, Lu Chen opened the system shop. He stared at basic lumberjacking 50 points and basic shelter blueprint 20 points for 2 seconds, gritted his teeth, and chose to exchange. In the next instant, a warm stream of information surged into his mind, not granting him strength directly, but transmitting a complete set of lumberjacking techniques. He flexed his wrists. The hands the system called Kylan arms were now faintly warm. He also exchanged for basic tool crafting, and his mind filled with methods for making simple tools. Finding a relatively sharp stone, a few dry branches, and a piece of vine. In less than 10 minutes, he had fashioned a simple stone axe. He found a tree as thick as a bowl, swung the stone axe, and brought it down. The first blow split the bark, the second the third. Each swing was more precise than the last, and the felling efficiency grew rapidly. As another tree trunk crashed to the ground, he heard a scattered sound of footsteps behind him. Yang Xiaomi approached with several women carrying a few pieces of wet seaweed and some seashells. All the food they had managed to find nearby. That's all, Yang Xiaomi said, her expression grim. There's nothing on the beach. Lu Chen glanced at the seaweed and said nothing. He had anticipated this. The beach had just been scoured by the tsunami. Any edible shellfish had been swept away, leaving only dead ones, or those hidden in reef crevices beyond the reach of their current strength. Set them aside for now, he said. Come help move the timber. The women caught the harshness in Lu Chen's tone. Though displeased, they knew this was no time for tantrums, so they silently worked together to carry the timber to the spot Lu Chen had indicated. Chen Dudu limped over, crouched beside the tree trunk, and gestured with her fingers on the wood. A triangle is the most stable, but it needs lashing. Do we have rope? Yes, brought from the boat. Then he'll do the lashing. Chen Dudu reached for the rope. I studied mechanical design in college. I should be good at this. Her tone was not a question, but a statement. Lu Chen didn't argue. Fine. You do the lashing. They'll cut more wood. Chen Dudu was taken aback. She had expected him to refuse, or at least question her. But he didn't, which left her feeling a bit awkward. She lowered her head and began tying the rope, a strange, uneasy feeling stirring in her heart. The lashing process was not smooth. Chen Dudu had solid theoretical knowledge, but her hands were pale from the seawater, her knuckles stiff, and she couldn't muster enough strength to tighten the knots. A simple square knot took her 3 tries to get right. This direction is wrong. Yang Xiaomi walked over and examined the frame. The wind blows from the sea at night. Are you trying to freeze us by facing the opening toward the water? Nini, standing nearby, checked the direction and realized she was right. Then let's turn it, she said. Turn it. It's already half-deed. Chen Dudu snapped, looking up. Yang Xiaomi didn't argue. Instead, she walked around to the back of the frame. You don't have to undo it all. Just adjust the direction of the 2 back poles, and the opening will be sheltered from the wind. Yang Xiaomi crouched down and reached for the rope. Her fingers were more agile than Chen Dudu's, but she moved too quickly and pulled too hard. The rope slipped from her grasp and snapped against Gulnazer's face. SSS. Gulnazer covered her face, her brow furrowed in pain. Watch where you're going. I didn't mean to, Yang Xiaomi said, but her tone lacked any real apology. All right, stop arguing. Liu Xixi walked over, pressing down on the rope with her uninjured hand. He'll tie the knots. You two hold the poles. Gulnazer shot Yang Xiaomi a look, but said nothing, silently holding the pole. When Lu Chen returned dragging a second bundle of tree trunks, this was the scene. Before him, a group of people fumbling with the lashing, with poles falling left and right, their efficiency appallingly low. Half an hour had passed, and they hadn't even managed to erect a complete frame. He set down the timber, walked over, and gave it a gentle push. The loose frame clattered to the ground. "What are you doing?" Gulnazer, already seething, saw Lu Chen knock over the frame they had struggled so long to build, and her anger flared. Lu Chen said nothing. He simply bent down, reinserted the fallen poles into the ground, stomped the gravel and sand firm around them, then took the rope from Chen Duda's hand. With a few deft moves, he tied a knot, pulled it tight, and secured it. The entire process took less than 2 minutes, and a stable triangular frame stood upright. Gulnazer opened her mouth as if to speak, but in the end she only pressed her lips together tightly. Yang Xiaomi stood nearby, watching Lu Chen's efficient movements. A thought suddenly struck her: without him, this group of women might have to spend the night out in the cold. But the thought flickered only for an instant before she suppressed it. The sun sank another notch. By the time Lu Chen placed the last crossbeam on the roof, the sky had turned a dark orange. The shelter was barely taking shape. A sloping shed made of tree trunks and palm leaves enclosed on 3 sides, with one opening just enough to squeeze in 12 people. He straightened up, every muscle in his body aching, his palms blistered from the work. "Come in and try," he said. The women filed in. The space was more spacious than expected, but the ground was bare earth, damp and cold. "Sleep like this," Zhao Silu whispered. "Let's just get through tonight first," Lu Chen said, leaning against the pillar at the entrance, catching his breath. "We'll figure things out tomorrow." Zhao Maimai huddled in the innermost corner, hugging her knees, muttering softly. "How are we supposed to sleep on this ground? It's all mud and there are bugs." Her voice wasn't loud, but the shed was so quiet that everyone heard her clearly. Zhao Silu gently touched her arm, signaling her to stop. But Zhao Maimai, having bottled up her grievances all day, let her resentment burst forth like a floodgate. "I didn't say anything wrong. I'm cold and hungry, my legs are covered in mosquito bites, and I don't even have a sip of water." As she spoke, her voice started to choke with tears. Fatty D also sighed and quietly added, "If only we could have some hot water." "Enough." Yang Xiaomi's voice came from the darkness, not loud but icy cold. "Can complaints fill your stomach?" Zhao Maimai was choked up, her mouth pursed, and she dared not speak again. But Gulnazer was displeased. She sat up from the corner, her tone clearly laced with anger. "What's wrong with her saying a few words? Who isn't suffering? Do you think you're her mother, having to control everything?" Yang Xiaomi remained silent. In the darkness, her expression was unreadable, but one could sense her struggling to suppress her emotions. "Let's all say less," Sister Wang stepped in to mediate. "Now is not the time for quarreling." "Then when is a?" Gulnazer didn't intend to back down. "When we're dead of hunger tomorrow." Those words were a bit harsh. The atmosphere in the shed plummeted to freezing point. Lu Chen had been leaning against the pillar at the entrance, eyes closed as if resting or listening. When they finished arguing, he spoke slowly, his voice not loud, but each word as heavy as a stone. "Are you done?" No one answered. "You can keep arguing," he said. "Argue until dawn if you want. But tomorrow someone still has to chop wood, find water, and start a fire. If you think arguing can keep you alive, go ahead." He paused, his tone devoid of emotion, even carrying a hint of nonchalance. "Of course, you can also figure things out on your own. After all, you're all big stars. Such a small matter shouldn't be too hard for you, right?" The shed fell silent, leaving only the sound of breathing. Those words pierced everyone's heart like needles. Not because they were harsh, but because they were the truth. They truly were incapable of anything. Lu Chen had cut the trees, Lu Chen had built the shed, and Lu Chen had tied the ropes. Apart from complaining and arguing, they had contributed nothing. Zhao Maimai buried her face in her knees, her shoulders trembling slightly, whether from crying or holding back tears. Gulnazer's lips were pressed into a thin line, her chest heaving violently, but she didn't retort, because she couldn't. Yang Xiaomi's fingers were clenched tightly around her skirt, her knuckles white. What she hated most was being called useless, but at that moment she couldn't utter a single word. In the darkness, Chen Dudu suddenly whispered, "Tomorrow. They'll help you tie the ropes. They'll make sure it's tight this time." Lu Chen didn't reply, only softly hummed in acknowledgement. The shed fell silent again. No one complained, no one argued. The waves crashed against the shore one after another, as if sighing for everyone. Night finally settled in completely. No one could sleep. It wasn't that they didn't want to, it was that they didn't dare. The earlier terror had seared a deep scar into everyone's nerves like a red-hot branding iron. The shipwreck, the waves, the life raft, the whirlpool. These images looped repeatedly in their minds like a broken projector, impossible to shut off. Every time they closed their eyes, they could feel the suffocating sensation of seawater filling their mouths and noses, and their bodies would tremble involuntarily. Zhao Maimai huddled in the deepest corner, burying her face in her knees, her shoulders shaking slightly. She wasn't crying, she had cried enough today, her tears long since dried up. It was an uncontrollable fear seeping from the very marrow of her bones. She didn't dare close her eyes. Closing them brought only darkness and the roar of water. She kept her eyes open, staring at the starlight filtering through the gaps in the palm leaves, as if to confirm she was still alive. Zhao Silu was beside her, one hand gently patting Zhao Meimei's back rhythmically softly. She was trembling herself, but she felt she couldn't let Maimai see. Zhao Silu bit her lip, her gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the entrance, her mind replaying one thought over and over. What about tomorrow? What about the day after? Will anyone come to rescue us? Her lips moved slightly as if in prayer or talking to herself, but no sound. Liu Xixi leaned against Zhao Silas' other side. She wasn't patting anyone, nor was she speaking. She just sat quietly, her gaze fixed on her injured arm. The wound still ached, throbbing intermittently, as if someone were slowly pricking it with a needle. She remembered carrying Zhao Silu on her back, while climbing down during the day, the wound on her arm repeatedly torn by the sharp edges of the iron ladder, causing her vision to blur with pain. But she didn't let go then. Now thinking back, she herself didn't know where that strength came from. She lowered her head and gently pressed the skin around the wound with her other hand. It was burning hot, it might be inflamed. She didn't tell anyone. Fatty D was the most afraid of the dark. Normally she even needed a night light to sleep. But now lying beside Yang Xiaomi, she was surrounded by complete darkness. She could hear the sound of the waves, steady and rhythmic, like some enormous creature breathing. She could also hear the chirping of insects and the rustling of leaves from somewhere unknown. This island wasn't dead, it was alive with its own sounds and rhythms. Fatty D curled herself into a tiny ball, her hands tightly gripping Yang Xiaomi's clothes, her knuckles white. Her eyes were wide open. She dared not close them, afraid that closing them would let the darkness swallow her. Sister me. Her voice was barely a whisper, squeezed from her throat, trembling noticeably. Are you asleep? No. Yang Xiaomi's voice was soft and steady, but only she knew how fast her heart was racing. Do you think? There might be wild animals. Fatty D's voice grew even softer, almost a breath. I've heard that on islands. There are wild boars and stuff. Yang Xiaomi was silent for 2 seconds. Of course she had thought about that too. She had even thought of worse things. Were there snakes? Any highly venomous? The island seemed deserted, but a deserted island didn't mean it was devoid of life. During the day, she had noticed faint traces in the bushes behind the beach, as if left by some small animal passing through. She hadn't told anyone because saying it would be useless and only make everyone more afraid. No, there won't be. Yang Xiaomi said, her tone so firm that even she herself was surprised. There wasn't much scientific basis for this statement, but in the darkness, any word of certainty was a lifeline. Fatty D squeezed closer to her, almost clinging to her, as if drawing a sense of security from her. Yang Xiaomi didn't push her away. She even reached out and gently guided Fatty D's head onto her shoulder, her chin resting on top of her head. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. She didn't dare to fully shut them. Not out of fear, but because she felt a responsibility to stay vigilant. Who gave her that responsibility? No one. But she simply felt that if even she fell asleep, what would happen to these people? Chen Dudu did not squeeze into the midst of the crowd. She lay on the outer edge next to Lu Chen. Her ankle still throbbed. She had twisted it during the day while sliding down the iron ladder. It hadn't seemed severe at the time, but now that she was resting, the swelling and pain had intensified. She could feel her ankle constricted, pulsing with a dull ache. She did not cry out in pain. She merely bit her lip and gently elevated her injured leg, resting it on a stone she had picked up. Her movements were subtle, careful not to draw attention from those nearby. But Sister Wang noticed. Sister Wang leaned out from the crowd, glanced at Duda's ankle, and furrowed her brow. She said nothing, only picked up a flatter stone from the side, replaced the one under Duda's foot, and adjusted it more securely, trying to offer her some comfort. Sister Wang. I'm fine. Chen Duda's voice was a bit hoarse. Sleep. Sister Wang replied, her tone as brisk as issuing a work order, yet the concern within it was unmistakably genuine. Chen Dudu gazed at Sister Wang's profile, her lips parting as if to speak, but in the end no words came out. She lowered her head, a faint sting of tears at the tip of her nose. Liu Xixi could not sleep, nor did she want to. Not out of fear, at least she didn't think she was afraid. Her mind was simply a tangled mess, like a ball of yarn mauled by a cat, impossible to unravel. She recalled the moment she slid down the iron ladder during the day, her bare feet on the cold, slick metal rungs, and Lu Chen's shout from below, "They'll catch you all down here." She remembered those words clearly, not a single syllable off, because they were the only thing she could cling to in that instant. She didn't know why she kept thinking about that sentence. Perhaps she was just too exhausted, her mind clouded. She attributed this thought to fatigue. Gully Nana lay on the other side of Pang Di, facing the canopy, staring at the patch of inky blue night sky visible through the gaps in the palm leaves. She wasn't crowding anyone nor leaning on anyone's shoulder. She lay flat on her back, hands folded over her stomach, eyes open, breathing steadily. She looked as if she were asleep, but those who knew her well would recognize that she never slept so quietly and flat. Gully Nana usually tossed and turned in her sleep, hugged her pillow, and buried her face in the blanket. This posture was clearly a pretense. She was thinking about one thing. When she jumped from the iron ladder during the day, her knee had scraped against the deck, tearing off a large patch of skin. It hadn't hurt much then, and she had simply stood up and walked away. But now the wound on her knee pulsed with a sharp stabbing pain under the warmth of the fire, as if reminding her, "You are not made of iron." She had never been injured. Not just never seriously injured, but even something as minor as a scraped knee had almost never happened in her memory. She had always been the kind of person who was meticulously protected, with others paving the way and shielding her from every bump and scrape. But today she had jumped without a second thought. Looking back now, she found it incredible herself. Gully Nana touched the wound on her knee, her fingertips met the rough surface of the scab, and the pain made her wince slightly. She withdrew her hand, placed it over her heart, and continued to stare at the gap in the canopy. In that patch of inky blue night sky, a single star shone brightly, twinkling. She gazed at that star for so long that her eyes began to sting. She did not blink. Xiao Tian clasped her hands together, thumbs rubbing unconsciously. She heard Zhao Maimei sobbing softly in a corner, and Zhao Silu comforting her in a low voice. She heard Peng Di call out, "Sister me," her voice laced with obvious fear. She heard Yang Xiaomi reply in a tone that feigned absolute fearlessness, "It won't happen." She also heard Sister Wang's concern for Chen Dudu. These sounds mingled together, weaving a fine, dense net in the darkness, enveloping everyone within. Xiao Tian felt that this island was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was, after the sun rose tomorrow, what would they do? She didn't know the answer, so she continued drawing circles. Nini was not asleep. She lay on the ground, eyes half up and half closed. The scratch on her face was still there, the blood dried into a thin brown line stretching from her left cheekbone to her earlobe. She hadn't wiped it off or treated it. When Lu Xixi asked if she needed a bandage during the day, she said, "No need." Now the wound no longer hurt much, but it itched as if something were crawling beneath her skin. She didn't scratch it, only furrowed her brow occasionally. She was thinking about what happened on the life raft during the day, not about how they escaped. That part of the memory she didn't want to recall. She was thinking about the feeling she had when she saw Liu Xixi as the four of them emerged from the corridor corner. They had worked together on a film before, but weren't close. They hadn't even exchanged WeChat contacts. But in that moment, seeing a familiar face. How to describe it? It was like a drowning person suddenly grabbing a piece of driftwood. It wasn't emotion, it was instinct. Nini didn't know why she was thinking about these things. Perhaps it was because it was too quiet enough for her mind to start playing random chaotic thoughts. Sister Wang leaned against a pillar next to Zhao Maimei, eyes closed, breathing evenly. But her hand kept moving. Her right thumb repeatedly rubbed against the second knuckle of her index finger, back and forth, as if polishing something. It was a nervous habit she knew she had, but she couldn't control it. Lu Chen was also not asleep. He lay on the ground facing the outside of the shelter, hands resting in front of him, palms up, fingers slightly curled, afraid to clench them. Clenching would bring pain. The blisters on his palms had been rubbed raw by the sand, revealing pink, tender flesh that stung fiercely when exposed to the air. He was thinking about the system. The system had said, the island after nightfall will face a new crisis, but so far aside from the darkness and cold, nothing had happened. He wasn't sure if this was good or bad. Perhaps the crisis hadn't arrived yet, or perhaps the crisis the system referred to was the mental breakdown of these women. If so, the crisis had already begun. He heard someone crying in the shelter, the sound very soft, suppressed, but in the silence of the night no sound could be. He also heard someone comforting in a low voice, someone sighing, someone tossing and turning. These sounds mingled together, making him feel that this shelter was not a sanctuary, but more like a cage crammed with injured animals. He didn't know what he could do. He had cut trees, built the shelter, and done his utmost. But it was far from enough. Tomorrow they would need water, food, and a more secure dwelling. Every item was a challenge, each requiring strength and luck. Lu Chen closed his eyes, then opened them again. He dared not sleep. Not out of fear, or rather he too had things he feared. He feared waking up tomorrow to find someone missing, feared someone falling ill or injured with no medicine to treat them, feared that this island had no source of fresh water, feared that rescue would never find them. These thoughts burrowed through his mind like insects, impossible to drive away. He took a deep breath, focusing his attention on his breathing. Inhale, exhale, inhale again, exhale again. Gradually his heartbeat slowed. He did not move, because moving would bump into the person behind him. Chen Dudu, who had somehow crept closer, probably driven by the night's chill, instinctively seeking warmth. He could feel her body warmth seeping through the thin fabric, warm, yet laced with fine tremors. It wasn't intimacy, it was fear, a desperate craving for warmth and extreme unease. Lu Chen gently and slowly exhaled, drawing his arms in tighter to minimize contact. Then he closed his eyes and silently recited to himself, "Tomorrow, we'll deal with it tomorrow." The sky was not yet fully light, the first rays of dawn filtering through the gaps in the palm leaves were a pale gray, like a thin veil draped over every face. Lu Chen was jolted awake by the cold. It was not the gradual awakening from a light sleep, but a bone-deep, inescapable chill that forcefully dragged him from the depths of unconsciousness. Opening his eyes, he found his t-shirt still damp and clinging to his skin. The sand on his back had been warmed slightly by his body heat, but everywhere else was cold. Turning his head, he saw Chengdu had somehow edged closer to him during the night, her shoulder pressed against his arm. Her breathing was steady, but her brows were slightly furrowed, as if she were caught in an unpleasant dream. He gently pulled his arm free, moving slowly inch by inch, careful not to wake her. Chengdu muttered a vague, sleepy word in her dream, then turned over her face, now facing the other way. Lu Chen sat up, flexing his stiff neck, the joints emitting faint clicks. 11 women lay scattered haphazardly within the shelter, each in a different pose, but they all shared one thing. Every single one of them was shivering. It was not a violent, obvious trembling, but a subtle, continuous shudder, as if something were relentlessly pounding them from within. Zhao Maimei was curled into a tight ball, her lips pale, her facial skin taut and drained of all color. Gulanaza's eyelashes were beaded with tiny droplets. Not tears, but the night's moisture condensed by the cold. Yang Xiaomi's eyes were half open, she hadn't actually slept, only resting with her eyes closed. Hearing Lu Chen rise, her gaze followed his movements, but she said nothing. Lu Chen stepped outside the shelter and took a deep breath of the morning air. The sea breeze was much gentler than during the night, carrying a damp scent of earth and humus. The distant sea was a grayish blue, the waves gentle lapping at the sand like a tired tongue. He looked down at his hands. The blisters on his palms after a night of friction had burst in several places, revealing pink, tender flesh that stung fiercely when touched by the air. He opened the system interface. A pale blue light screen materialized before his retinas, the shop list arranged in rows. He scrolled down and found fire-making skill beginner priced at 10 bond points. 10 points. His current bond points. He glanced at the number in the upper right corner, 300. Enough. Then a gust of sea wind hit him, making him shiver, and he quickly clicked to redeem. In the next instant, a surge of warm information flooded his mind, not granting him raw power, but instilling a complete set of fire-making techniques. It included the bow drill method, hand drill method, and fire plow method. The principles, angles, force, and wood selection for each were all crystal clear, as if he had practiced them 1,000 times. He crouched down, found a flat spot on the sand, and began gathering materials. Deadwood, dry grass, twigs, tree bark, fiber. He had noted their locations the night before, now he only needed to pick them up. He selected a piece of deadwood as thick as an arm for the base, carved a small notch into it with his folding knife, and then whittled a finger-thick drill rod from another dry piece of wood. "What are you doing?" A hoarse voice came from behind. Lu Chen turned. Lu Chen stood at the entrance of the shelter, barefoot, her hair disheveled, her face still puffy with sleep. She shielded her eyes from the glaring morning light, squinting at the stick in his hands. "Making fire," Lu Chen said. Lu Chen asked no more, walked over and crouched beside him, watching quietly. Her hands were still icy cold, Lu Chen noticed. The black silk gown she wore offered no protection against the night wind, leaving her arms exposed, covered in a fine layer of goosebumps. But she didn't complain, nor did she urge him to hurry. She just crouched there, her chin resting on her knees, her gaze fixed on. Lu Chen inserted the drill rod into the notch and wound tree bark fiber around its upper end to form a bowstring. This was the most efficient bow drill method. He held the top of the drill rod steady with one hand, while pulling the bowstring back and forth with the other. The rod spun rapidly in the notch, emitting a whirring sound. Lu Qianqian's eyelid twitched. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. A faint wisp of bluish smoke began to rise from the edge of the notch. Lu Chen quickened his pace, the muscles in his arms taut as bowstrings. The tender flesh of his palms was rubbed raw, but he dared not stop. The smoke grew thicker. A tiny spark leaped from the notch, landing on the tinder he had prepared. Lu Chen immediately stopped, carefully cupped the bundle of dry grass, and blew on it gently and evenly. The spark spread through the tinder like a slowly awakening creature, first a red glow, then a small tongue of flame. "It's lit." Lu Qianqian's voice was soft, but Lu Chen caught the emotion hidden in that word. Not surprise, but relief. The flame flickered a few times on the tinder bundle and steadied. Lu Chen tucked the tinder into the prearranged pile of kindling. The fire licked at the thicker branches, crackling sharply. The firelight illuminated his face and Lu Qianqian's, as well as several heads peeking out from the shelter entrance. Zhao Maimei was the first to run out. Barefoot on the sand, she practically lunged towards the fire, her knees hitting the ground, but she was oblivious to the pain. She extended her two red, cold-numbed hands towards the flames. Her fingers trembled slightly in the firelight, not from cold, but from excitement. Tears streamed down her face instantly. It was a silent, violent weeping. Large teardrops fell, hitting the sand and vanishing without a trace. Her lips quivered, she wanted to speak, but couldn't utter a word. Finally, she squeezed out a few words, "It's so warm." Her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking to herself, but everyone heard. Zhao Silu helped Chengdu out. Chengdu's ankle was more swollen than the night before, a round lump bulging at the joint, the skin stretched taut and shiny. She limped to the fire, stretching out her injured leg, the firelight casting shadows on her face. Her eyes were red, but she held back her tears, blinking hard and repeatedly, as if trying to force the mist away. Fire Chen Duda's voice trembled. Real fire. Gulanaza was helped out by Yang Xiaomi. Her right leg was stiff as she walked. The wound on her knee had formed a thick scab overnight, but every step pulled at the surrounding skin, causing her forehead to bead with sweat. During last night's argument, her tone had been sharp enough to devour someone. But now, looking at the fire, her expression was like a drowning person finally finding a log to gasp for air. That was enough. She stretched her hands towards the flames, her whole body leaning forward slightly, as if in worship. Fatty D was dragged out wrapped in Yang Xiaomi's coat. No, that coat wasn't Yang Xiaomi's. Yang Xiaomi's gown had no coat. It was the one Lu Chen had taken off last night and draped over her. He had spent the night in just a thin t-shirt lying in the wind. Fatty D was wrapped in that coat, which was several sizes too large for her. The hem dragged on the sand as she walked like a child wearing an adult's clothes. She sat by the fire, pulling the coat tighter, stealing a quick glance at Lu Chen before looking away just as fast. Thanks, she said, her voice very small, unsure if she was speaking to Yang Xiaomi or Lu Chen. But as she spoke those two words, tears fell silently, tracing paths down her cheeks roughened by the sea wind. Yang Xiaomi did not sit by the fire. She stood a little further away, arms crossed over her chest, watching the flames. She tried her best to maintain her strong woman image, but her hands trembled uncontrollably. She wasn't crying now either. But the way she looked at the fire was like gazing upon a long-lost loved one. No one spoke. Everyone stared at the flames. The fire wasn't big. The kindling burned quickly, occasionally emitting a crackle, sparks flying up and vanishing in midair. But this modest fire brought something to the morning called hope. Zhao Meimei's crying gradually subsided into occasional sniffles. Fatty D wrapped the coat tighter around herself. Lu Qianqian added a twig to the fire. Yang Xiaomi finally took a step forward and crouched at the very edge of the fire. Last night's argument seemed like a distant memory, one that didn't belong to this morning. No one apologized, no one mentioned it, but everyone knew it was over. Not because it was resolved, but because when this fire caught, something had changed. Ding Lu Qianqian bond points 3. Ding Yang Xiaomi bond points 2. Ding Zhao Meimei bond points 3. Ding Fatty D bond points 2. Ding Chen Duda bond points 3. Lu Chen stood up, brushing the grass ash from his hands. They'll go into the woods to see if there's anything to eat, he said. You all look around nearby, on the beach, in the crevices of the rocks, to see if there are any edible shells or seaweed. His tone was somewhat curt. Having said that, he turned and walked toward the bushes. After a few steps, he heard footsteps behind him. Xiao Tian had followed. She was barefoot and her steps were nearly silent like a cat. Her expression was still that vacant, indifferent look, but her eyes were very bright. During last night's argument, Xiao Tian had also been silent. But her silence was different from Lu Qianqian's. Lu Qianqian's silence was restraint, while Xiao Tian's was innate, as if she simply didn't grasp the point of an argument. Why are you following me? Lu Chen asked. Looking for food, Xiao Tian replied, her answer so brief it hardly seemed like a conversation. Lu Chen said nothing more. The two of them entered the bushes one after the other, leaves and branches brushing against them with a rustling sound. Behind them the campfire was still burning. By the shelter, those around the fire remained motionless. Not because they didn't want to move, but because they didn't know where to start. The beach. They glanced at it, and there was nothing but sand and stones. The reef was in the distance, but reaching it required crossing a large stretch of slippery rocks. Chun Didu couldn't go because of her injured foot, and no one else took the lead. They'll go check out the reef, Nini said, standing up and brushing the sand off her skirt. They'll come too, Lu Qianqian added, rising to her feet. The two of them headed toward the reef one after another. The remaining women sat around the campfire, the atmosphere subtly tense. Yang Xiaomi glanced at Pang Di, then at Zhao Meimei and Zhao Silu. They'll go see if there's fresh water over there. She pointed toward the other end of the beach. Li Xian, will you come with me? Li Xian was changing the gauze on her arm wound. Though there wasn't much to change, no medicine, no clean water, just rewrapping it tightly with cloth strips. Hearing Yang Xiaomi's words, she looked up, hesitated, and nodded. Silu, keep an eye on Meimei for me, Li Xian said to Zhao Silu as she stood up. Zhao Silu nodded and pulled Zhao Meimei closer to her. Sister Wang didn't move, though she sat by the fire tending to the injured. Chen Dudu was leaning against a rock near the fire looking at Sister Wang. She suddenly spoke, Sister Wang, don't worry. They'll find something. She didn't specify whether she meant they would find food or that others would find them. Perhaps both. In the bushes, Lu Chen stopped, crouched down, and used his fingers to part a broad leaf, revealing a patch of wild ferns underneath. He examined the roots, but there were no edible tubers. He walked a few more steps, and under a crooked tree spotted several green fist-sized fruits. What are these? Xiao Tian came closer, tilting her head to look. Lu Chen picked one and held it under his nose, sniffing. It had a faint, fresh fragrance like some kind of wild banana or papaya, but he wasn't sure if it was safe to eat. The system shop had a plant identification skill for 50 points. He gritted his teeth and didn't exchange it. He had too many places to spend bond points. Let's pick a few and take them back to see if anyone recognizes them, he said. Xiao Tian nodded and reached for the fruit. She stood on tiptoe and her skirt caught on a branch with a sharp rip, tearing another slit in the hem. She glanced down, expressionlessly tore off a strip of the skirt, tied it around her waist as a belt, and continued. Watching her swift movements, a thought suddenly struck Lu Chen. This girl might be the fastest of them all to adapt to this island. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because her way of being afraid was different from others. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't complain. She just acted. The two of them picked 7 or 8 green fruits, wrapped them in palm leaves, and headed back. Over by the reef, Nini and Lu Chen were crouched behind a large rock reaching into a tide pool. The pool was left behind by the receding tide, containing a few small crabs and some sea snails. Lu Chen's fingers touched a crab's claw, got pinched, and she let out a sharp hiss, pulling her hand back as a tiny bead of blood welled up on her fingertip. "Let me," Nini said, plunging her hand in. She was much quicker than Lu Chen, grabbing the crab by its shell and lifting it out. The crab waved its pincers in the air as Nini tossed it into a palm leaf rolled into a bucket shape. "Have you done this before?" Lu Chen asked. "No," Nini said, "but I've watched videos." Lu Chen glanced at her and said nothing more. The two continued foraging in the pool. Crabs, snails, small clams, anything that moved they picked up. The bottom of the palm leaf quickly accumulated a layer of water mixed with sand and broken shells, but the bounty inside grew. Yang Xiaomi and Liu Xixi walked far along the beach. At the end of the beach was a low cliff beneath which a tiny stream flowed. No, it couldn't even be called a stream. It was just a trickle of water seeping from a rock crevice, running down the stone and sinking into the sand after less than 2 meters. "It's fresh water," Liu Xixi said, crouching down to dip a finger in and taste it. There was no saltiness, it was fresh. Yang Xiaomi crouched down too, looking at the thin trickle. Her brow furrowed. It was so small, the flow so slow, it was nearly imperceptible. If they used a bottle to collect it, it might take half a day to fill. What can we use to carry it? Yang Xiaomi stood up, looking around, and then her eyes lit up. A conch shell the size of a balloon lay on the sand, a perfect natural container. When Lu Chen returned to the shelter, Lu Chen and Nini were already back. Beside the fire was a bundle of the crabs and snails they had gathered. "Can we eat these?" Pang Di asked, pointing at the wild fruits Lu Chen had brought back. Her eyes held both hope and doubt. "I don't know," Lu Chen said. "Let's test it first. Someone takes a bite, and if nothing happens in half an hour, we'll eat." A moment of silence fell around the fire. "They'll do it," Xiao Tian said. She reached out, took a fruit from the palm leaf, wiped it on her skirt, and took a bite. She chewed a few times, swallowed, and her expression remained unchanged. "What does it taste like?" Xiao Mai asked nervously. "Sour," Xiao Tian said. "A bit astringent, but no bitterness, so it should be safe." Everyone stared at her. Unfazed, Xiao Tian took another bite, chewing slowly, as if savoring some gourmet dish. Lu Chen glanced at her, making another mental note. This girl's courage was as vast as her silence. Yang Xiaomi and Liu Xixi returned carrying a large conch shell. Yang Xiaomi walked to the fire and said, "There's fresh water by the cliff, just a tiny trickle, but I managed to collect a bit." At the mention of fresh water, the others' eyes lit up. Lu Chen nodded upon hearing this and continued processing the crabs and snails. Without a pot, they couldn't boil anything, so they had to roast them by the fire. Nini threaded the snails onto small twigs and propped them on stones near the fire, while Gulnaza helped turn them over, clumsy but earnest. Chen Dudu sat to the side, watching them busy themselves, her fingers unconsciously drawing circles in the sand. Her ankle still hurt badly, but she picked up a branch nearby and tried to stand, using one hand to support herself against a rock and the other on the branch, slowly, bit by bit, straightening her back. "Can you manage?" Sister Wang asked, worried. "I can," Chen Dudu said, her tone more resolute than she had expected. Lu Chen looked up from the fire, glanced at Chen Dudu, then lowered his head again. He didn't help, nor did he say, "Don't push yourself," because he knew that on this island, everyone needed to find something they could do. The snails on the fire began to sizzle, their juices drying up as the edges of the shells turned a golden brown. A faint savory aroma spread, mingling with the smoke of the firewood drifting through the morning air. Zhao Mei's stomach growled loud enough for everyone to hear. Her face flushed red, and she buried it in her knees. Zhao Silu wasn't there, as she had no one to hide behind, so she tucked her head down like an ostrich. Gulnaza couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh, but one of amusement, a spontaneous. Then Pang Di laughed too, very softly, as if afraid that laughing too loud might scare the food away. The corner of Yang Xiaomi's mouth twitched as she didn't laugh, but her expression softened slightly. The crab shells on the fire had turned orange-red, mingling with the burnt fragrance of the snails. Lu Chen flipped a snail and handed the cooked one to Zhao Mai. Zhao Mai froze for a moment, then reached out to take it. It was so hot she had to toss it between her hands a few times before blowing on it and taking a cautious bite. "It's good," she said, her voice a little hoarse, her eyes redrimmed, but she didn't cry. The sun rose over the horizon, its light filtering through the gaps in the palm leaves, painting golden lines around the fire. The sea was blue, the sky was blue, and at the distant line where they met a thin white thread stretched, impossible to tell if it was a wave or a cloud. No one knew when rescue would come. But at least this morning wasn't as cold as last night. Ding Gulnaza bond value 1. Ding Lu Chen bond value 1. Ding Nini bond value 1. The system prompts sounded again as if everything was heading in the right direction. After breakfast, Lu Chen sat on a reef pondering his next tasks. First was the freshwater issue. He had already exchanged for a freshwater purifier blueprint in the system. Based on the knowledge within, he had decided on the method to extract water solar distillation. However, lacking suitable tools, he first needed to craft a set, which would be useful in many subsequent tasks. Besides water and tools, the source of food was also crucial. Although they were near the sea, the beach offered no abundant food sources. To find sustenance, they would have to rely on the dense forest behind and the vast ocean before them. With that thought, Lu Chen summoned the system again and quickly browsed the marketplace. Soon a list of skills appeared before him: basic hunting 50 points, basic fishing 50 points, basic trapping 50 points, basic weaving 50 points, basic traditional Chinese medicine 50 points, basic plant identification 50 points, basic foraging 50 points, basic farming 50 points, basic animal identification 50 points. He originally had 320 bond points. After exchanging for basic lumbering, basic tool, crafting, basic shelter blueprint, fire by friction, and freshwater purifier blueprint, he had 170 points left. With 170 points, he could only afford 3 skills. Hunting and fishing would eventually be necessary, as they were key to the food problem. Basic traditional Chinese medicine was also important, as there was no doctor on the island and illnesses could be troublesome. Moreover, everyone had been working while injured, which could lead to chronic issues over time. Basic plant identification and basic animal identification were also quite practical. Why is he still sitting? Fatty crouched by the fire, poking a half-burnt branch with a stick, her voice low, as if afraid of being heard. No one answered. Zhao Maimai returned from the woods with a bundle of twigs, placed them by the fire, and brushed the dust off her hands. Following the others' gazes, she saw Lu Chen sitting with his back to them, silent. The atmosphere outside the shelter grew subtly tense. Everyone was occupied with their own tasks, yet their peripheral vision kept drifting to the same direction. Finally, Sister Wang spoke. She was sitting by the fire, looked up, and swept her gaze around. Her voice was soft, but clear. Is he still upset about yesterday? Her words struck like a pebble thrown into a calm lake, stirring ripples. Yesterday. They had argued last night. No, not an argument, more like an emotional release. Zhao Maimai complained about the damp, cold ground. Fatty chimed in about wanting hot water. Gulnazer was unhappy with Yang Xiaomi's constant meddling. Yang Xiaomi retorted coldly. Gulnazer fired back. Finally, Lu Chen silenced everyone with a single sentence. You can keep arguing even until dawn. At the time, no one thought much of it. Or rather, they were too caught up in their anger to consider its meaning. But looking back now, that scene had transformed in each person's memory. What they recalled was not his words, but the tone in which he spoke, devoid of anger, impatience, or anything but a chilling disappointment. Chun Dudu leaned against a rock, her injured ankle resting on a raised stone. Her voice was soft. It took him half an hour to build the shelter yesterday. And it took us half an hour just to fail at setting up the frame. She said us, but everyone knew whom she meant. Gulnazer's face flushed slightly. Yesterday, when she saw Lu Chen push over that frame, she had been resentful. At the time, she thought he was deliberately undermining them. Now she realized he was just correcting a mistake that several of them had spent half an hour failing to notice. Gulnazer offered no excuses. She simply set down the palm leaf she was weaving, lowered her head, and traced her fingers over the leaf lost. Nini sat on the other side of the fire, absently drawing circles in the dirt with a sharpened branch. She hadn't joined the argument yesterday, but she had heard about it. Lu Yifei had told her. Not deliberately, just casually mentioning while arranging palm leaves that there was a bit of unpleasantness while setting up the shelter yesterday. Lu Yifei's tone was light, but Nini could tell that lightness wasn't indifference. It was uncertainty about how to confront the matter. Lu Yifei was now sitting at the shelter's entrance, hugging her knees, facing the reef. She didn't join the discussion. Yang Xiaomi stood by the fire, arms crossed, her habitual thinking posture. She withdrew her gaze from the reef, swept it across the group, and her lips moved as if organizing her thoughts. He saved our lives, Yang Xiaomi said. When these words were spoken, a momentary silence fell around the fire. Not because there was anything wrong with the statement. Quite the opposite. It was so undeniably true that no one knew how to respond. Yang Xiaomi continued, her voice soft, but each word clear. If it weren't for him yesterday, we'd still be adrift at sea right now. Actually, we might not even have had that chance. Fatty's eyes reddened. She recalled sobbing uncontrollably on the life raft, Yang Xiaomi holding her and saying, "Big sis is here," and Lu Chen draping his coat over her shoulders, his hand covered in blisters, the skin worn off his palm. His hands were injured, Fatty suddenly said. When he was chopping trees yesterday, his hands were full of blisters. He didn't say a word. Gulnazer's fingers paused. She remembered when she had lashed out at Lu Chen yesterday, He had merely glanced at her, then bent down and one by one reinserted the fallen poles into the ground, tamping them down with stones and securing them tightly. She had stood there, mouth agape, speechless. Not because of anything he said, but because he said nothing at all. Should I apologize? Gulnazer looked up at Yang Xiaomi. Her expression was complex, as if engaged in an inner struggle. Apologizing was never easy for her, not because she was unwilling, but because she was unaccustomed to it. Growing up, she had rarely apologized to anyone. Not because she never made mistakes, but because those around her always rushed to say it's okay first. Yang Xiaomi watched her, neither urging nor deciding for her. She simply said, "You think about it." Gulnazer lowered her head, silent for a few seconds. Then she stood up, brushed the sand off her skirt, took 2 steps toward the reef, stopped, and looked back at the others. "You, aren't you coming together?" Her tone held uncertainty, as if seeking support. Zhao Maimai was the first to stand. She patted the sand off her pants, trotted over to Gulnazer, and looked up at her. "I'm coming too. Yesterday I complained about the bugs on the ground." Her voice trailed off, as if realizing how trivial her complaints seemed in the face of life and death. Zhao Silu also stood up. She didn't say anything, just walked to Gulnazer's other side and stood quietly. Chen Dudu stood up, using a tree branch as a crutch. Sister Wang moved to help her, but she shook her head, steadied herself, and limped to the center of the group. Her ankle still ached, but her expression was far more resolute than yesterday. "I'm coming too," she said. "I didn't help much yesterday, but at least I should say thank you." Sister Wang looked at her, hesitated, and then also stood up. She said nothing, just brushed imaginary dust off her skirt and stood behind Chen Dudu. Pangdi glanced at Yang Xiaomi, but Yang Xiaomi did not move. She then looked at Lu Xixi, who also remained still. "Mi Jia," Pangdi whispered softly. Yang Xiaomi did not answer. She stood still, arms crossed over her chest, her gaze fixed on the figure on the reef. Her expression was calm, but her fingers tapped lightly on her arm, as if she were making a decision. Lu Xixi also stood up. Her movement was so light it was almost soundless. She walked out from the shelter's entrance, joined the crowd, and stood beside Zhao Silu. She looked at no one, her eyes fixed on the direction of the reef. "Let's go," she said. Yang Xiaomi watched Lu Xixi's retreating figure, paused for 2 seconds, then uncrossed her arms and followed. Pangdi was startled for a moment, then trotted after them, muttering under her breath, "Mi Jia, wait for me." The group walked towards the reef. Only Nini and Xiaodian remained by the campfire. Xiaodian sat beside the fire, poking at the flames with a stick. Nini looked at her and asked, "Aren't you going?" Xiaodian didn't lift her head. "He's busy." Nini didn't understand what she meant, but she didn't ask further. She stood up, brushed off her skirt, took a few steps towards the woods, then stopped and looked back at the reef. Then she turned and continued into the woods. She felt she wasn't suited for apologies, but she could gather more firewood. That was also a form of apology, or so she thought. On the reef, Lu Chen still sat facing the sea, lost in thought. Footsteps sounded behind him, many footsteps crunching on the sand like an uneven drumbeat. He did not turn around. The footsteps grew closer, then stopped about 3 or 4 meters away. He heard someone stand still behind him, someone adjust their breathing, and someone give a soft cough, the deliberate kind meant to break the silence. A few seconds of silence passed. Then Gulanana's voice came from behind, tinged with unnatural, awkward tension. Lu Chen." Lu Chen turned around. 9 people stood below the reef. Gulanana stood at the front with Zhao Maimai and Zhao Silu on either side. Chen Dudu leaned on a crutch beside Wang Jie. Pangdi hid behind Yang Xiaomi, and Lu Xixi stood at the edge of the group, her expression calm, but her fingers lightly gripping her skirt. Each wore a different expression. Some looked down at their feet, some at him, some at the person next to them. But they all shared one thing. Their faces bore an uneasy look, as if they were struggling to overcome something. Gulanana took a deep breath, as if making a momentous decision, lifted her chin, and met Lu Chen's eyes. "About yesterday. I'm sorry." As those 3 words left her lips, someone in the crowd behind her let out a soft sigh of relief. "I shouldn't have lost my temper at you yesterday." Gulanana said, her voice steadier now, but her words rushing out, as if afraid she'd lose her nerve. "When you knocked down the frame, I thought you did it on purpose. Later I realized you were right." After she finished, she bit her lip, as if waiting for Lu Chen's response. Lu Chen looked at her, but did not speak immediately. His expression was bewildered, not coldness, but a kind of confusion, as if he hadn't quite grasped what was. Seeing that he remained silent, Gulanana thought he was still angry. Her face flushed slightly, and she added, "And thank you. You saved us yesterday. Without you, I don't know where I'd be right now." Her words were so soft, they almost dissipated in the sea breeze. But everyone heard them. Zhao Maimai added quietly from behind, "I'm sorry too. I kept complaining about the cold and the bugs on the ground yesterday, and I even cried. You were already exhausted from building the shelter, and I shouldn't have acted that way." Her voice quivered with tears as she spoke, but she held them back. Zhao Silu patted her back, then spoke up herself. "I didn't help much yesterday. He'll do more today." Chen Dudu hobbled forward a step on her crutch. Her voice was soft but earnest. "I wasn't much help yesterday either. Today I'll do whatever I can." Wang Jie stood behind Chen Dudu and nodded in agreement. Pandi poked her head out from behind Yang Xiaomi and whispered, "Thanks for the jacket," before ducking back. Liu Xixi offered neither an apology nor a thank you. She simply looked at Lu Chen and said, "Your hand is still injured. I'll bandage it for you later." Her tone was flat, as if stating a very ordinary matter. But her eyes were brighter than usual, as if she had made a decision. Yang Xiaomi was the last to speak. She stood at the very back, hands hanging at her sides. Her expression was softer than usual. Not a forced softness, but a natural gentleness that came after some barrier had been lowered. "I'm not apologizing," she said bluntly, "because I don't think I did anything wrong yesterday." Someone in the crowd drew a sharp breath. Yang Xiaomi continued, "But I want to say thank you. I saw everything you did." After speaking, she stared directly at Lu Chen, waiting for his reaction. Lu Chen sat on the reef looking at the women before him. They stood below, faces tilted up to him. Some had red-rimmed eyes, some wore awkward expressions, and some struggled to maintain their composure. Their dresses were wrinkled, covered in sand and grass stains. Their hair was disheveled with traces of dried seawater on their faces. They stood barefoot on the rough sand, their toes coated with fine grains, looking utterly disheveled. Lu Chen watched them in silence for a few seconds. Since they had already spoken their minds, he decided it was time to break the unspoken tension that had been weighing on his heart. He jumped down from the reef, standing on the sand to meet their eyes. "On the cruise ship, when I saw you trapped in the cabin, my first thought wasn't about any exchange of interests or what I could get. The ship was sinking, water was pouring in. All I thought was, since we were on the same vessel by fate, I'd save whoever I could. It was that simple." His tone was calm, as if recounting a past event, without seeking credit or deliberately stirring emotions. "Later on the life raft, when the waves crashed over us, I didn't know if we'd make it. But I told myself, as long as this raft doesn't capsize, I'd bring every single one of you to shore. All I hoped was that everyone would survive." He paused, his gaze sweeping across each face. "But now, we've made it ashore, found a place to shelter from the wind, have fire, and some food, though not much. I thought by now everyone would understand that survival comes first. As for everything else, pride, temper, who's in charge? How much are those worth on a deserted island?" His voice wasn't loud, but every word landed heavily. "But your actions chilled me. While I was building the shelter, you were arguing. While I was chopping wood until my hands were blistered, you were complaining about bugs on the ground and the cold at night." He shook his head, a faint, bitter twist to his lips that was more a sigh of resignation than a smile. "I'm not your nanny, nor your employee. I'm just like you, cold, hungry, and injured. I do these things not because I'm a man and it's my duty, but because if I didn't, we might not survive 3 days. He stopped and looked at them. "So I don't need your apologies. Apologies are useless. What I need is, starting today, everyone sees themselves as part of this team. Do what you can. If you don't know how, learn. I don't want to see anyone sitting around waiting for others to hand them everything on a silver platter. Can you do that?" After Lu Chen finished speaking, the beach fell silent for a few seconds. The sea breeze swept in from the ocean, scattering the campfire's blue smoke into chaotic wisps. The orange-eared flames danced across everyone's faces, their expressions flickering in the gaps between smoke and fire. Wave after wave crashed onto the shore like some ancient chronometer, reminding them that time was running out. Yang Xiaomi was the first to speak. She didn't defend herself. Instead, she slowly lowered her arms, crossed over her chest, and her voice dropped lower than usual, carrying a rare seriousness. "You're right. I have indeed always seen myself as someone helping out, not someone doing the work." She paused, looked up at Lu Chen, and added, "In my heart, I always thought since you're here, we just need to coordinate. Actually, I'm no different from anyone else. All of us are stranded here. Starting today, I'll take the lead." Gulanana bit her lip, her eyes reddening slightly. She spun around abruptly, her voice muffled, as if squeezed from deep in her throat. "I'll go gather firewood." After a few steps, she turned back, chin held high. "Enough to keep you burning for 3 days. After a moment's thought, she added, "No, 5 days." Zhao Maimai hid behind Zhao Silu, showing only half her face. She sneaked a glance at Lu Chen, then quickly lowered her head and murmured, "He'll learn." Her voice was so soft it was nearly carried away by the sea breeze, but everyone heard it. Zhao Silu squeezed her hand and said nothing. But when she raised her head to look at Lu Chen, her gaze was much more resolute than before, as if a thin mist had finally cleared. Chen Dudu leaned on a crutch, his injured leg slightly suspended, his entire weight resting on the wooden staff. He looked at Lu Chen and said word by word, "I will work hard to learn survival skills. I don't want to be just a spectator anymore." Pandi edged closer to Yang Xiaomi, sniffled the tip of her nose red from the cold. She suddenly exclaimed loudly, "I am afraid of the dark, but I'm not scared during the day. I can do a lot of work." After saying this, she blushed herself, burying her face in Yang Xiaomi's arm, prompting Yang Xiaomi to gently pat her head. Liu Xixi remained silent throughout. She simply walked over to Lu Chen, picked up the cloth strip originally meant for bandaging wounds, unfolded it, folded it in half, then lowered her head, and quietly wrapped it around his still bleeding palm. Her movements were gentle, winding layer by layer with a tension that was just right, neither too tight to hurt the wound nor too loose. She wrapped it slowly as if performing a ritual, or as if using this gesture to voice all the unspeakable words. Nini walked out of the woods carrying a bundle of firewood. She glanced at the group from a distance, neither approaching nor asking what had happened. She simply stacked the wood beside the campfire, arranging each piece neatly, thin ones on top for easy kindling, thick ones at the bottom. No one said sorry anymore, but everyone was answering that question with their actions. Can we do it? Lu Chen took it all in, and a slight relief washed over his heart. The warmth of the fire baked his face, and the freshly wrapped cloth on his palm brought a clean, tender sensation. He understood well that survival was never a one-person affair. No matter how capable he was, he couldn't provide for so many mouths alone. Only by mobilizing everyone, helping them find their roles, could they hope to survive on this desolate island. He cleared his throat, his voice not loud, but steady. Since everyone is so motivated, let me assign today. Everyone fell silent, their gazes fixed on him. Our main tasks today are 3: making tools and weapons, solving freshwater purification, and storing food. Lu Chen raised 3 fingers, then unfolded them one by one. Tools and weapons are the most basic. Without tools, we can't do anything. Freshwater is the lifeline. Without clean water, we won't last 3 days. Food goes without saying. Just picking fruit isn't enough. He paused, scanned the group, and began assigning tasks. Pangdi, you, Mai, Zhao Silu, and Sister Wang. The 4 of you are responsible for finding bamboo. We need both thick and thin. Thick for bowls, cups, and daily containers. Thin for fish spears, arrow shafts, and trap frames. We'll need quite a lot, so I appreciate you making multiple trips. He added a special note. Remember, don't go deep into the forest or just cut along the edge of the bamboo grove. There are snakes and insects inside, and possibly other dangers. Work in pairs and don't separate. Pangdi nodded vigorously, slapping her cheeks to stay alert. Lu Chen turned to Yang Xiaomi. Yang Xiaomi, you, Liu Xixi, and Liu Xixi. The 3 of you are in charge of expanding the water source. The freshwater pit you found yesterday, try to dig it deeper and wider, ensuring we can fill 2 large conch shells with water each day. If that spot can't be expanded, look for new seepage points nearby. Remember, freshwater is the most critical issue right now. The more sources we find, the better. Yang Xiaomi nodded. Got it. They'll bring a stone axe to cut through tree roots if needed. Liu Xixi. Lu Chen looked at her. She had just finished bandaging him and stood quietly to the side. She gave a slight nod, indicating she had heard. Lu Chen continued, stay safe and don't go into the pit alone. There might be mud at the bottom. Liu Xixi softly hummed in acknowledgement. Dudu and Gulanana, Lu Chen turned to them. You 2 will assist me in making the freshwater purifier. Once it's done, we'll have a stable freshwater source. Even if it doesn't rain or we can't find new sources, we can survive on seawater. Chen Duda's eyes lit up. He planted his crutch deeper into the sand to stand steadier. Gulanana, who had already started walking toward the woods to gather firewood, turned back upon hearing this, crouching beside Lu Chen. What do you need me to do? Pick up stones or dig sand? Just then Yang Xiaomi suddenly asked, since we can make a freshwater purifier and get fresh water from seawater, why bother finding a water source? Isn't it redundant? Lu Chen shook his head and patiently explained, the purifier it'll make relies mainly on solar energy, basically evaporating seawater and condensing it. It works fine on sunny days, but if we hit consecutive overcast or rainy days, without sunlight the purifier won't function. By then we can't just wait and thirst for clear skies, can we? So we must find a water source. The purifier is a backup supplement. Walking on 2 legs is safer. Yang Xiaomi let out an enlightened, oh, then led Liu Xixi and Li Xian toward the cliff. Finally Lu Chen looked at Nini and Xiao Tian. Nini and Xiao Tian will be in charge of foraging. Don't go too far, just the beach and the shallow forest area. Shells, conches, edible wild fruits, and small crabs left in reef crevices after low tide. All are fine. Avoid anything too brightly colored, and if you're unsure, bring it back to ask first. Nini nodded, tucked the machete into her belt, and waved at Xiao Tian. Xiao Tian was a quiet girl, but quick and efficient as she followed without a word. Everyone had received their tasks, and the beach suddenly buzzed with activity. Some went to cut bamboo, some to find water sources, some to gather firewood, and some to search for food. The campfire still burned, its blue smoke rising straight up, dispersing into a faint wisp in the morning light. Lu Chen stood still, watching these people scatter and regroup, each heading in a different direction. The sea breeze blew across his cloth-wrapped palm, stinging faintly, but his heart felt much more at ease. He picked up a charred stick from beside the fire, crouched down, and drew a simple structure diagram on the sand. He said to Chen Dudu and Gulanana, come on, let's first make a model of a solar still. Help me find a few flat stones, a large conch shell, and some big leaves. Gulanana immediately got up and ran to the seaside while Chen Dudu slowly hobbled over, bending down to pick suitable stones. More and more footprints appeared on the sand, deep and shallow, stretching in different directions. And so the first full day on this desolate island began. Lu Chen paused as he finished sketching on the sand, lifting his gaze toward the life raft stranded by the reef. The charred wooden stick in his hand hesitated for a moment before he casually thrust it into the sand. He stood up, walked over to the life raft, and crouched down to touch the canopy fabric tied atop it. It was made of PVC, sturdy, waterproof, and smooth to the touch. "No need to look for large leaves," Lu Chen said, turning to Gulnara. "Those won't work. They'll wilt under the sun and won't last more than a few days." Gulnara, holding a huge palm leaf, looked at him in confusion. "Then what do we use?" Lu Chen patted the canopy fabric. "This PVC material, sun-resistant, waterproof, and transparent enough. It's perfect as the condensation surface for a solar still." Gulnara leaned in curiously and touched the fabric. It was smoother than she'd imagined, with a slight coolness to it. "This thing can turn seawater into fresh water. Just with the sun, eh? The principle isn't complicated." Lu Chen untied the ropes securing the canopy fabric while explaining, "You put seawater in a container, cover it with this cloth. The sun heats it, water evaporates into vapor, hits the cloth, condenses into droplets, and flows down into a collector. The salt and impurities stay below, and what comes out is fresh water." Gulnara understood, and her eyes lit up. "So it's like boiling seawater and turning it into droplets? Like the water on a steamer lid?" "Something like that," Lu Chen said with a rare smile. "So what we need to make is a steamer heated by the sun." He removed the entire canopy fabric, spread it on the sand, and weighed down the corners with stones. Then he asked Gulnara to find a large conch shell to serve as a freshwater collector, and Chun Dudu to dig a shallow pit lined with smooth pebbles at the bottom. Gulnara was quick. Soon she returned with a conch shell as big as a wash basin, its opening intact and inner wall smooth. Chun Dudu used his crutch as a hoe, squatting on one leg to dig a shallow pit about half a meter in diameter in the sand, then carefully laid pebbles one by one, pressing them flat and even. Lu Chen placed the conch shell in the center of the pit, rinsed the canopy fabric with seawater, stretched it taut over the pit mouth, and secured it tightly with sand and stones all around. The fabric sagged slightly, its lowest point directly above the conch shell. "Pour seawater into the pit," Lu Chen said. Gulnara used a smaller shell to scoop water, pouring it in until it just covered the pebbles. Lu Chen adjusted the tension of the canopy fabric so the depression was closer to the conch shell's opening. "Once the sun is overhead, in a few hours we'll have a shellful of fresh water." Lu Chen stood up, wiping the sand off his hands. "Let's test this one first. If it works, we'll make 2 more. Gulnara crouched nearby, staring intently at the crude yet ingenious device, then suddenly grinned. "That's amazing. Just a few rocks, a pit, and a piece of cloth, and you can make water appear." Chun Dudu also squatted down, resting his chin on his hands, and murmured, "Lu Chen, you don't seem like a photographer. You're more like a wilderness survival expert." Of course he seemed like a wilderness survival expert, for with the omnipotent system at his disposal, anyone could become one. With a stable source of fresh water secured, Lu Chen felt a lightness in his heart, and the shadow pressing on his mind began to lift. Just then Fatty and the others returned with the first batch of bamboo. Lu Chen picked up a sharp stone, carefully hammered and sharpened it, and fashioned a keen stone knife. Then, wielding the stone axe head made earlier, he deftly chopped down several bamboo stalks, and with the new stone knife, he finally carved and trimmed them, soon producing several bamboo blades. Next, he cut bamboo segments, hollowed out the cores, and made a dozen bamboo bowls and cups for serving food, along with a handful of bamboo chopsticks. Chun Dudu and Gulnara, who were helping on the side, kept busy by finding rough pebbles and patiently smoothing out all the burrs on the bamboo items. Everyone worked in harmony, each at their own task, and soon a batch of practical, smooth bamboo tableware was finished. After making the utensils, Lu Chen set to crafting weapons and a fish spear. He first selected several slender bamboo poles of moderate thickness, carved sharp spearhead shapes with the stone knife, and then slowly roasted them over the fire. The bamboo surface gradually turned a scorched yellow as moisture was driven out, making the material harder and more durable. Once cooled, several sharp bamboo spears took shape. Then he split bamboo strips, thinned them, and carefully polished the edges with pebbles, creating a few lightweight, yet sharp bamboo knives. Finally, he specifically chose a few thin, straight bamboo stalks, carved one end into multi-pronged barbs, hardened them over the fire, and fashioned a handy fish spear. The combination of heat and craftsmanship made these bamboo tools both light and durable. During this time, Fatty and the others brought back another batch of bamboo. Xiao Tian and Nini returned with a dozen of the previously seen sour wild fruits, along with about 10 silver fish and 7 or 8 small crabs, enough to cook a pot of seafood porridge. Lu Chen had been busy for most of the day, and his stomach was already growling. As he whittled bamboo strips, he thought about dinner, wishing he could cook a warm pot of porridge. But the thought had barely formed when he froze. He didn't even have a pot to cook with. The stone axe and knife were cold weapons, and the bamboo cups couldn't be placed over a fire. With no clay at hand, and no way to smelt metal, he had to make do with local materials. First, find a suitable stone to improvise. He stopped his work, brushed the shavings off his hands, and said to Chindudu and Gulnara, who were polishing bamboo chopsticks, "Keep an eye on the fire, and don't let it go out. I'm going to the reef grove to see if I can find a stone pot." The two girls nodded and continued their work. The reef grove was not far from the camp, littered with stones of all sizes and strange shapes. Some were like steamed buns, some like millstones, and others had weathered into thin flakes. Lu Chen bent over, turning over stone after stone. He needed one with a natural depression in the middle that could hold water and withstand heat. After checking more than a dozen, they were either too flat, too shallow, or had cracks in the middle, stones that would surely split when heated. Just as he was getting discouraged, he kicked a round, disc-shaped stone buried in the sand. Lu Chen crouched down and brushed away the loose soil, and his eyes lit up. It was a grayish-brown stone as large as a bathtub, and the best part was that it had a naturally hollowed, shallow depression in the center, its inner wall smooth, as if polished, about a dozen centimeters deep with rounded edges. A ready-made stone pot once filled with water. He tapped it, and the sound was crisp with no cracks. Apart from being terribly heavy, at least 30 or 40 Jin, it was practically flawless. Lu Chen grinned, rubbed his hands together, and with effort flipped the stone pot upside down onto his back, slowly making his way back toward the shelter. Gulnana was crouching by the fire, turning small fish skewered on bamboo sticks over the flames. She glanced up and happened to catch sight of Lu Chen staggering out from the grove of jagged rocks. He was bent over at the waist, his back arched, clutching the heavy round stone pot with both hands as it hung upside down on his back. From a distance it looked like a large grayish-brown shell. His steps were heavy and slow, and with each stride his head would lurch forward, a perfect mimicry of an old sea turtle crawling from the ocean onto the sandy shore. Gulnana was taken aback at first, then let out a snort of laughter. Unable to contain herself, she threw her head back and burst into peals of laughter. "Ha! Lu Chen, you look just like a giant sea turtle. Ha ha!" She laughed so hard her whole body trembled, her long hair swaying with every shake. Her round, rosy face, lit by the campfire, crinkled at the corners of her almond-shaped eyes, which curved into crescent moons with fine tears glistening at the edges. One hand clutching her stomach and the other resting on her knee, she nearly doubled over to the ground. Her laughter rang out as crisp as a brook dancing over mountain stones. Chundidu, who had been meticulously polishing the rim of a bamboo cup with a pebble, looked up at the sound of Gulnana's laughter. She cast a glance toward Lu Chen, a faint smile curling at the corners of her lips, and joined in the laughter. Her laugh was not as boisterous as Gulnana's, instead it carried a quiet, reserved elegance. Her skin was fairer than Gulnana's, her oval face soft in its contours. When she smiled, her eyes slowly narrowed, the corners tilting upward like crescent moons just rising above the treetops, clear and tender. She pressed her lips together as mirth rippled from the depths of her eyes, forming two shallow dimples on her cheeks. The bamboo cup in her hand stilled as she quietly watched Lu Chen's clumsy figure chuckling softly without end. One girl laughed with unrestrained joy, the other with serene grace. The fire crackled and popped, brightening the entire camp. Before Gulnana and Chundudu's laughter had even faded, Lu Chen himself heard it. Those bell-like words, "giant sea turtle," rang clearly in his ears. Lu Chen's face instantly darkened as if 3 vertical lines had appeared on his forehead. The corners of his mouth twitched as he wanted to retort, but with a stone pot weighing dozens of pounds in his arms, he could barely catch his breath, let alone talk back. He could only grit his teeth and drag himself forward, nursing his frustration. Just as he reached the peak of his annoyance, another burst of clear laughter came from beside him. That laughter was softer and sweeter, like wind chimes stirred by a breeze. Lu Chen turned his head to look. Well, 3 more spectators had arrived. Leading them was Yang Xiaomi, her short bangs lifted slightly by the sea breeze. Her skin was fair, her nose high and straight, and her large phoenix-like eyes curved into fine arcs. A smile played on her lips as she carried a string of clams freshly gathered from the shore. She tilted her head, sizing up Lu Chen, and said with a grin, "Lu Chen, with that look, are you planning to dive into the sea like a turtle?" Behind her followed Liu Xixi, her long hair casually pinned up with a twig, a few strands falling by her ears. Her features were as delicate as a painting, with red lips and white teeth. She was smiling behind pressed lips, her eyes sparkling as if they held 2 stars. Though she said nothing, her barely suppressed expression was more embarrassing than outright laughter. Last came Liu Xixi, who laughed without any restraint, revealing a row of neat white teeth. She slapped her thigh as she laughed, saying, "Oh my Lu Chen, you really are just like a sea turtle. All you need is to crawl on all 4s. The 3 girls stood in a row, their faces brimming with smiles. Yang Xiaomi's smile was reserved, Liu Xixi's was gentle, and Li Xin's was unrestrained. The three smiling faces together were like three blossoms of different colors blooming at once. Lu Chen's mouth twitched even more and the tips of his ears turned a subtle red. He took a deep breath and instead of explaining muttered gruffly, "Had enough laughter. If you have helped me lift this. It's a stone pot, and it's heavy." The three of them still laughing moved forward. Yang Xiaomi and Liu Xixi supported the bottom of the stone pot from left and right, while Liu Xixi bent over to steady the edge. Gulnana directed the way from the front. Laughing and shouting out a rhythm, they staggered together to carry the bulky stone pot to the open space in front of the shelter. Lu Chen finally straightened his back, rubbing his sore shoulders vigorously, feeling as if his arms were no. He glanced gloomily at the girls still hiding their smiles behind their hands and said impatiently, "If you're done laughing, help me find some stones. A pot without a stove won't do. You can't just put this thing directly on the fire." The bottom of the stone pot was uneven. Placing it directly on the firewood would either tip it over or cause it to crack from uneven heating. They needed to build a simple stove with stones first. All right, well, stop laughing and go find you some stones." Gulnana drew out her words, then suddenly couldn't help but laugh again. "Lord Sea Turtle, ha!" Laughing heartily, she grabbed Yang Xiaomi's hand and turned toward the beach. Yang Xiaomi stumbled as she was pulled along and began to laugh too. Liu Xixi and Liu Xixi exchanged a glance, shook their heads, and chased after them with smiles. The laughter of the four girls mingled, some bright, some soft, some hearty, like a string of silver bells scattered by the sea breeze, tinkling and drifting among the rocks and waves. Lu Chen stood there watching their retreating figures, and finally the corners of his own mouth lifted slightly. Ding bond with Gulnana 1. Ding bond with Chen Dudu 1. Ding bond with Yang Xiaomi 1. Ding bond with Liu Xixi 1. Ding bond with Liu Xixi 1. To be honest, ever since the shipwreck stranded them on this deserted island, everyone had been strung tight these past few days. Searching for fresh water, building a shelter, grinding stone, axes, whittling bamboo knives. No one dared to stop, because stopping meant remembering the raging waves of the sinking ship and the companions who hadn't made it to shore. No one spoke of it, but when they gathered around the fire at night, silence always outweighed words. That heavy, suffocating weight pressed on their chests like an invisible stone. Yet with that burst of laughter, just now something seemed to loosen. Maybe no one knew what tomorrow would bring, but at least this moment of joy had seeped into their hearts. Lu Chen let out a long breath and looked up at the sky. The sea breeze brushed his face, carrying a salty tang, but at this moment it didn't feel so hard to bear. He bent down to straighten the stone pot and added a few dry branches to the fire. Sparks flew with a crackle, reflecting light in his eyes. Before long, Gulnana and the others returned carrying stones of various sizes, laughing and chattering as they piled them beside Lu Chen. He picked out a few flat ones and began stacking them in a circle. The girls crouched to watch for a while, then started helping. Chen Dudu set down her bamboo cup and silently brought over a few stones as well. Though the wound on her arm hadn't fully healed, and she couldn't exert much strength, the stones she chose were the most evenly shaped. Lu Chen, Chen Dudu suddenly spoke, her voice soft, but enough to quiet the other girls. She looked up at him, her gaze sincere and earnest. "I've said many words of thanks, but I still want to say it again. Thank you." Lu Chen was wedging the last support stone under the pot and paused at her words. Without looking up, he secured the stone, checked that the pot was steady, then dusted off his hands and stood. "I'm just like everyone else. I just want to survive." He waved his hand, his tone as flat, as if commenting on. Gulnana blinked, looking from Chen Dudu to Lu Chen, then laughed again. All right, all this thanking. You're making Lord Sea Turtle embarrassed." "Who's embarrassed?" Lu Chen retorted stubbornly, though the tips of his ears flushed red. Yang Xiaomi and Liu Xixi exchanged a glance and smiled with pressed lips. Liu Xixi, bold and carefree, slapped Lu Chen on the shoulder. "That's right, surviving is what matters most. Come on, let's see if this pot can cook some clam soup." Everyone bustled about setting the stone pot in place. They poured in collected fresh water and added the clams Yang Xiaomi had gathered, along with the small seafood brought back by Xiao Tian and Ini. The fire was rekindled, and soon the water in the stone pot began to bubble, steam rising and carrying the savory aroma of seafood through the air. As dusk fell, the sunset over the sea blazed into a brilliant orangerd. Everyone sat around the fire, each holding a bamboo bowl, carefully sipping the hot soup. The soup was very bland, without even salt, yet the searing warmth flowed from their throats to their stomachs, and everyone squinted in contentment. Waves lapped against the shore in a steady rhythm, the campfire crackled, and the soup in the stone pot still simmered gently. No one spoke, but each face bore a serene calm of survival against the odds. Lu Chen leaned against a log holding a cup of soup and looked up at the star-filled sky. On this deserted island, they had nothing, yet it seemed they lacked nothing. He thought perhaps this is the meaning of life. Not to live for oneself alone, but so that those around you, those laughter, that hot soup, those clumsy, warm, trivial moments, they were the entire answer. By the time Sister Wang pulled Lu Chen aside, darkness had fully descended with only the campfire's glow flickering across their faces. Lu Chen, there's something I need to tell you. Sister Wang lowered her voice, her gaze unconsciously darting toward the dense woods. When I went to fetch bamboo this afternoon, I vaguely saw a dark silhouette moving deep in the forest. It was quite large, definitely not a small bird or animal. I didn't dare make a fuss, afraid it would frighten the others. She paused, her brows slightly furrowed, a trace of barely perceptible worry in her tone. Do you think there might be some large beast in those woods? Lu Chen's heart sank. He was silent for a few seconds, his mind rapidly reviewing possible responses. Sister Wang, you did the right thing by keeping quiet. Lu Chen first gave her a reassuring look, his voice as steady as if discussing the most ordinary matter. Panic is harder to deal with than a wild beast. But we need to handle this, so we can't pretend we didn't see it. Sister Wang nodded, her eyes fixed on Lu Chen's face. Having spent so many years in the entertainment industry, she had seen all kinds of men. Those who bragged endlessly over drinks, those who were greasily inappropriate in private, and those who were dazzling on the surface but a mess behind the scenes. She had long grown accustomed to going it alone, thinking that when she got older, she would just find someone outside the circle to settle down with. But at this moment, watching the unflappable calm on Lu Chen's face and listening to his clear logical arrangements, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. It wasn't the fluttering excitement of a young girl, but rather a feeling of reassurance. As if with him, there the unknown dangers lurking deep in the forest didn't seem so frightening. Hey Race, what will do? Lu Chen, not noticing Sister Wang's slightly flushed cheeks, focused on the terrain around the camp. He'll use the leftover bamboo to make a simple fence. Nothing fancy, just enough for warning and a buffer. Then well arranged for watch duty tonight, 2 shifts. We have stone axes, bamboo knives, and spears now. If something happens, we're not completely defenseless. He paused, looking at Sister Wang, his tone earnest. Don't worry too much. There are many of us. As long as we don't panic, we can get through anything. Sister Wang took a deep breath, nodded, and the corners of her mouth lifted involuntarily. Ding. Sister Wang, bond value 5. Lu Chen was momentarily stunned and glanced at her subconsciously. Sister Wang took a deep breath, nodded, and the corners of her mouth lifted involuntarily. Ding. Sister Wang, bond value 5. Lu Chen, he didn't dwell on it, and turned back toward the fire. The campfire was burning brightly. The stone pot of clam soup was nearly empty, leaving only a few bits of broth and broken shells. Several girls were busy with their tasks. Gulnaz was whittling something with a bamboo sliver, while Lu Yifei and Chen Dudu sat side by side, whispering softly and occasionally letting out a light laugh. Seeing Lu Chen approach, everyone's gazes unconsciously converged on him. He didn't rush to speak. First, he sat down by the fire, added 2 dry branches, and waited for the sparks to crackle before clearing his throat. Everyone, I have something to say. His tone wasn't heavy, but the serious note made everyone stop what they were doing. Last night we all rested. I understand that. After a day at sea and a shipwreck, just making it alive to the beach was a blessing. Our bodies and minds needed recovery. Timely rest was necessary, no problem there. He paused, his gaze sweeping over each face. But this kind of completely unguarded rest is very dangerous in wilderness survival. We were lucky last night, no accidents. But luck won't always be with us. Starting tonight, we'll take turns on watch duty. Gulnaz blinked, about to say something, but was gently tugged on the sleeve by Chen Dudu beside her, so she obediently closed her mouth. No one objected. In fact, after spending the day together, from Lu Chen single-handedly producing fresh water to finding stone to make a pot to carrying a boulder weighing dozens of jin back from the reef forest, every step of the way this man's judgment and capability left nothing to be criticized. Well, I'll follow your lead. Yang Mi was the first to speak up, her tone crisp. The others nodded in agreement. Chen Dudu said nothing, just watched Lu Chen quietly, something new in her eyes. It wasn't admiration, but more like trust. A conclusion reached after rational judgment, that this person was worth relying on. Lu Yifei and Li Qin exchanged glances and also nodded. Seeing no objections, Lu Chen stood up, dusted off his hands, and said, All right, I'll use the bamboo to make a few simple defensive structures to enclose our shelter. It doesn't need to be complicated, but having it will at least give us some peace of mind when we sleep. What do you need us to? Lu Yifei asked, her voice soft but clear. Lu Chen thought for a moment and pointed to the bamboo piled beside the shelter. First, sharpen those thick bamboo stalks. Make them about 2 meters long with one end sharpened to a slant. Then find some vines, sturdy ones. Everyone immediately sprang into action. Chen Dudu picked up a stone knife and began sharpening the bamboo tips. The wound on her arm wasn't fully healed, so she couldn't exert much force, but her technique was surprisingly precise. Every cut was perfect, producing bamboo tips that were slender and even requiring almost no rework. You're pretty good at this. Lu Chen glanced over, a little surprised. Without looking up, Chen Dudu's lips curled slightly. I learned carpentry from my grandfather when I was a kid. It's pretty much the same principle. Lu Chen nodded, said no more, and turned to teach the others. Gulnaz and Yangmi were in charge of finding vines. They ran back and forth between the beach and the bushes several times, bringing back an armful of vines of varying thicknesses, which they sorted into bundles by the fire. Liu Yifei and Li Chen helped sharpen the bamboo. Though not as skilled as Chun Dudu, they were meticulous, and every bamboo tip was neatly and properly sharpened. Sister Wang, along with Ni and Zhao Maimai, sorted the sharpened bamboo by length for easy assembly. The group worked for over half an hour. Lu Chen crossed the thick, sharpened bamboo poles into and shape, tied them tightly at the intersection with vines, and lashed a horizontal bamboo pole at the bottom for support. Several sets of bamboo chevaux de frise were connected and placed around the perimeter of the shelter, leaving only a passage wide enough for one person. Done. Lu Chen straightened up, dusted the debris from his hands, and walked around the barrier, checking each knot to ensure it was secure before nodding with satisfaction. With this in place, anything coming in from outside will have to get past this first. We'll hear the commotion from inside and have plenty of time to react. Gulnaz leaned and touched the sharpened bamboo tip and couldn't help exclaiming, "Lu Chen, how is your brain wired? How did you come up with this?" "Just watched a lot of wilderness survival videos and improvised on the spot," Lu Chen replied casually. Chen Dudu stood to one side, her gaze shifting from the barrier to Lu Chen. Her lips moved slightly as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she just gave a gentle nod. What she wanted to say was, you didn't just watch them, you turned what you saw into reality when it truly mattered. That was the truly remarkable part. Lu Chen returned to the fire and began arranging the watch. 2 people per shift, 2 hours each. They'll take the first shift. Who's with me? They'll go with you. Sister Wang spoke almost instinctively, then was slightly startled herself. Lu Chen glanced at her and nodded. All right. Second shift, Liu Yifei and Tian Shiwei. Third shift, Yang Mi and Ni. Fourth shift, Zhao Maimai and Doraba. Dudu, Zhao, Silu, Li Chen, and Gulnaz, you 4 get a good rest tonight and try to recover quickly. Gulnaz looked a bit unhappy, her lips pressed together, but seeing the unmistakable firmness in Lu Chen's eyes, she obediently nodded. When you're on watch, don't just sit there. Keep an eye on the surroundings, especially the direction of the dense forest, Lu Chen added. Don't let the fire go out, keep the light going. If you hear any unusual sounds, wake everyone up immediately. Don't go investigate alone. Got it. Got it, everyone replied in unison. The night deepened. A cool sea breeze blew in from the ocean, making the campfire flicker wildly and scattering sparks. Lu Chen sat by the entrance of the shelter, his back against a thick bamboo pole, holding the stone axe, his gaze sweeping the area from time to time. If you hear any unusual sounds, wake everyone up immediately. Don't go investigate alone. Got it. Got it, everyone replied in unison. For a long Lu Chen, Sister Wang suddenly spoke. Moi, do you think we can get out of here alive? Lu Chen didn't answer immediately. He looked up at the sky. The stars filled the deep blue canopy like a scattering of crushed diamonds densely packed. Yes, he said, his tone calm, without deliberate conviction, just a natural statement, as if stating a fact. Sister Wang turned to look at his profile. The firelight traced a clear outline on his face. She said nothing more, just wrapped the leaf blanket tighter around herself, the corners of her mouth curving up unconsciously. Her heartbeat was a little faster than usual, but she told herself it was just a feeling of safety, nothing more. The waves crashed against the shore one after another, and the campfire crackled. In the distance, the dense forest was pitch black, revealing nothing. But Lu Chen knew something was there. Being afraid was useless. What was meant to come would come. All he could do was be prepared and wait. The next morning, the sun rose as usual from the horizon, its orangered glow blanketing the entire beach, turning every ripple of the waves into scattered gold. Lu Chen was awakened by the chirping of birds. He opened his eyes and found the fortifications intact, the bamboo cheval de frise standing silently in place with no visible signs of disturbance. The anticipated danger did not materialize. Lu Chen stood up, walked over to the cheval de frise, inspected it carefully, and then cast a glance toward the dense forest. The morning forest was shrouded in a thin layer of mist, so quiet that only the sounds of insects and birds could be heard, revealing nothing unusual. He pondered and figured there were 2 possibilities. First, the beasts feared fire, and the campfire had burned all night, keeping them at bay. Second, with so many people, the mingled scents deterred the beasts from taking risks. Regardless, he couldn't let his guard down. He then walked along the perimeter of the camp, examining the traces left from the previous night. No large animal footprints on the sandy ground, and no signs of the vines being pulled. Everything was normal. He breathed a slight sigh of relief, turned around, and walked back to the shelter. The women gradually woke up. Gulnara was the first to crawl out of the shelter, rubbing her eyes and yawning, her hair as messy as a bird's nest. Seeing that Lu Chen was already up, she was taken aback. You stood watch last night. Why don't you sleep a bit more? It's a habit. Lu Chen replied, casually crouching by the campfire to add firewood. The others also emerged one after another. Sister Wang simply washed her face and began preparing breakfast. Chen Dudu assisted on the side washing fruits and handling the remaining seafood. The fresh water was distilled yesterday using the tarpaulin and solar energy, and only a little remained, just enough for one breakfast. Breakfast was the same as before, wild fruits paired with seafood soup. There was no helping it, the women had too few ways to obtain food. The clams and snails gathered yesterday were almost gone, and if no new food source was found today, they might go hungry for dinner. Lu Chen took a sip of the soup from his bamboo bowl and frowned slightly. The soup had no salt, a strong fishy smell, and tasted quite bland. But he said nothing, finished it in one gulp, set the bowl down, and began planning the day's tasks. The most pressing issues were food and injuries. As for food stranded on the island, the most stable source was the sea. If they could consistently catch fish from the sea, they wouldn't have to rely on luck to pick up shells every day. Regarding injuries, Chun Dudu, Zhao Silu, and Gulnara had foot injuries, and Li Xian had a long wound on her arm. If not properly treated, infection could become a serious problem. Especially Li Xin's wound, deep and long, was very prone to worsening in the humid seaside environment. Lu Chen weighed the options in his mind and made a decision. He closed his eyes, his consciousness sinking into the system interface, and began browsing the skill shop. Basic fishing skill required 50 bond points. Basic Chinese medicine required 50 bond points. He gritted his teeth and exchanged them. A warm current flowed through his brain, as if something gently spread within his neural pathways. Lu Chen felt a wealth of knowledge flooding his mind. The habits and migration patterns of various fish, the technique for weaving fish traps from bamboo, the optimal timing for setting nets based on tides. Followed by the Chinese medicine part, the essentials of observation, listening, questioning, and pulse taking, the appearance, growth, environment, and uses of dozens of common herbs, the steps for treating external injuries, and folk remedies for stopping bleeding and reducing inflammation, all clearly imprinted in his mind. He shook his head to adjust to the slightly swollen sensation, then opened his eyes. Sister Wang was cleaning the bamboo bowls and noticed Lu Chen had his eyes closed for a moment. She asked curiously, "What's wrong? Didn't sleep well?" "Nothing, just thinking." Lu Chen stood up, walked to the pile of bamboo materials, and began selecting sturdy. "What are you making?" Chen Dudu approached with her bowl, her gaze falling on the bamboo in his hands. "Fish." Lu Chen crouched down, shaving bamboo strips as he explained. "Weave a few traps and put them in the sea. Fish go in, but can't get out. That way we don't have to catch them every day, just collect them periodically. It's stable and saves effort." Chen Dudu's eyes lit up slightly, and she moved closer to watch his technique. Lu Chen's hands were steady, the bamboo strips he shaved were uniform in width, and when weaving he crossed and pressed them together, each step clean and efficient. In less than half an hour, a funnel-shaped fish trap took shape, wide at the entrance and narrow at the exit, making it difficult for fish to turn around once inside. This structure. Chen Dudu watched intently, unable to resist reaching out to touch the barbed design at the trap's mouth. Adding this at the entrance. Fish enter without much effort, but trying to get out gets them caught by the bamboo spikes. Very clever. Learned it from a book. Lu Chen didn't look up, continuing to weave the second one. Chen Dudu glanced at him, the corner of her mouth twitching slightly, but she didn't press further. She noticed a unique aura about Lu Chen. He never explained much, but every step he took hit the mark. He didn't waste energy or drag things out. Such a person might not be the smartest, but he was certainly the most reliable. Ding Chen Dudu bond points too. The 3 fish traps were soon finished. Lu Chen checked the firmness of each joint and wrapped vines around the key points multiple times to ensure they wouldn't be scattered by the seawater. He stacked the traps together and picked up the fish spear leaning against the shelter. Though crude, it was more than enough for small fish in the shallows. "Who's coming with me to set the traps?" he asked casually. As soon as the words left his mouth, a hand shot up high. "Me." Zhao Maimei bounced out from the group, her little hand raised high, eyes sparkling like an eager student vying to answer the teacher's question. Today she had tied her long hair into a ponytail, revealing a smooth forehead and a pair of round, bright eyes, making her look full of energy. The others were amused by her eagerness. Gulnara covered her mouth and laughed. "Maimei, slow down. No one's competing with you. I just want to go." Zhao Maimei lowered her hand a bit sheepishly, but the anticipation on her face didn't diminish. Lu Chen looked at her and nodded. "All right, follow me." Zhao Maimei happily trotted over, took 2 fish traps into her arms, and bounced along behind Lu Chen toward the seaside. The sand on the beach glowed golden in the morning light. The sea breeze was gentle, and the waves lightly lapped at the shoreline. Lu Chen walked along the coast for a while, and stopped at a small cove surrounded by rocks. The seawater here was calm, of moderate depth, with aquatic plants and gravel at the bottom, a favorite hiding spot for fish. In places like this, the current is slow, so fish won't be easily swept away once they enter. As he spoke, Lu Chen lowered the fish traps, used stones to weigh down the bottoms, and secured them to the rocks with vines to prevent them from being carried off by the tide. Zhao Maimei crouched nearby, her big eyes shimmering with curiosity. Can we catch fish? If we're lucky, we will. Lu Chen smiled as he set the last trap. He stood up, took the fish spear from his back, found a spot where the water reached his thighs, and stood still, his gaze fixed on the water's surface. The shallow water was crystal clear. A school of small fish darted among the water plants. Occasionally, a larger one swam by in the distance. Lu Chen stood motionless like a wooden stake planted on the seabed. His mind was flooded with the experience from the basic fishing skill. Not theoretical knowledge, but an almost instinctive judgment, the fish's swimming speed, the visual shift caused by light refraction through water, the resistance as the spear pierced the water. All factors were integrated within seconds into a precise moment to strike. A small fish the size of a palm swam past in front of him. Lu Chen flicked his wrist, and the spear shot into the water like an arrow, piercing the fish with precision. He lifted the spear, the fish still thrashing its tail on the tip. Wow, brother Lu Chen is amazing. Zhao Maimei clapped her little hands joyfully on the shore, hopping and skipping, her silvery laughter scattering in the sea breeze. She was so excited that she stepped on a slippery cobblestone, her body lurching abruptly. Ah! With a splash, Zhao Maimei tumbled headfirst into the water. The water was actually not deep, only reaching her waist, but the trauma from the tsunami had amplified her fear of the sea to its peak. Her mind went blank, completely forgetting she could stand up, and she only flailed desperately, her hands slapping the water, chaotically splashing a great spray. Gurgle. Brother Lu Chen. Help. Cough. Her voice was sharp and urgent, tinged. Lu Chen almost reflexively dropped the harpoon, strode through the seawater, and scooped Zhao Maimei up from the water. His arm encircled her waist, lifting her entirely, like pulling a drowning cat from the water. After emerging from the water, Zhao Maimei clung to Lu Chen in terror. She wrapped her arms tightly around his neck, pressing her entire body against his, leaving no gap. Her whole body trembled, her teeth chattering softly as she gasped for breath, her face buried in the hollow of his shoulder, not daring to lift it. Lu Chen did not rush to push her away. With his free hand, he gently patted Zhao Maimei's back, one stroke after another, the rhythm steady. He said nothing, knowing that words were useless now. What she needed was a sense of security, not comforting phrases. It's all right. The water is shallow, standing up, it only reaches the waist. After about half a minute, Lu Chen finally spoke, his voice low and unhurried. See, you can touch the bottom with your feet. You were just startled, not really drowning. Zhao Maimei's body gradually stopped shaking. She slowly lifted her head, her eyes reddened with water droplets still clinging to her lashes. She looked down. The seawater indeed only reached her upper thighs, her feet firmly planted on the sand. She pursed her lips in embarrassment. I forgot the water was shallow. Her voice was small with a hint of nasality. It's normal. After going through something like that, anyone would be afraid. Lu Chen released his hold, stepping back to create distance. Only then did Zhao Maimei realize how tightly she had been holding him. Her cheeks flushed instantly as she lowered her head, unable to meet Lu Chen's eyes, her hands unconsciously clutching at her skirt. But the dress was already soaked through with seawater, the wet fabric slipping through her fingers, offering nothing to grasp. The fabric of her gown was thin to begin with, and once drenched by seawater, it clung tightly to her body, outlining the slender waist and emerging contours of the young girl. Feeling the sea breeze, a chill ran through her, and she realized her clothes were almost translucent. Zhao Maimei's face reddened further as she instinctively crossed her arms over her chest. Lu Chen had already turned around. He didn't deliberately avoid anything, just naturally pivoted, bent down to pick up the discarded harpoon, and said in his usual tone, "Go sit up there first and wring out your skirt. They'll catch a few more fish. Oh, we'll have an extra meal at noon." Zhao Maimei stared at his back, momentarily stunned. She had seen many boys in such situations show embarrassment or deliberately look away, but Lu Chen was different. His turning was not an escape, but a graceful act of giving each other space. He didn't even add a superfluous, "don't catch a cold," because saying that would only make the atmosphere more awkward. Suddenly, she felt a warmth in her heart. It wasn't the heat of a racing pulse, but a sense of peace from being thoughtfully cared for. It was as if no matter what happened, this person would handle it in the most appropriate way, never making her feel embarrassed. Ding. Zhao Maimei Bond Value 3. With a red face, Zhao Maimei walked onto the beach, sat on a flat rock, and wrung out her skirt, water droplets pattering onto the sand. She didn't urge Lu Chen to return, nor did she speak. She just sat quietly watching him spear fish in the sea. The sunlight cast a golden rim around his silhouette. He stood in knee-deep water, bent at the waist, his gaze fixed intently on the surface, the harpoon plunging into the water again and again. Each time he lifted it, another fish was impaled on the tip. Zhao Maimei rested her chin on her hand, watching an unconscious smile curving her lips. She recalled what Chen Dudu had told her last night. The more you get to know Lu Chen, the more reliable you find him. Not the kind of reliability that comes from sweet talk, but the kind that stands in front when the sky falls. She hadn't fully understood then, but now she seemed to grasp it a little. Lu Chen caught 2 more fish, one of them as long as an arm, its silvery scales glistening in the sunlight. He weighed it in his hand with satisfaction, then turned and walked back to the shore. That's enough, let's head back. Zhao Maimei nodded, stood up, and followed behind him. She glanced down at her soaked dress, then at Lu Chen's back. His clothes were also largely wet, but he seemed utterly unconcerned, his strides long and steady. She quickened her pace to match his rhythm. When they returned to the camp, Gulanana was the first to spot the fish in their hands, her eyes widening. Oh my, so many fish. Lu Chen caught them. Zhao Maimei chimed in, a hint of unconscious pride in her voice. He stood in the water, 1 spear, 1 fish. So accurate. Chen Dudu came over to inspect the catch, her gaze falling on Lu Chen. She said nothing, only nodded slightly. Liu Xixi pursed her lips in a smile and turned to find bamboo skewers for the fish. Yang Xiaomi crouched down to count the fish, then looked up at Lu Chen. Enough for 2 meals for all of us. At least the food problem is temporarily solved. Lu Chen leaned the harpoon against a post, shook the water off his hands, and looked at Sister Wang. Sister Wang, please clean the fish. We'll make fish soup for lunch. I'm going to look for medicinal herbs. There should be some anti-inflammatory and hemostatic plants nearby. Everyone's injuries can't wait any longer. You know about herbs, eh? Sister Wang was surprised. A little, Lu Chen replied without elaboration. He pulled a still-smoking charcoal stick from the fire and sketched the shapes of a few herbs on a bamboo slip, handing it to Chen Dudu. Memorize these just in case I get separated. You can find them yourselves. These 3 are the most common. This one grows in rock crevices, anti-inflammatory. This one has white fuzz on the back of its leaves, hemostatic. This one, with small yellow flowers when mashed and applied to wounds, prevents suppuration. Chen Dudu took the bamboo slip, examined it carefully, and nodded solemnly. Lu Chen picked up a bamboo knife and tucked it at his waist, then turned toward the bushes outside the camp. After a few steps, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw Zhao Maimei following again. Your clothes are still wet. Why did you come out? Lu Chen asked, somewhat helpless. I'm afraid you'll encounter danger alone, Zhao Maimei said matter-of-factly, though the tips of her ears reddened. And I promise I won't fall into the water again. Lu Chen glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. In the end, he said nothing and continued walking forward. Zhao Maimei hurried to catch up, walking shoulder to shoulder with him in the morning light. The sea breeze blew her hair into the air, and her mood, like the sea, was clear and bright. Back at the camp, Chen Dudu studied the herb sketches on the bamboo slip once more, then lifted her gaze to the receding figures of Lu Chen and Zhao Maimei, letting out a soft sigh. She recalled the night watch when Lu Chen sat by the fire without a word, just gazing silently toward the dense forest like a wall. A silent, unyielding wall. Ding Chen, Dudu bond value 1. Gulanana threaded fish by the fire, humming an unknown tune, occasionally glancing in the direction Lu Chen had gone, smiling and continuing her work. Ding Gulanana bond value 1. No one said anything deliberately, but everyone knew in their hearts. On this barren island with nothing, Lu Chen was slowly, piece by piece, becoming everyone's pillar. Not because he was exceptionally powerful, but because he always did what needed to be done. No complaints, no boasting, no shirking. That was more reassuring than any sweet words. Lu Chen led Zhao Maimei along the edge of the dense forest, searching as they went. The soft humus beneath their feet, mixed with fallen leaves and broken twigs, muffled their steps into silence. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting shifting patches of light on the forest floor. He slowed his pace, his gaze sweeping back and forth between the underbrush and the crevices among the rocks. The knowledge granted by his basic Chinese medicine training unfurled in his mind, like an open atlas, vividly detailing the form, color, and scent of every herb. He soon made a discovery. On the shaded side of an ancient banyan tree, several low-growing herbs caught his eye. Found it. Lu Chen crouched down, gently brushing aside the weeds with his fingers. The plant had a creeping stem, round or kidney-shaped leaves with blunt teeth along the edges, and a smooth, glossy surface that felt cool to the touch. Its slender petioles emerged from the root, spreading out like tiny umbrellas. This is called Centella asiatica. As he spoke, Lu Chen carefully dug around the roots with a bamboo knife, taking care not to damage them. You might know it as Gota cola or Indian pennywort. See the shape of the leaves. Don't they look like a chipped bowl? Zhao Maimei also crouched down, tilting her head for a closer look, then nodded. They really do. Centella asiatica has very practical uses. It clears heat and toxins, reduces swelling and inflammation, and promotes wound healing. Lu Chen shook the dirt off the dug-up plants and placed them into the large bamboo tube Zhao Maimei was holding. For the long gash on Li Xin's arm and the scrapes and sprains on your feet, crushing this into a paste for external application can prevent pus and speed up recovery. If you boil it and drink the water, it also helps with internal bruising. Zhao Maimei blinked. How do you even know all this? I read some herbal medicine books before and remembered them. Lu Chen didn't explain further, continuing to dig up a few more plants, carefully selecting those with intact roots. This herb prefers cool, damp places. under trees by ditches and in rock crevices are the most common spots. If you see it later, just remember the leaf shape so you don't pick the wrong one. Zhao Maimai gave a serious, carefully arranging each plant. Just as Lu Chen was about to stand up, his gaze was suddenly drawn to a bush not far away. It grew behind a waist-high rock with almost no other weeds around it, as if something had pushed them aside. The bush itself was not tall, reaching about Lu Chen's waist, with grayish-brown branches and pinnate compound leaves edged with fine serrations. The most striking feature was the clusters of small fruits hanging from the branches, each about the size of a soybean, their colors shifting from greenish to pale yellow. A few were fully ripe, displaying a nearly translucent orangerd that gleamed like amber beads in the sunlight. Lu Chen's heart suddenly raced. Holding his breath, he slowly rose and walked toward the bush. Sensing his change in demeanor, Zhao Maimai stayed silent, following softly behind. When he reached it, Lu Chen didn't reach out immediately. Instead, he circled the bush, carefully observing every detail: the shape and arrangement of the leaves, whether the branches had tiny thorns, the color and size of the fruit, and the faint, bitter medicinal aroma. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a thin bamboo stick, and gently scraped off a small piece of bark, bringing it to his nose to sniff. Knowledge surged through his mind, eventually coalescing into a single plant, Shainerqing. Not just similar, it was it. Lu Chen took a deep breath, his expression shifting from gravity to barely contained joy. Maimai, our luck has come. His voice was low, but a slight lift at the end betrayed his excitement. This is no ordinary herb. It's called Shainerqing, and every part of it is valuable. Zhao Maimai leaned in, her big eyes full of curiosity. What's it used for? First, the leaves. Lu Chen gently plucked a whole pinnate leaf, holding it in his palm for her to see. Dried and steeped in hot water, Shainerqing leaves are remarkably effective for colds, fevers, and sore throats. In the wild, if you get an infection without any medicine, this could save your life. He placed the leaf in the basket and carefully picked a few orangerd fruits, putting them in Zhao Maimai's hand. The fruit holds the most concentrated medicinal properties. Eaten raw, it refreshes the mind and relieves fatigue. Crushed and applied externally, it neutralizes venom from insect bites and mild snake bites. But if taken in large quantities, it needs to be processed before internal use, as eating too much raw can have side effects. Zhao Maimai held the fruit up to her eyes. The sunlight pierced its translucent skin, revealing the clear outline of the seed inside, like a tiny star wrapped in amber. The most valuable part is the root. Lu Chen pointed at the thick roots exposed at the base of the bush, his tone turning serious. Shainerqing's rhizome needs to grow for over 3 years to achieve its best medicinal effect. Look at this root. The bark is yellowish-brown, dense with horizontal lines, and the cross-section should be pale yellow. A Shainerqing of this age, if it were outside. Well, on this island, it's priceless. He didn't finish the sentence. Zhao Maimai vaguely understood what he meant, but didn't press further. Lu Chen pulled out his bamboo knife from his waist and began to dig carefully. First, he used the knife tip to draw a circle around the bush, clearing away the surface litter and small stones. Then he peeled away the soil layer by layer from the outside and trying not to damage the main root. The plant's root system was deep, with some fibrous roots wedged into rock crevices. He had to set down the bamboo knife and use his fingers to pry them out bit by bit. Zhao Maimai crouched beside him, helping by pushing the dug-up soil aside and gently placing the roots Lu Chen unearthed into the large bamboo tube, careful not to break them. Shainerqing is very particular about its growing environment. Lu Chen spoke as he dug, as if teaching her or talking to himself. It doesn't like direct sunlight, but it can't be in complete shade either. The soil needs to drain well with no waterlogging. It's best to have rocks around for shelter, but not too dense. So you could walk through the forest all day and not find a single one. Finding it at the edge of the dense forest today is truly a stroke of great luck. Zhao Maimai nodded thoughtfully, then suddenly asked, "Brother Lu Chen, were you looking for this from the very beginning?" Lu Chen paused in his work for a moment, not lifting his head, but the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. You could say that. Everyone's injuries can't heal with just rest. Especially Li Xin's wound. In the humid seaside environment, if left untreated, it could become infected and fester in just 2 or 3 days. Without antibiotics, then it would be very troublesome. Zhao Maimai fell silent, watching the fine sweat on Lu Chen's forehead, a complex feeling stirring within her. He didn't just say, "He'll figure something out." Casually, he worked silently. Finding herbs, weaving fish traps, building stoves, constructing barricades. He did everything without fanfare, yet each task addressed the most critical need. Ding Zhao Maimai's bond value too. After about a quarter of an hour, Lu Chen finally unearthed the entire root system of the Shainerqing intact. The main root was as thick as a little finger, nearly 20 centimeters long, with dense fibrous roots spreading out like a tuft of grayish-brown beard. He gently shook the dirt off the rhizome, wrapped it in broad leaves, and stored it separately from the other herbs. That should be enough. Lu Chen stood up, flexing his numb knees and brushing the mud off his hands. The Centella Asiatica will last us 2 or 3 days. Keep this Shainerqing for now. Back at camp, well, slice the root to dry, store the fruits separately, and use the leaves fresh. Well, treat Li Xin's wound with the Centella Asiatica today. If there's any sign of inflammation later, well, use the Shainerqing. Zhao Maimai stood up holding the bamboo basket now packed full. Her eyes sparkled as if they held 2 little suns. The two of them walked back along the path they had come. Lu Chen led the way using his bamboo knife to push aside the obstructing branches, while Zhao Maimai followed behind with light, brisk steps. When they reached the edge of the dense forest, Lu Chen suddenly stopped. Zhao Maimai nearly bumped into his back, quickly halting her steps and whispering, "What's wrong?" Lu Chen remained silent, his gaze fixed on the thicket ahead. Several branches on the bush were clearly snapped, the breaks fresh, revealing stark white splinters. The way the branches were broken didn't look like damage from the wind. The wind wouldn't have twisted them at such an angle. On the ground there were several vague impressions not resembling human footprints, but more like the hollows left by some animal, yet much larger than the marks of any hare or badger Lu Chen had seen before. A slight chill crept up his spine. "Maimai, stay close to me, and don't make a sound." Lu Chen's voice was very low, his speech a bit faster than usual. Zhao Maimai immediately tensed up, holding the basket in one hand, while the other instinctively grabbed the hem of Lu Chen's clothes. Her eyes were wide open, scanning the surrounding bushes, her lips pressed tightly together. Lu Chen slowly crouched down, pulling the bamboo knife from his waist and gripping it firmly. His gaze followed the trail of marks on the ground, discovering that the impressions extended from deep within the forest, ran along the edge of the thicket for a stretch, then turned a corner, disappearing into the denser bushes beyond. It wasn't a large beast, at least not on the scale of a bear. The size and depth of the marks suggested the animal's weight wouldn't exceed 60 or 70 kilograms. But before this inexperienced group, a wild animal of 60 or 70 kilograms was still enough to pose a lethal threat. Lu Chen quickly ran through a few possibilities in his mind. A wild dog. Not quite. The claw marks of a wild dog would be more distinct. Some kind of primate. There were indeed monkeys on the nearby islands, but they usually didn't leave marks this large. It could also be some kind of large rodent, or he dared not rule out the worst-case scenario. He didn't continue to pursue the trail, nor did he rush back to the camp in a panic. The most urgent thing now wasn't to figure out what it was, but to ensure everyone knew about the danger without causing. "Let's go back first." Lu Chen stood up, sheathed the bamboo knife at his waist, and his voice returned to a steady calm. "Give me the bamboo tube." Zhao Maimai obediently handed over the bamboo tube. With both hands now free, she subconsciously grabbed Lu Chen's arm. He didn't pull away or say anything, simply quickened his pace. When the two returned to the camp, Sister Wang was using a stone knife to scale fish, while Chen Dudu was helping boil water nearby. Seeing Lu Chen and Zhao Maimai back with a basket full of herbs, Gulanana was the first to rush over. "Wow, you dug up so many. What kind of plant is this?" She reached out to touch the leaves of the Centella Asiatica. "Don't touch that." Lu Chen set the basket aside, his tone heavier than usual, making everyone sense something was amiss. Chen Dudu looked up at him, her eyes filled with inquiry. Liu Xixi, who was polishing a bamboo cup, also stopped her movements. Yang Xiaomi poked her head out of the shelter, and upon seeing Lu Chen's expression, her brow furrowed slightly. Lu Chen didn't speak immediately. First, he sorted the herbs by type, spreading the Centella Asiatica in a shady spot to dry, and wrapping the Shainerqing in leaves to store in a dark place. "There are 2 pieces of news." He spoke, his tone unhurried, but everyone put down their tasks and gathered around. "One is good news, the other not so good. Which one do you want to hear first?" "The good news," said Gulanana. "The good news is I found 2 very useful herbs. Centella Asiatica can treat all our internal injuries and inflammation, and Shainerqing is more potent, serving as an emergency anti-inflammatory and antidote. We can start treating everyone's injuries in the next few days." The expressions of the women relaxed a bit. Li Xixi instinctively glanced down at the long wound on her arm. Although there were no signs of infection, yet the edges were beginning to redden, and it was indeed worrisome without treatment. "And the bad news?" Chen Dudu asked. Lu Chen paused for 2 seconds, then recounted what he had discovered at the edge of the dense forest: the broken branches and the unidentified animal tracks. He didn't exaggerate or downplay it, simply describing the marks he saw and his preliminary assessment. "It's not necessarily a large beast, but it's definitely not a small animal. A wild animal of that size, if startled or defending its food, is capable of harming us." The air fell silent for a few seconds. Gulanana instinctively moved closer to the fire. Yang Xiaomi's brow furrowed even tighter. Liu Xixi set her bamboo cup aside, her gaze shifting to the bamboo barricades at the camp's perimeter, as if reassessing the reliability of those defenses. Sister Wang put down the stone knife, wiped her hands, and looked at Lu Chen. "What do you plan to do?" Lu Chen stood up from beside the fire, walked to the edge of the camp, and inspected the bamboo barricades they had built the night before. The sharpened bamboo poles remained firmly in place with no looseness at the vine bindings. He then walked to the entrance, crouched down to examine the ground. There were no new large footprints. No need to add more defenses, what we have is enough. Lu Chen walked back and sat down by the fire. But one thing must change. From now on, no one is to leave the camp alone. Going to the beach, the forest edge for water, or to gather firewood. At least 2 people must go together, and they must carry a weapon. If anyone needs to explore deep into the forest, I have to accompany them. Well, follow your lead. Sister Wang was the first to agree. The others nodded in turn. Zhao Maimei had been standing nearby without speaking, but her hand never left Lu Chen's arm. Only after hearing the last part did she slowly let go, crouching down to help Sister Wang clean the fish. Chen Dudu looked at Lu Chen, then toward the direction of the dense forest. Her lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she simply nodded gently. Ding Chen Dudu bond value 2. Ding Lu Xixi bond value 1. Ding Yang Xiaomi bond value. Ding Chen Dudu's bond level raised to close bond value reward 10 points. Lu Chen leaned against a post and closed his eyes for a moment. He was thinking about the direction of the tracks. They weren't heading toward the camp, but moving parallel to the edge of the dense forest. This meant the animal either hadn't discovered them yet or wasn't interested in them for now. But regardless of the situation, they needed to be prepared. He opened his eyes and glanced at the clouds on the horizon. The clouds weren't thick and the sunlight was still strong. There shouldn't be a storm today. There was still enough time. Sister Wang started cooking the fish soup. After the meal, ill treat everyone's wounds. He stood up, picked up the bamboo knife, walked over to the pile of bamboo, and began sharpening new bamboo spears, at least one for each person. The women each busied themselves with their tasks. The atmosphere in the camp was quieter than the day before, but it also held something else. Not fear, but a sense of being taken seriously, a feeling of security. Because someone was watching over them, they only needed to focus on their own tasks. The sea breeze blew through the camp, and the campfire crackled. Deep within the dense forest, something lay quietly in the shadows like a mine yet to be triggered. But for now, this small camp was still safe. The afternoon sunlight slanted into the camp, stretching everyone's shadows long across the ground. The sea breeze, carrying a salty tang, blew in from the ocean, slipping through the gaps in the bamboo barricades, brushing over the remnants of ash on the fire pit, and lifting a few faint wisps of smoke. Lu Chen spread the collected Centella Asiatica on a flat stone slab. He crouched down and began to pick through them one by one. With his fingers, he pinched off the yellowed old leaves and the muddy roots, leaving only the tender emerald green leaves and young stems. He placed them in a bamboo basket, carried it to a pool of fresh water diverted by bamboo pipes beside the camp, and washed them meticulously 3 times. Water droplets rolled across the leaves like transparent dewdrops, making the heart-shaped leaves glisten with oil. Sister Wang was tidying up the bowls and chopsticks nearby, occasionally glancing up at him. She noticed that when Lu Chen washed the herbs, he didn't even neglect the fuzz on the back of the leaves, gently rubbing each one with his fingertips. This meticulousness didn't seem like a makeshift effort on a deserted island, but rather the careful preparation of some precious medicinal ingredient. Who's first? Lu Chen carried the washed Centella Asiatica back to the fire. He found a smooth flat stone to use as a mortar, then sharpened the back of a bamboo knife on a rock to ensure there were no burrs. A few of the girls exchanged glances, all looking a bit shy. Liu Xixi was the first to stand up. She was never one to be coy, and besides, the wound on her arm was burning with a fiery pain. The edges had been red since yesterday, and if left untreated, it would surely become a real problem. She strode over to Lu Chen and extended her right arm, without any fuss. Her sleeve was already rolled up past her elbow, revealing the wound that ran from her wrist all the way to the middle of her forearm. The wound wasn't deep, but it was long, like a dark red centipede clinging to her fair skin. The edges were a bit red, but there were no signs of pus. A few scabs had been accidentally rubbed off, revealing the tender pink new flesh beneath. Lu Chen didn't rush. He first washed his own hands in clean water, then dried them with his shirt before gently holding Li Xin's wrist. His fingertips rested on her pulse point. Not to actually take her pulse, but to use this gentle touch to help her. Li Xin's wrist was very slender. His 3 fingers could encircle it entirely. Beneath the skin, her pulse beat, faintly one beat, after another, slightly faster than normal, probably from the pain. Let me clean the area around the wound first. Lu Chen's voice was neither loud nor soft, carrying a calming steadiness. He picked up a cloth strip torn from his shirt, dipped it in water, and starting from about 2 inches above the wound, followed the direction of the muscle fibers, wiping down bit by bit. His movements were very gentle, as if afraid to disturb something, yet every inch of skin was cleaned. The clean water seeped into the crevices at the edges of the wound. Li Xin's fingertips curled slightly, but she bit her lip and remained silent. Sensing her reaction, Lu Chen lightened his touch even more. He placed the Centella Asiatica leaves on the stone slab, gripped the bamboo knife in his right hand, and used the back of the blade to pound them rhythmically. A green juice gradually seeped out, and the air filled with a crisp, refreshing herbal fragrance. It wasn't as sweet as a floral scent, but it felt clean and cool to the senses. He pounded patiently without haste until the leaves were completely crushed into a paste, the juice so abundant it was almost overflowing before he stopped. "It will be a little cold." He murmured a warning, then used a bamboo sliver to scoop up the medicinal paste and spread it evenly over the wound. The moment the paste touched her skin, Liu Xixi let out a soft hiss. It wasn't pain, but the coolness seeping into the wound like a small, icy snake slithering along her bones, sending a tingling, numbing sensation. Lu Chen's hands were very steady. His fingertips pressed the paste against the edges of the wound, spreading it gently, covering every area thickly, leaving no gaps. His fingers occasionally brushed against her unbroken skin, the sensation of warmth feeling especially distinct against the coolness. Liu Xixi looked down at him. Lu Chen was half-crouched in front of her, his forehead almost touching her arm. His brows were slightly furrowed, his gaze completely focused on the wound, as if he were completing an extremely important task. He had a high nose bridge, and the lines of his profile were particularly distinct in the afternoon light. His jaw was set slightly, and his lips were pressed into a thin line. Suddenly, she felt a corner of her heart gently bumped by something. It wasn't a tumultuous, passionate flutter, but a quiet warmth of being held and cared for in someone's hands. All done. Lu Chen wrapped the medicated wound with a clean broad leaf, then found a thin vine, winding it around and around to secure it. After wrapping, he tied a knot in the vine. The tightness was just right. Not too constricting, yet not loose. Liu Xixi moved her arm. The area wrapped in the leaf felt cool, and the original burning, fiery sensation had mostly subsided. She watched Lu Chen's profile as he cleaned up the medicinal paste, opened her mouth as if to say something, but in the end she only softly uttered, "Thank you." Ding. Liu Xixi bond value 2. Lu Chen waved his hand, signaling her to go rest on the side. Then he looked up at the others. Next, Chen Dudu had been sitting on a nearby log, quietly watching Lu Chen treat Li Xin's wound. She noticed that every one of Lu Chen's movements was careful, even the wetness of the cloth strip was perfectly controlled. Too wet and water would run into the wound, too dry, and it wouldn't clean properly. Such attention to detail was impossible without genuine care. She stood up and limped over. Chen Dudu's injuries were more complicated than the others. On her arm were several scratches of varying depths, already covered with a thin layer of scabs. The skin around them was still somewhat swollen. But the bigger problem was her left foot. The ankle was even more swollen than Zhao Silas. The entire ankle bone was bulging, the skin stretched taut and shiny with a faint hint of purplish-blue bruising visible beneath. When Lu Chen saw her walking posture, his brow immediately furrowed. He didn't bother asking useless questions like, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Instead, he directly pulled over a thick log for her to sit on, then crouched before her. Cradling her heel with one hand and grasping her calf with the other, he slowly lifted her left foot and placed it on his own knee. Chen Dudu had small feet fitting size 36 shoes. Her ankle was exceptionally slender. Lu Chen could encase the entire joint with one hand. He first circled the thinnest part of her ankle with his thumb and index finger, gently lifting it to feel the joint's range of motion. Then he shifted to the swollen area, pressing down bit by bit with his fingertips from the outer malleolus to the inner malleolus, from the top of the foot to the Achilles tendon, examining every spot carefully. His technique was professional, the pressure starting light and gradually increasing. It didn't cause her sudden sharp pain, yet allowed him to accurately determine if any bones were damaged. Chen Dudu bit her lip, not making a sound, but her toes involuntarily curled, betraying her tension. "Does it hurt here?" Lu Chen pressed on a spot below the outer malleolus. Chen Dudu gave a soft her voice subdued. "And here?" He pressed on a spot in front of the inner malleolus. "A little." Lu Chen released her foot gently, setting it down, and nodded. "The bone is fine, but the ligament is strained. It's more severe than a simple sprain. It needs proper rest, or it could cause problems with walking later on." After saying this, he placed her foot back on his knee and began the treatment. He cleaned the cloth strip, then started from her toes, wiping each one individually, followed by the top of her foot, the sole, the ankle, and the calf. His movements were slow, as if polishing a fragile piece of porcelain. Chen Dudu's foot was very fair, her toes rounded, her nails neatly trimmed. The veins on the top of her foot were faintly visible beneath the thin skin. Lu Chen's gaze was focused and calm, with no ulterior meaning. But the feeling of being treated with such care made Chen Dudu's face flush red, starting from her earlobes and spreading gradually. After cleaning, Lu Chen prepared another batch of Centella asiatica paste. This time he added a few leaves of another anti-inflammatory herb he had gathered earlier, pounding it until it was much finer and more pulpy than what he had used for Liu Xixi, almost forming a puree. Using a bamboo sliver, he applied a thick layer of the paste onto the swollen ankle, spreading it from above the ankle bone down to the top of the foot, nearly a centimeter thick. After applying it, he didn't rush to bandage it. Instead, he used his palm to gently and slowly massage the area for a while. His palm was large, covering almost the entire ankle. The warmth of his palm along with the massaging pressure that moved from light to firm and back to light traced circles following the direction of the muscles and ligaments. Chen Dudu felt the alternating coolness and warmth penetrate deep into her skin. The swollen area truly didn't feel as tight anymore. She lowered her eyes, not daring to look at him, the blush on her cheeks having already spread to her neck.